In a classroom, a young man begins to panic, questioning whether he really went back to before the college entrance exams. He's in the Xia Kingdom, at Ancheng's #1 high school, class 7 of the 3rd year. Suddenly, he jumps to his feet shouting, drawing everyone's attention. Frantic, he wonders what kind of horror story he's living in. If he was going to reincarnate, it could have at least been after the exams. Since ancient times, humanity on the Blue Star has suffered from a catastrophe known as the Secret World Invasion. These secret realms are connected to other worlds and are filled with terrifying monsters that sometimes use portals to invade the human world. The most powerful creatures can destroy entire nations and threaten all of humanity. To fight them, humans developed a system of beast genes that allows users to awaken monster models and genetic talents. These warriors are the only ones capable of saving mankind. Over time, they became far more respected than ordinary people, and the entire Blue Star entered an era where martial strength means everything and everything else is considered inferior. Only martial cultivators can reach the top. Suddenly, systems begin to appear in the minds of several young people, echoing a message. World transfer complete. Host body, Yihi, implanting memories. The protagonist lowers his head, wondering if his new name really is Yihi, just a simple high school student. The classmates around him start mocking him, saying he must be having another nightmare or calling him a loser, asking if he really plans to take the college exams. A girl sneers, telling him to give up and go home since he's destined to be a street cleaner for the rest of his life. Yehe gets annoyed, thinking that every protagonist is ridiculed at the start of their story. He realizes that the body's original owner didn't have a good reputation, and from the memories he just received, he recalls that the former Yehe's parents had an accident during his 2nd year, which made him lose all focus on his studies. Even though he used to have good grades, he ended up completely unmotivated. The girl from before starts getting angry for being ignored and yells, asking what he's staring at, reminding him they're in a martial arts class, and asking if he wants to settle things with a fight. Hearing this, Yihe panics, trying to understand what she means since he was only thinking. Apparently, the previous owner of this body didn't study properly, and now he's the one who'll have to face the consequences. Frustrated, he thinks he's inherited a humiliating and miserable life. At that moment, the teacher walks to the center of the room and calls for silence, telling everyone to pay attention. He asks if they're ready since they're about to begin the injection of the genetic modification serum. He tells them to believe in themselves, reminding them that all 3 years of training and martial energy cultivation have led to this moment. Adjusting his glasses, he shoots a look directly at Yihe and comments that those who never took the lessons seriously. But Yihe tunes him out, thinking this is all some kind of joke. After all, he's not the one who messed up before. Still, he decides not to worry because now he's the one in control. He's inherited this body, and with a cold smile, he promises to do whatever it takes to turn the situation around. Everyone proceeds to the genetic injection conference, held in the special hall of Ancheng's #1 high school. The students are excited, chatting about what they might awaken, maybe a level 3 rock mountain, or a level 4 sea dragon. Another boy laughs and says that Yehe will probably just end up a weak level 1. The preparation machine starts making noises, releasing gas, and when it opens, it reveals several capsules containing genetic mutations. The teacher explains that this is the genetic awakening serum, containing primitive genes from all the magical beasts known to mankind. After injection, each person will absorb a random gene and awaken their abilities. He notes that normally the stronger one's body, the more powerful the gene obtained, and tells them to remain calm, just accept the energy flow when it starts. Then he calls them one by one, injecting the serum directly into their veins, granting each student the genes of these creatures. Immediately, a strange energy begins to radiate from their bodies, filling the hall with a powerful aura. Some start feeling sick, others faint, unable to withstand the pressure of the injection. Yehe watches in fear, thinking everyone's reacting strangely and that this won't be easy. Without hesitation, he injects the serum directly into the vein of his neck, saying that no matter what happens, he'll just get it over with. His eyes shine intensely, but nothing happens. The teacher approaches, remarking that apparently nothing much has changed. Yihi tries to play it off, saying maybe he got a faulty dose. The same girl mocks him again, laughing that he didn't awaken anything at all. She says a warrior without an awakening is like a bird without wings, doomed to crawl among the rest. She adds that it suits him perfectly and that now he can go sweep streets instead of trying to be a warrior. Yehe feels anger building up, remembering how she mocked him earlier in class. Suddenly, unbearable pain hits him, and he wonders what this feeling is. A system screen appears before his eyes with the message, "Infinite monster model obtained. Host, Yehe. Martial abilities. Basic chi technique of the 9th student, palm block, iron body technique. Monster model extracted." Yehe writhes in agony while the girl watches disdainfully, asking what he's pretending to do, saying there's no reason to act if he didn't awaken anything. He shouts for everyone to back away immediately. She snaps back asking why, but Yehe, eyes glowing and a dense aura emanating from his body, warns that if they don't move now, it'll be too late. Then his energy erupts, transforming his aura into that of a colossal metallic monster. The pressure blasts the girl and everyone nearby away. The students scream that the shockwave was too strong, asking who could have awakened something so terrifying. Some complain that they can't stand the energy and start vomiting. Among the awakened, one of them looks around and asks if anyone there is stronger than him. The system screen reappears, displaying Rank A model, Dimora the Mad Flame. Abilities, Molten Fire Breath, Sporadic Absorption, Advanced Strength. Dimora the Lord of Flames will be unlocked once module compatibility reaches 100%. Current compatibility, 3%. Yihi keeps radiating crushing pressure throughout the room and in a firm tone declares that he has awakened a rank A model called Dimora, the Infinite Monster model. Looking at his own hands, his voice trembling, he asks if the system will finally start helping him. The other students, still terrified, glance at each other and ask if that guy was really the loser Yihe. Realizing his aura had forcibly pushed everyone back, they're stunned to see that even Wang Xing fainted, even though she had awakened a second-level magical beast, the Flame Claw Scorpion. It makes them wonder just what exactly Yihe has awakened. Regaining control, he laughs awkwardly and apologizes, saying he made a little mess during his awakening, but reminds them he did tell everyone to step back earlier. Suddenly, an announcement echoes through the school speakers, informing that all awakened students must proceed to the detection test to identify their magical beast type and martial level. In another room, several genetic analysis devices are ready for the examination. These machines measure the gene and martial level of the awakening. The first evaluated, Li Xinyuan, awakens a level 3 magical beast lineage, Swift Spider. His classmates comment that he's really lucky. He was just a normal student and now became number 1, saying powerful lineages are truly unfair. Next is Chu Zhou, considered the class's top student. Not only is he a level 9 martial apprentice, but he also awakened an impressive lineage, the Ice Demon Dragon. Everyone says that this time, the champion of Ancheng City will be him. Then they call Miss Liu, and the students are amazed to learn she's also a level 9 martial apprentice and has awakened a rare level 4 lineage, the Infernal Sparrow, a creature that, in its true form, could destroy most of the city and is feared even by grandmasters. The protagonist watches as numbers appear on the screen and begins to reflect, realizing that the models awakened by others were classified as level 3 or 4 while his is marked as rank A. Suddenly, his turn is announced, and he hears people around him excitedly commenting on what they saw happen when he received the injection, saying, "It's going to be amazing." As he walks toward the device, everyone watches with admiration, whispering that his aura is intense and that he'll surely become someone powerful. Some shout that they need to befriend him, while several girls sigh, saying he's really handsome. Along the way, Yihi thinks about how this world revolves entirely around martial power. When he reaches the machine, he steps inside and the students continue their chatter, saying that with that aura, his level must be incredible. The atmosphere is filled with anticipation, though one person in the back remains silent, watching carefully, sensing that the powerful energy earlier came from Yihe and deciding to keep an eye on him. When the test begins, the device's screen displays an error. The system identifies him as only a level 3 martial disciple, but the rest of the data doesn't appear. His beast lineage is listed as unknown. Instantly, everyone who had admired him burst into laughter, mocking him and saying that a level 3 disciple is pathetic, since even middle school students could beat him in a fight. They say that an unknown lineage probably means he doesn't even have one, and that even if he does, whatever lineage someone that weak could awaken would be insignificant. They add that the energy from before must have just been a system glitch. As soon as he steps out of the device, laughter echoes throughout the room, calling him a loser once again. Yehe, however, keeps a serious expression, thinking that this was already expected. The model wasn't detected because it's the Infinite Monster model. At that moment, the system interface reappears, displaying Infinite Monster Model Upgrade Guide. This model can be improved by completing missions or increasing reputation. Additional models can be acquired by performing these actions. Number of upgrades, 0. Reading that, Yihi starts to laugh, realizing that his rank model is different from the others, and that as long as he meets the conditions, he can have infinite models. That makes him shout in excitement that this way, he'll become the king of monsters. The next day at school, the teacher sips his tea and looks at him in confusion, asking if he really plans to stop attending classes to study for the entrance exams at home, and if Yihe thinks anyone would believe that. The protagonist firmly says he wants to improve, admitting that he's far behind everyone else and needs special training over the next few days. If he keeps the same pace as his classmates, he'll be doomed. The teacher replies that if he truly wants to become a warrior, he must enter college, but reminds him that even though he awakened a lineage, his foundation is weak. Therefore, he'll probably fail the entrance exams and should prepare to repeat the year. Yihe looks at him and shouts desperately that the teacher may not understand, But he awakened a powerful lineage, and with effort and intense training, he'll succeed. He begs the teacher to look into his eyes and see his sincerity, insisting he'd never lie about something like that. The teacher studies him for a few seconds, then admits that his eyes truly show determination. In the end, he allows Yihe to study at home, but confirms he'll still have to repeat the year. Outside, the protagonist walks along the sidewalk, recalling that his parents' house was sold for $600,000, and that with the accident compensation totaling more than $1 million, he has enough money to start his journey. He reflects that to increase his power, he has two options: level up as a warrior, or improve his compatibility with Demora. According to the system's information, each model starts with only 1% compatibility, but Demora already has 3, and he doesn't know where the other 2 came from. He quickly concludes that the answer is simple. The model absorbed part of the genetic awakening serum's power, increasing its compatibility. That proves that the genetic serum in this world can enhance model abilities. Therefore, instead of just training hard, he can use money to speed up the process. Convinced, he decides he must buy the genetic enhancement serum as soon as possible. Swiping his student card to enter the subway, he's amazed to notice that everyone there has already awakened their own lineages. After awakening his model, Yihe gained a unique ability called Life Magnetic Field. Demora can detect the vital signs of creatures by releasing its magnetic life field, allowing the protagonist to sense warriors' chi burning like furnaces and perceive their beast's presence. Excited, he starts to laugh, murmuring, "Warriors and monsters." And as he witnesses it all, he feels an uncontrollable desire to fight rising inside him. After all, Demora is the king of monsters in his world, a being destined to dominate all life. However, Yihe is still a beginner, unable to fully control Demora's power. When he grows stronger, he'll show the world who the true king of monsters is. Suddenly, someone taps his shoulder, startling him. A beautiful woman smiles and winks, telling him to stop staring at people. Embarrassed, Yihe apologizes, saying he didn't mean to. She laughs softly, saying it's fine and that he probably just awakened his beast gene and can't control the power yet. It's completely normal. Curious, she asks what he's doing there. He says he came to buy genetic medicine but doesn't know where to go since the place is so big and confusing, and asks if she could help him. The woman seems surprised, asking if he really intends to buy that kind of product and already start using it. Confused by her reaction, Yihe asks if there's something wrong with that. She says no, but explains that genetic medicines are extremely expensive and that frequent use can cause resistance, reducing their effects over time. She advises that to maximize results, it's better to wait until his lineage reaches its peak. Yihe asks how much a genetic dose costs, and she explains that, at his current level, he'll need a beginner's dose, priced at around $400,000. Hearing that, he feels discouraged, thinking it's too expensive. He couldn't even buy 5 doses with all the money he has. He asks if she knows anyone who could offer a discount. The woman hands him her business card, saying that with a recommendation from a veteran warrior, he might get a better price. Taking the card, Yihe thanks her sincerely and she smiles, saying that someday they'll meet again. Determined, he looks at the card and says it's time. Checking his balance, he sets out to buy, determined to invest in his growth. Later, in his apartment, under the light of the ship reflected through the window, a dense energy bursts from his body. The system screen appears, showing that the beast model, Demora, the Mad Flame, has increased its compatibility from 3 to 4%, and then to 7%. Yihe's body radiates more and more power, and the system also shows his stats rising from 10 to 15, while his weapon level reaches 7. Exhausted and drenched in sweat, he bends over, smiling with satisfaction, saying that this is how you level up. However, he notices that with each genetic dose, the progress becomes smaller, since as his body improves, further gains are harder to achieve. Still, he's satisfied, saying it wasn't bad at all as he achieved in a few minutes what others would take 3 years of training to reach. Thinking about it, he believes that if he can activate Demora's lineage power, he'll become #1 in the entrance exams. Looking at his hands and smiling, he reflects that if a loser can't surpass the ordinary, then he truly is worthless. With everything ready, he decides it's time to enter the secret realm. These portals are ranked from E to S, and the higher the rank, the stronger the beasts that dwell within. No human can defeat S-rank creatures. If they invaded the real world, they'd cause an apocalyptic disaster. After preparing, he heads to Ansheng's rank, E Secret Realm #3. Walking through the area, he notes there are fewer people than he expected, but realizes that's because the realm is old and most of its treasures have already been plundered, leaving only weak beasts, usually hunted by beginners. Approaching the receptionist, he informs her that he has a pass for Secret Realm #3. She asks him to sign the contract in front of her before entering. After filling out the form, he walks toward the portal, feeling his excitement grow. Gazing at the portal's light, he says, this is only the beginning of his journey to becoming the king of monsters, and without hesitation, he leaps inside. On the other side, he's awestruck by the sight of the Kanglan, Anhui, and Taijin stars shining in the sky. saying that even though he'd read about them in books, seeing them in person is completely different. Everything feels vast and magnificent. While still admiring the glow of the stars and the vastness of the place, a rabbit slowly approached. It was a first-rank beast known as a blood rabbit. The animal lunged toward him, but Yihe reacted instinctively, grabbing it with a swift, precise movement. He let out a mocking laugh, asking if the rabbit was stupid for thinking he wouldn't notice it. Thanks to his life magnetic field ability, he could sense everything around him with extreme clarity, and within seconds he exterminated the blood rabbit. After destroying it, a small magic core appeared in his hand. Observing the shining stone, he noticed it was white in color, calm in quality, probably worth about 1,000 yuan. He thought to himself that he had just earned 1,000 yuan in a matter of minutes, a huge profit compared to what a normal person would take an entire month to make. However, looking at the core again, he concluded that focusing only on white stones would be a waste of time and that the ideal move would be to hunt a second-rank beast. Just then, a roar echoed beside him. A grotesque creature emerged from the shadows, a second-rank demonic insect. Excited, Yihe drew his dagger, ready to test his abilities. He charged forward and easily pierced his opponent, remembering what he'd read about that species in the monster encyclopedia. Compared to the steel-hard shell covering its back, the demonic insect's abdomen was much more vulnerable. The strike wounded it badly but also enraged it. The creature lunged at him and Yihe dropped his weapon, channeling his energy and firing a beam of light resembling a kamehameha. The attack only made the insect angrier and it counterattacked by spitting 2 poisonous projectiles. Startled, Yihe barely dodged them and muttered in amazement, wondering if that monster's mandibles could really fire projectiles. Though he escaped, he grew furious at seeing his clothes damaged, shouting if the monster had any idea how much they cost. He soon realized that, at his current martial level, he couldn't defeat the creature without a powerful technique to back him up. Even with a deep Dantian and above-average vitality, he could barely unleash half his strength. He blamed the body's former owner for being such a failure in studies and training. With no alternatives left, he thought there was no choice. He'd have to cheat. He focused and his eyes began to glow. A dense energy filled the surroundings as he shouted to Demora, enraged to activate the demon emperor lineage. His body transformed, arms covered in scales and bulging muscles like those of a real beast. His strength rose from 15 to 21 points. When the insect charged again, Yihe leapt straight at it, diving into its mouth and tearing it apart from the inside, making its body explode outward. Gasping for air, he declared that, with his physique raised to 21 points, he had completely crushed the second-ranked demonic insect. Even after reversing the transformation, he had to release the excess heat built up inside his body. Thick smoke came from his hands, and he joked to himself that he was turning into a jet engine. Looking down, he noticed that his newly bought sword had been completely corroded by the monster's poison. A weapon worth 250,000 credits, destroyed by a mere second-rank beast. This had to be a scam, the quality control was terrible, and the review would definitely be negative. Soon after, his stomach growled loudly, and he realized that the energy consumption during the transformation must have been massive, since he was starving and hadn't brought any food. Suddenly, a delicious aroma filled the air, making his mouth water. The scent came from the green magic core the demonic insect had left behind. Without thinking much, he gave in to hunger and swallowed it. As soon as he did, a system window appeared before his eyes. Monster Model Demora, Enraged Demon Emperor. Compatibility increased from 7 to 7.3%. Yihe widened his eyes, surprised to realize that compatibility increased by consuming cores. Smiling, he compared. He had spent hundreds of thousands on a genetic potion and gained only 1%. But a single green core raised it by 0.3. If he could get 3 or 4 of those, it would equal an entire potion. He also thought that the white core he'd picked up earlier would probably give at least 0.1%. Happy with the discovery but frustrated over the money he'd wasted, he laughed and cried at the same time, calling that world a true pay-to-win. Regaining focus, he placed 2 fingers on his forehead and murmured that he would turn all that frustration into motivation. He swore to himself that he'd hunt until he was completely satisfied. With a determined look, he activated his life field, expanding his senses to detect any demonic presence nearby. The following afternoon, the System tab appeared again, displaying Model Demora, Enraged Demon Emperor, Compatibility, 9%, Overall Physique, 15.8. As he walked, Yihe thought that after reaching 9% compatibility, consuming white cores no longer had any effect, so it was more worthwhile to sell them for money. When he arrived at the receptionist's desk, he poured them all onto the counter and stated that he had 20 white cores and 1 green. The clerk was stunned, asking if he was joking, since a mere high school student could never have gathered that much. After completing the sale, everyone in the area began staring at him curiously, but Yihe ignored them, commenting that according to government rules, martial artists had to hand over part of their spoils. A green core was equivalent to 5 white ones. In total, he received 200,000 Xia Kingdom credits. Thinking about his next steps, he remembered that only 9 days remained until the college entrance exam and decided to head to Secret Realm D Class number 4. When he arrived, he noticed a group already gathered. The driver asked his captain, Lin, if they'd be able to complete the Jade Flower mission this time. Lin replied that during their last expedition, they had already found the area where it grows, but old Chen had been injured while fighting a monster and wouldn't be joining them. A woman commented that without him, only 5 people remained. Another warrior confirmed and reminded them that the rules required at least 6 participants to enter a D-class secret realm. Calmly, Lin said that wasn't a problem since he had contacted an agency that arranged a replacement. The captain, a level 2 martial artist named Lin He, approached Yi He and asked if he was the level 9 martial disciple known as Paisla. The protagonist confirmed. He thought that since he was still a student and lacked authorization to enter a D-class secret realm, he'd had to rely on an illegal agency to forge a fake identity, spending 100,000 credits just on that. Lin He remarked that the name Paisla was peculiar. Yi He stared at him and replied that he had no choice. If he used his real name, he'd have copyright issues. The captain laughed, saying it didn't matter since it was only a code name. What truly mattered was that, as a level 9 disciple, Paisla didn't have enough power for this kind of mission. Therefore, he would only observe and not interfere. Lin He emphasized that he didn't want him getting in the way. The protagonist simply nodded, saying he understood, but thought that defining roles beforehand was a good sign, better than being betrayed midway. With everything settled, the group boarded the vehicle and headed toward the portal. The captain explained that their goal this time was to find the Blood Jade Flower. Once they entered the secret realm, Lin He checked the tracker and reported that there was a flower located in an oasis just ahead, guarded by a rank 2 monster with a general grade lineage. Paisla looked around the barren landscape, reflecting that last time he'd explored a tropical forest, and now he was in the middle of a desert. He concluded that the secret realms weren't connected to a single world. Suddenly, one of the members shouted that Earth Demon rats had found them. Lin He ordered Hood to handle it. Hood drew his knives and with rapid movements hurled them toward the enemies. The blades, infused with martial energy, exploded on impact, wiping out all the rats at once. He turned to the captain and confirmed that the threat had been eliminated. Yi He watched in awe, realizing that Hood infused energy into each throw, making them as lethal as miniature bombs. He also noticed that the man carried himself with a brutal demeanor and spoke only when necessary. The team continued moving forward until they finally reached the indicated area. They disembarked and continued on foot. Paisla asked why they had abandoned the jeep when the path to the oasis was still long. Lin He explained that the monsters in this region were extremely sensitive and that the sound of the engine would immediately draw their attention. As they walked, the captain distributed the roles. He instructed that Xiao Xia would throw the flash grenade to lure the beasts. Xiao Wu and Hood would handle the traps. Old Lu would provide suppressive fire, and he himself would stay on the front line. He pointed to Paisla and said he would just observe. The protagonist didn't like the decision, but replied that he understood. With everything in place, Xiao Xia tossed the flash grenade. It released pheromones from high-level creatures, making the monsters nearby think their territory was being invaded. Within seconds, the ground began to shake, and before them appeared a massive creature covered in thick scales, a rank 2 monster known as the Earth Dragon. The captain shouted for Paisla to be careful because the monster was coming. Meanwhile, elsewhere, someone walked across a data projection on the floor, while a strange man nearby watched the scene and began to laugh quietly. The battle against the Earth Dragon ended fairly easily as the captain managed to slash it down quickly. The others ran to him asking if he was alright, and pointing out that the Earth Dragon was dead. Lin He sheathed his sword and said they should keep moving forward. However, a shadow suddenly appeared behind him. The dragon struck again, catching the captain off guard. In an instant, the protagonist leapt forward and used his martial art to attack the beast, unleashing a massive shockwave that startled even the captain. Lin He watched in disbelief and said that Paisla was just a novice, yet he had managed to defeat a rank 2 beast. Xia was equally impressed, exclaiming that the punch was incredibly powerful. The entire group surrounded the protagonist, cheering and applauding. Xia said the heavy mountain-splitting fist had destroyed the creature, and Wu, excited, shouted and hugged him, saying the rookie had just slain a rank 2 beast. The captain clapped his hands and thanked him for saving his life, declaring that from now on, they were comrades. Paisla stayed calm and said it was nothing. Lin He held something in his hand, called the others over, and confirmed that the Earth Dragon was defeated. Wu pointed out that they had also collected the monster's soul essence, calling it a great prize. Xia, curious, looked at the glowing red orb and asked if that thing was really worth so much. As everyone admired the Earth Dragon's essence, the protagonist stared at it, thinking it looked like a giant fruit that made his mouth water. The captain confirmed its value, explaining that the essence greatly increased compatibility with one's model. He added that this time, it had been close, but they had managed to slay the dragon and find the flower. Suddenly, Hood stabbed the captain from behind and started laughing, saying there was no point in him thinking about that anymore. The others gasped and demanded to know what was happening. Lin He turned around, trying to defend himself, and asked Hood what he thought he was doing. A strange man appeared beside Hood and answered that it was obvious. Hood was just trying to get rich off them. That man was Huo Peng. The protagonist asked if they knew him, and Wu, furious, explained that Peng was infamous for stealing artifacts martial artists found inside dungeons, and now they were being robbed by him. The old man rushed to the wounded captain and held him up while Lin He, trembling, said that the blade was poisoned and asked Hood how he could do that, and how he had even known the location of the place, since not even the team had known where the blood jade flower grew until they entered the secret realm. The protagonist stepped forward and said it was all because of the daggers. Hood had clearly hidden information about the weapons he had scattered along the way. Hood laughed and praised Paisla, saying he was sharp and should be in school instead since the entrance exam was coming soon, but added that he had chosen to walk hand in hand with death. Confident, the protagonist cracked his neck and replied that it was true. The exam was close, and he already had the top score waiting for him. Hood lunged at him with a dagger, shouting that he was too arrogant. Paisla easily caught the blade, his eyes burning with anger, and said that the real arrogance was a filthy man barking at him. He released a fierce aura and said all that noise was irritating, that it was time to take out the trash. Peng watched, laughing with excitement, saying the protagonist was fascinating and that he wanted his head. Hood, following his leader's order, charged with incredible speed, but all his strikes were nullified by a single roar from Paisla. The force of the impact sent sand flying across the desert, and Hood used the cover to attempt a sneak attack. He moved silently, trying to strike from above, but the rest of the group shouted that he was coming from overhead. Paisla had already noticed. Concentrating, he prepared his mountain-splitting martial technique, saying this was the perfect chance to test his new skill. With a single strike, the attack pierced straight through his enemy's body. Lin He trembled, stunned by what he saw, and exclaimed that Paisla had defeated Hood with just one blow, wondering if he was truly a novice. The protagonist remained calm as if nothing had happened, while Hood's body fell to the ground. Peng shouted, asking if that was a genetic technique, and which great family he came from. Paisla asked what he was talking about and replied mockingly that he was from the Manhwa clan, then asked if Peng was about to beg for mercy. That infuriated Peng, who began releasing his power, saying that even if the protagonist had a genetic technique, he couldn't overcome the massive difference in martial strength between them. His body expanded, activating the Black Bear language and unleashing his full power. He charged using the Mountain Fist technique. Confident, Paisla ducked low and said he would start by breaking the bear's legs, striking with immense force and dodging the attack with ease. Peng used his momentum to leap into the air and try to hit him, but just before being struck, Paisla commented that second-class martial artists were indeed strong. His atomic breath hadn't even managed to shatter the man's ankle bone. Peng went for another attack, but the protagonist vanished and reappeared behind him, asking if he was done because now it was his turn. Paisla unleashed his mountain-crushing fist technique, delivering a devastating series of blows to Peng's body and defeating him effortlessly. Everyone in the group stood frozen, stunned by the overwhelming power before them. Lying on the ground, bleeding, Peng gasped that the protagonist's genetic technique released toxic gas and that such a thing was despicable. He said an evil martial artist like him would be cursed and punished. Paisla, eyes bloodshot and consumed by rage, prepared another strike and said the list of people who had cursed him just kept growing, asking who Peng thought he was to say such things. Sometime later in the central gymnasium of Ancheng, a great festival was about to begin. The place was packed, and the students who passed would receive scholarships. The commentator took the stage, greeted everyone, and announced that this year's selection for the martial arts universities was officially open, wishing all participants good luck. He explained that the exams followed a dual format. 2 candidates entered the arena, and whoever won advanced to the next round. The exam lasted 3 days. The first 2 were eliminations, and those who passed would move on to the third phase. Each student had to fight 3 times in the preliminaries, and the winners would continue until the champion was decided. The announcer concluded his speech by saying that they were the future of humanity and should fight not only for themselves, but for the entire human race. They must show their full strength in this exam. Then he officially declared the Ancheng City Martial Arts examination open. Battles in Arenas 1 and 4 began, but the commentator noticed an issue in Arena 6. One of the candidates hadn't shown up. He explained that the competitors for that arena were Xing and Yihe, both from Ancheng's first school. However, only Xing was present, and according to the rules, if the duel began and the other contestant didn't appear, they would be disqualified. Xing said that the humiliation at the genetic conference had been the worst moment of her life, and that she just wanted to use her fire scorpion to teach the protagonist a lesson. But it seemed that coward was too scared to show up. She called it a huge disappointment. The crowd began to murmur, saying it was pathetic, that he didn't even have the courage to appear for the exam. Someone added that he was probably hiding at home crying and that people like him didn't deserve to be in high school. The referee blew the whistle, announcing that the time was up and that Yihe of Ancheng's first school was therefore disqualified. Suddenly, a bright light burst across the sky, drawing everyone's attention. People wondered what it was, one remarking that the aura was unbelievably strong, questioning if it was even human and what kind of power could let someone fly like that. The protagonist descended from the heavens like a meteor, crashing into the center of the arena and unleashing a crushing wave of pressure. Xing froze, confused, until she saw something appear before her. Yehe struck her directly in the face, sending her flying across the stage. He looked down at her and remarked that this time had been close. He almost would have had to wait for next year. Xing lay unconscious on the ground. The commentator announced that Yihe had won the first battle, emerging victorious. The crowd raised their hands, cheering wildly, shouting that he was unbelievably strong since he had defeated his opponent with a single blow and made a spectacular entrance. Excited voices in the stands said it must have been the legendary Heavenly Step technique. The system screen appeared, showing that the host's total attributes had reached 225 and that the monster model Demora, Enraged Demon Emperor, had achieved 20% compatibility. Yihe was thrilled with the result, remembering that Captain Lin He had given him the Blood Jade Flower as thanks for everything he'd done. The fruit had greatly enhanced his body, though it had taken some time to take effect. Now he was fully ready. It was time to sit back and let the show begin. The first matches ended and the second round began. The commentator announced the next duel, Long Tao from Ancheng's fourth school versus Yihe. The fight didn't even last a minute before the protagonist won again. The third school faced him next, but was defeated with a single blow, just like the others. The crowd went wild at his string of victories, exclaiming that he finished each battle with a single kick and moved straight to the next without wasting time. A true human super kick. The commentator raised his hand excitedly and declared that Yehi from the first school had won all 3 fights and advanced to the third stage. When the round ended, the protagonist began walking through the area and many people rushed to him, inviting him to their universities and begging to add him as a friend. Even private universities were after him. Yehi could barely move as people surrounded him from all directions, each calling his name and trying to convince him to enroll in their institution. Then, a woman approached and asked if he already had a university in mind. He looked at her curiously and, apologizing to the others, replied that he intended to attend the capital university. The moment he said that, everyone began to step back, murmuring that he hadn't even reached the finals yet and was already full of himself, saying that once he lost, there would be no point in asking for help. The protagonist was surprised, asking if they were serious and if they truly didn't believe in him. Even so, he said he understood. After all, the capital university was the best martial arts school in the Xia Kingdom, one of the top 5 in the world, the dream of any martial artist. He thought about how, in second-tier cities like Ancheng, only the very best had any chance of getting into such a sacred place. But in the end, martial artists prove their worth through strength. When he wins the tournament, he'll see what everyone has to say then. Suddenly, 2 men in suits approached, calling his name and showing him a document, asking him to cooperate for a reevaluation of his martial level. After the test, both were astonished to confirm that Yihe had become a level 9 martial artist. They remarked that only 15 days earlier, he hadn't been above level 3. Yehe looked at them and asked if they were implying it was impossible to advance that much in such a short time, and if they thought he had cheated. One of the evaluators explained that they had investigated and found he'd been entering dangerous secret realms repeatedly, questioning why he'd done that before the exam. The protagonist acted and replied that he had done it all for training, saying that before his father died, he told him that if he wanted to surpass others, he needed to stop being just a student. So he kept fighting nonstop in secret realms, and during one of those battles, he managed to break through his genetic barrier. The 2 evaluators froze, sweating, and asked if he truly broke the genetic barrier. Then, they ran off, saying they needed to report it immediately. Yihe watched them go, confused, realizing he had now become a subject of special observation. Later, in his room, he saw countless posts from parents, friends, and relatives wishing the candidates good luck, along with live interviews of families supporting their children. He looked up and muttered that apparently no one had come to support him, just an orphan no one cared about. But in truth, on the other side of the screen, his former teacher was watching and silently cheering, hoping he would fulfill everything he had promised. The next day, in the first round of the qualification stage, the protagonist from the first school was set to face Luo Zhuan from the third school. People whispered that they remembered that name. Zhuan had been number 1 in the 3rd year, a level 8 martial artist who had awakened a rare magical beast lineage, and both his parents were martial artists too. They concluded that Yihe was doomed. The protagonist, however, ignored it all and simply asked if they could start already. That irritated Zhuan, who asked if Yehe really didn't know who he was. The protagonist replied that knowing or not didn't change the outcome of the fight. Zhuan laughed and released his power, saying it didn't matter. The result was already decided. He would be the winner. He activated the demonic Mark Awakening and, with his power amplified, charged forward, saying he hoped Yihei was lucky enough not to die on the spot. He then unleashed the Thunder Dance technique. Yihei calmly caught the attack with his bare hands, saying it wasn't bad, but still far weaker than that bald guy's strike. Zhuan screamed in pain as his hand burned and fell to his knees in despair. The protagonist raised his hand and struck, slamming him into the arena floor. Then he laughed, asking if there wasn't a single decent opponent in the entire tournament. The commentator announced that Yihei was once again the winner, pointing out that it was another clean hit and that he had just defeated one of the favorites. The crowd erupted, astonished at how easily he had won, commenting that Zhuan had looked so imposing and was suddenly sprawled on the ground. They remarked that Yihei's composure was that of a true master and that his level was far beyond the other competitors. A truly absurd gap. Women in the audience screamed excitedly, saying, "Now that's a real man," and that they wanted to have his children. Even though he had only used his hand this time, the audience joked that it still counted as a single strike. The crowd kept roaring, fascinated by the protagonist's overwhelming display. As Zhuan was carried off on a stretcher, Zhou approached Yihei and said that since he was the chosen one, he'd be the one to take him down in the finals. Meanwhile, in the Capital University's live broadcast room, one of the staff pointed at the screen and shouted for all information on Yihei to be pulled up immediately. In another battle area, the second bracket was on fire, the audience fully engaged as two dazzling twin girls fought. The match was between Kai Xiaoling, known as the queen of Ancheng's second school, and Liu Qingshu, the untouchable flower of the first school. Xiaoling taunted her, saying she couldn't stand her opponent's cold, emotionless face. Qingshu simply stared at her in silence. The referee gave the signal to start, and Xiaoling dashed forward, laughing, and saying she wanted to see if Qingshu would keep that arrogant look once she was lying on the ground. The girl from the first school activated her martial art, the Liu family's secret art, Beloved Sovereign. The two exchanged swift attacks, dodging and countering each other with precision. Xiaoling intensified her strikes, saying it was time to get serious, and activated her explosive fist technique. She found an opening and attacked without hesitation, but realized too late that she'd fallen into a trap. Her arm was caught by the airwaves Qingshu had created, preventing her retreat. Qingshu seized the moment and used the soul-reaping technique. The commentator was astonished, saying that such a high-level technique shouldn't even be possible for a high school student. He added that with that kind of talent, she wouldn't even need to take the exam. She could get a direct recommendation to a capital university. But at the last second, Xiaoling transformed, unleashing her full power. Her lineage awakened. Shadow Tiger. The commentator exclaimed in disbelief, saying she had managed to awaken a third-grade lineage. The strength of the Shadow Tiger was legendary, and controlling such power was nearly impossible. He said this girl had a brilliant future ahead of her. Xiaoling, in her complete transformation, revealed her lineage, the Phantom Shadow Bird. Qingshu, still calm and cold, simply said it was fine. Xiaoling lunged, mocking and asking if she really thought she could win. Qingshu fought back using her family's secret arts, her movements graceful and precise, almost like a dance. She blocked and dodged every strike with ease. Xiaoling grew more aggressive, activating the tiger's brutal kick technique. Qingshu remained composed, focusing energy into her fingertip, the legendary, primordial Jade Finger. With a single touch, she halted the kick, triggering a massive burst of energy that engulfed the entire arena. The commentator exclaimed that the collision between their powers was absurd, filling the field with thick smoke, and wondered who would still be standing at the end. The audience held their breath, trying to see through the haze. Slowly, the smoke cleared, revealing Xiaoling still standing. The commentator noted that she remained on her feet, but moments later, she collapsed unconscious. Qingshu stood unharmed, her serene expression unchanged. The commentator declared that she was unshaken and emphasized that, with just one martial technique, she had crushed a level 9 opponent with an awakened lineage, something worthy of a prodigy born once in 100 years. He officially announced Qingshu's victory. The crowd went wild, calling her a monster and praising her overwhelming power. With the matches over, the quarterfinal draw began. The commentator announced that the next to draw would be the protagonist. Yihei reached into the container and pulled out a ball marked with the letter A. A fighter beside him laughed good-naturedly and showed that he had also drawn A, meaning they would face each other. He introduced himself as Shen Jiaguan from Qingfeng Private Academy. Yihei replied, introducing himself as being from Ancheng's first school. Jiaguan pointed toward the arena and said their match would be the second one, so they should watch the first together. The commentator then announced that the first quarterfinal match, Luo Shi from Qingfeng Academy versus Chu Zhou, was about to begin. Jiaguan watched the broadcast closely and remarked that Luo Shi was indeed very strong. Jiaguan had repeated his final year just to try again for admission to Capital University and possessed exceptional control over his lineage. However, before Zhou, he didn't stand a chance. The protagonist asked who this Zhou was, and Jiaguan replied that he also studied at Yihe's school, surprised that he didn't know. While they spoke, the match ended and the commentator announced Zhou's victory. The Qingfeng Academy director watched furiously, unable to accept that his student had lost without even being able to react. Yihe took the opportunity to ask Jiaguan how Luo Shi compared to him. Jiaguan smiled kindly and explained that he was the president of the martial arts club in the third year, adding that even if Luo Shi joined forces with 2 other classmates, he still wouldn't be able to defeat him. Then his expression turned serious as he looked at Yihe and said that he believed the protagonist was his greatest rival in the tournament. He explained that since childhood, he'd had an unusually sharp sense of perception and could feel something powerful inside Yihe, a dormant volcano, a beast about to awaken. Then, smiling again, he said he hoped for a great match, because it was time for the 2 of them to face each other. They walked to the center of the arena, and the commentator announced the start of the second quarterfinal match. Shen Jiaguan from Qingfeng Academy versus Yihe from Ancheng First School. The moment the match began, both exchanged blows so powerful that part of the arena was destroyed. The commentator shouted in excitement, saying both fighters seemed evenly matched. The pressure of the fight was so intense it could be felt by the audience. Suddenly, Jiaguan noticed blood dripping from his nose and asked if that was one of Yihe's lineage abilities. He increased his power, saying that the ability to distort cells directly was truly mysterious. Yihe realized that Jiaguan had formed a martial energy barrier around his body to defend himself against nuclear radiation, which only made him more excited, admitting his opponent was an incredible martial artist, a real monster not to be underestimated. Jiaguan charged, declaring that if that was the case, he'd show him the martial arts passed down for generations through the Shen lineage. He activated his mind and form box technique, Deer Peak. His strikes were fast and precise, so powerful that Yihe couldn't dodge and took the impact head-on. The blow was devastating. The back of Yihe's shirt ripped open. The commentator exclaimed that it was a powerful hit and that Yihe, known as the super kick, had been struck for the first time. The impact made him spit blood, and the announcer emphasized how destructive Jiaguan's mind and form technique truly was. Even wounded, Yihe was merely pushed back, refusing to fall. Jiaguan followed up, saying there was no escape, and used the bear collision technique. This time, Yihe managed to defend with his arms, avoiding a direct blow. As he held the strike, he thought that Jiaguan's attacks weren't purely physical. He was infusing martial energy into his body, doubling the damage. He realized that his previous opponents had been mere amateurs with no experience against real fighters. Suddenly, Jiaguan's arm extended, wrapping around Yihe's torso and pulling him in. Jiaguan said Yihe was half right. He didn't just infuse energy into himself, he could also block his opponent's energy, preventing them from using martial techniques. He then hurled Yihe using monkey throw and followed up with tiger leap, jumping high and slamming him hard, making Yihe feel intense pain. Jiaguan gave him no respite, diving down like an eagle and shouting that Yihe would never win this fight. The blow landed with full force, both crashing into the arena floor in a massive explosion that engulfed everything in smoke. Jiaguan stood up laughing, satisfied, saying that attack had felt amazing. The commentator said the series of attacks had left Yihe no chance to counter, and that the medical team was already preparing to intervene. He explained that the combination of Jiaguan's mind and form techniques would have killed any normal martial artist, and the winner had already been decided. The winner from Qingfeng Academy was... But before he could finish, a deep sound echoed through the arena. Jiaguan turned, startled, as an overwhelming surge of energy spread through the air, making even his voice falter. The smoke slowly cleared, revealing Yihe stepping out of a crater, smiling as he said his opponent was indeed very strong. Then he activated Demora's wild trait, Lineage Awakening. Yihe's body was completely enveloped by his beast's form. Flames and dense energy surrounded him, shaping the figure of Demora, the enraged demon emperor. He looked at his opponent and with a calm and commanding tone, said that if it was any consolation, Jiaguan was the first person to witness that form up close. The commentator, speechless, shouted that it was unbelievable. If high school students could manifest a beast personification, they could be admitted to Capital University without even taking the exam. He excitedly confirmed that it was indeed a magical beast personification and said he'd never expected to see another martial genius in a small city like Ancheng, besides Jingzhou. Faced with that colossal creature, Jiaguan began to panic, barely able to speak. The protagonist walked slowly toward him, and Jiaguan, voice trembling, admitted he never imagined his opponent's awakening would involve such a high-level lineage. Meanwhile, one of the examiners monitoring the fight through his headset suddenly heard strange noises. They all use these devices to track battles precisely. He stood up, in shock, as an alert appeared on his interface. Nuclear radiation levels had reached 9,999,999. The examiner shouted, asking what was happening. stating that the radiation had surpassed all safe limits. The commentator, noticing the evaluators' reactions, announced that after witnessing Yehe's beast personification, they had detected something abnormal and were sealing off the arena with martial energy to contain a possible nuclear leak. The audience was stunned, and people began asking if anyone knew what kind of beast he had awakened. Another student replied that he'd heard Yehe had awakened an unknown beast, but no one believed something that powerful could come from an unregistered species. The protagonist thought that apparently there was no other creature like Demora on Blue Star. That's why no one recognized it. Jaguan noticed his nose bleeding again and realized his martial shield could no longer block Yehe's overwhelming energy. He concluded he couldn't prolong the fight any longer and decided to risk everything, activating the Golden Star Demon Monkey lineage awakening. The commentator nearly screamed, exclaiming that it was another third-order royal lineage and that this year's entrance exam was full of monstrously strong candidates. Jaguan used his mind and form box once again, Serpent Strike, moving with lethal precision and speed. The protagonist prepared himself too, focusing his energy and activating the Mountain Prison Fist technique. The impact shook the ground. The strike hit Jaguan's arm directly and he screamed in pain, realizing the limb had been badly damaged. He admitted that if he hadn't released his power in time, his arm would have been completely shattered. Breathing heavily, he said that earlier he had talked too much, but now he was just getting beaten. Yehe approached him steadily, eyes firm, and said, Jiaguan was an incredible opponent, but the result wouldn't change. The commentator narrated with enthusiasm, explaining that in the second quarterfinal match for Capital University's entrance exam, two high-level lineages were clashing. On one side, a third-order royal lineage. On the other, an unknown magical beast lineage, something rarely seen. Jaguan tried to analyze the situation but realized that since Yehe's awakening, his power had become immeasurable. He could no longer withstand the pressure and knew that if it continued, he would be crushed. He tried to retreat and counterattack, but Yehe gave him no time. Don't get distracted, Yehe said, landing a flurry of fast blows. Jiaguan activated mind and form again, grabbed Yehe's arm, spun his body skillfully, and moved behind him, panting as he said the last hit barely scratched him. This was his real move. He jumped high and unleashed the giant elephant paw strike, shaking the entire arena with the impact. But when he stepped back, he froze in disbelief. Yehe stood completely unscathed, arms crossed, watching him calmly. Are you done? The protagonist asked, hovering slightly above the ground. Now it's my turn. He charged forward like a king ready to crush everything before him. But before the blow could land, Jiaguan dropped to his knees, exhausted, shouting that he surrendered. The protagonist stopped, confused, not understanding what had happened, then exploded in frustration. He shouted angrily, saying he'd waited so long for his turn and now the moment was ruined. Taking a deep breath, he calmed down, lowered his hand, and said he'd let it go. He released the built-up energy, returning to his normal form, and remarked that, according to the rules, once an opponent surrenders, the other can't continue the attack. The commentator announced that the match was over, and once again, victory belonged to Yehe. The crowd went wild, shouting about how incredible the protagonist was. Social media exploded. People began making memes of Jiaguan. Before the fight, confident and sure of victory. After the fight, crying and begging forgiveness for not letting Lord Yehe use his full power. Dozens of fan pages started popping up, urging people to join Yehe's fourth fan group via WhatsApp since the first three were already completely full. Others shared links on the Toker platform, telling everyone to follow them to watch the full video of Yehe's entrance exam battle. The public was ecstatic. Fans commented that the best student and candidate of the year was undoubtedly the protagonist, claiming that not even Qingju or Zhou could stand against him. Meanwhile, the director of Qingfeng Private Academy was livid, shouting that Luo Shi might have lost, but he had placed all his faith in Jiaguan. As soon as the fight ended, the director stormed into the arena, yelling at Jiaguan, demanding how he dared to admit defeat, and if he had any idea how much money had been invested in his training up to that point. Furious, the director said that if Jiaguan didn't repay every cent of debt, he shouldn't even dream of entering university. Jiaguan calmly placed a hand on the director's shoulder, startling him. The man stammered, asking what he was trying to do. Jiaguan looked him straight in the eyes and said the director wouldn't be able to withstand that punch. That surrendering had been the best choice to avoid destroying his own body. He asked if the director had the guts to step into the ring and take that blow himself. Then he added that, out of gratitude for the school's kindness, he would repay the debt little by little in the future, but warned him never to threaten a warrior stronger than himself. The director began trembling and, with no words left, admitted that Jiaguan was right. The commentator returned to the broadcast, announcing that after a fierce set of battles, the four best candidates in this year's entrance exam had been decided: Yehe, Qingju, Zhou, and some other random nobody. He also emphasized that Ancheng's first school was the clear overall winner, claiming 3 out of the 4 semifinal spots. At that moment, the first school's director was beaming with pride, laughing and saying that old Lu had worked at the school for so many years, and now it was time for him to be promoted. Overjoyed, Lu cheered at the top of his lungs, shouting about how incredible his student Yihei was. The commentator announced that the semifinal draw would begin right then. The protagonist stepped forward, picked his ball again, and realized he would be the first to fight. Qingzhu showed hers. It was the same. The commentator revealed that the first match of the college entrance semifinals would be an internal battle between two students of Ancheng's #1 school, Yehei and Qingzhu. The audience erupted in excitement, shouting that they had been waiting for this fight, certain it would be one of the best in the entire tournament. However, many believed Qingzhu had the upper hand, as she had mastered 2 royal martial arts of mysterious origin. With those alone, she had defeated Xiaoling, who possessed a 3rd-rank royal lineage. Qingzhu's own awakened lineage, the 4th-rank infernal bird, had not yet been fully revealed. On the other hand, Jieguan had also possessed a 3rd-rank lineage and had been the one to force the protagonist to awaken his own, an extremely powerful one. It was estimated that Yihei's lineage was also of the 4th rank, though still incomparable to that of the goddess Liu, who not only held a lineage of equal level, but also mastered exquisite martial techniques. Finally, both proceeded to the semifinals arena. They stepped into the center while the referee called for silence. As soon as they were ready, he signaled for the fight to begin. Instantly, Yihei released his aura, unleashing overwhelming pressure within the arena and raising a dense mist that obscured everything. Staring at that sight, Qingzhu sensed the depth of his power but didn't waver, saying she hoped he was strong enough to withstand her. The commentator narrated that the battle had begun with Yihei releasing a thick fog that completely blocked visibility, leaving the audience unable to see what was happening inside. He wondered how Qingzhu would handle the boy who had shocked everyone during the year's entrance exams, and whether she would be forced to unleash her true power again. Within the smoke, Yihei analyzed the situation. Qingzhu's martial arts were far superior to his. With such mystical techniques, even his strength might not be enough to inflict any real damage. He also acknowledged her intelligence, her ability to formulate multiple strategies mid-fight. He understood that if the battle dragged on, she would gain the advantage. Therefore, he decided to go all out from the very beginning. Suddenly, he burst through the mist, charging with the mountain fist. Qingzhu saw him and wondered why he was attacking so recklessly already, but quickly concluded that if that was how he wanted it, she would use her royal martial arts to defend and strike back. Mid-charge, Yihei abruptly changed his stance and struck her cleanly. Shocked, she grew irritated, realizing he had tricked her. He'd shouted, "Mountain fist!" but his attack had been a whip of pure energy instead. Taking advantage of her confusion, Yihei intensified his beastly aura and kept her under relentless pressure. The crowd began to complain, saying the protagonist was just toying around and that real warriors fought with honor. Ignoring them, Yihei maintained his aggressive tempo, giving Qingzhu no time to catch her breath. Still, she managed to channel her energy and broke his barrage, drawing cheers from the audience, who believed she might finally turn the fight around. But Yihei unleashed the hands of his beast and declared she wouldn't escape so easily. He launched another strike that caught her off guard. She realized he was using martial energy as well. Qingzhu jumped back and countered, causing a large explosion, but it wasn't enough. Within seconds, Yihei appeared in front of her, commanding her to stop running. He attacked again, blow after blow, with terrifying speed and power. Qingzhu gritted her teeth, wondering how he wasn't exhausted after so many strikes. His stamina was absurd. Then she remembered her 2 imperial secret martial arts. One defensive, the loyal family's secret art, Floating Shadow, and the other offensive, the Hunyuan Jade Finger. She believed that if she could use both, she might have a chance to break free. Yet his pressure was overwhelming. There was no opening at all. Knowing she couldn't hold back any longer, Qingzhu activated her trump card, the awakening of the Netherbird lineage. Her body transformed before everyone's eyes as great black wings unfolded from her back and she rose into the air. The commentator shouted with excitement that her lineage had finally awakened, the first manifestation of her magical beast, the Netherbird. With a serious expression, Qingzhu warned Yihei to be careful, saying she still couldn't control her strength in that form. But Yihei only laughed, thrilled, saying that was perfect. Until now, he'd been using only half his power, so there was no need to hold back anymore. Qingzhu darted around the arena at high speed, but Yihei sensed her reappearing behind him. Without hesitation, she unleashed the Imperial secret technique, Hunyuan Jade Finger. In the midst of the furious clash, Yihei grinned wildly and activated his atomic fist. The collision between their attacks generated a colossal surge of energy that filled the entire arena. The audience groaned, many feeling dizzy, complaining that the pressure was so immense it was hard to breathe or even keep their eyes open. Qingzhu was forced back several steps and, upon looking ahead, was stunned. Yihei's energy was overflowing, his body radiating the aura of a raging beast. The commentator reminded everyone that this was just the first semi-final match. Yet the protagonist's unleashed power was already shaking the entire field, the roaring energy deafening. Qingzhu stared in disbelief, her voice trembling as she muttered that this level of energy couldn't be good. The commentator, equally shaken, tried to make sense of it, explaining that Yihe's beast form seemed to be absorbing energy instead of losing it. He described how the spines along Yihe's back were storing vast amounts of energy and converting it through his mouth. Then, in a flash, Yihe fired the atomic energy beam straight at her. Qingzhu tried to shield herself with her wings, but even with her latent awakening, she could tell the blast was far stronger than expected. She immediately used the feather deflection technique. The commentator cried out in panic. The energy beam had been reflected by Qingzhu's feathers and was now hurtling toward the audience. Chaos broke out in the stands, but before disaster struck, a barrier of energy materialized, blocking the scattered blasts. It had been conjured by the city's mayor, Huang Qing. He raised his voice, calling for everyone's attention and declaring that the strongest champion in Anqing's history would be born that day. The crowd erupted, cheering as the commentator praised the mayor for protecting them. Inside the arena, however, blood began dripping to the floor. Qingzhu was gravely injured, her wings torn to shreds. Trembling, she faced the protagonist and admitted in a weak voice that he had shattered her bird's defense with a single strike. Shaken, she began doubting herself, wondering if she could still defeat him. At that moment, her mind drifted back to childhood memories, voices telling her she was the Liu family's hope, that she must never lose. She remembered that her ancestors watched over her, and that disappointing them would be unforgivable. She thought of her mother, who had dedicated her life to training her so she could one day restore the Liu family's honor. For that reason, she felt she had to win, no matter the cost. In her mind, she saw herself as a frightened child, her mother kneeling beside her saying she must win not only that tournament but also in life itself. The pressure was suffocating. Qingzhu could barely breathe. Back in reality, she looked at Yihe, realizing how exhausted she was. She acknowledged his strength and, confused, smiled faintly, wondering if it was normal to feel okay with not being able to surpass someone so strong. Even so, she rushed forward again, asking him to look at the opening she was leaving and finish her off once and for all. But Yihe didn't move. He let her hit him directly as if it were nothing. Shocked, she asked why he hadn't dodged. With a cold, steady gaze, he asked if she had already lost her fighting spirit. Qingzhu froze at his words. Irritated, Yihe said she couldn't even meet his eyes, and, enraged, gathered a massive surge of energy, shouting that he would claim that damn title fair and square. Stunned, Qingzhu couldn't react as he struck again, slamming her to the ground. The protagonist stared down at her, demanding that she start taking it seriously. Then he charged forward at a high speed, asking if she still couldn't react and ordering her to move faster. Beaten down, Qingzhu screamed in indignation, yelling that he was too audacious to hit her like that. No one had ever dared do so to her since she was a child. Confused by everything that was happening, Qingzhu shouted that she wanted him to win too, and demanded to know why he insisted so much that she keep fighting. Suddenly, a colossal force surged through her body, and she roared that he had no right to hit a woman in the face like that. Yihe looked at her firmly and replied that this was exactly how he liked it. If she didn't want to be hit, then she should get up and fight. Qingzhu then activated the forbidden martial art blood combustion. New, immense wings unfolded behind her, shimmering with fiery brilliance, and her entire outfit transformed, reflecting the true form of her magical beast. Staring at the protagonist, she declared that she would now fight with all her strength and defeat him, just as he seemed to want. Yihe watched her transformation and burst into manic laughter, saying that she had finally revealed the true form of her beast. Now, things were finally getting interesting. He too transformed completely, declaring that if that was the case, he could no longer hold back. When his transformation was complete, his power flared violently as he activated the Qi Gong technique, a fusion of the Demora model with his internal energy flow, the nuclear combat body. The protagonist stepped forward and said he hoped they would have a good fight. Qingzhu glared back and unleashed her ability Razor Hurricane. Yet Yihe charged straight in without hesitation, plunging directly into the storm and activating Explosive Fist. At that same moment, Qingzhu gathered energy in her mouth and unleashed a devastating roar, the Atomic Breath. Their powers collided violently, sending shockwaves through the arena. This time, the protagonist was thrown back, though the blast wasn't strong enough to injure him. He smirked and asked if she thought she was the only one who could roar. He then focused energy into the spikes on his back. Qingzhu recognized the movement. It was the same attack as before, but she didn't intend to retreat this time. Closing her eyes briefly, she concentrated, opening small gaps in her defense to execute the Liu family's most powerful technique. Gathering every bit of energy she could, she shouted that now they would fight as equals. Yihe fired the atomic laser, while Qingzhu activated her lineage skill, the infernal blood spikes. The two attacks collided at the center of the arena. Seeing what was about to happen, The commentator warned that both attacks were extremely powerful and would create a catastrophic explosion. Neither of them would be able to control the outcome. Once again, the mayor intervened. Using his genetic technique, he conjured a massive wall called the Divine Energy Wall. The attack struck it, obliterating it instantly and sending a massive shockwave rippling through the entire arena. The crowd was in disbelief, wondering if that wall had truly been conjured by the mayor and if he had actually managed to contain the explosion. If he hadn't, everyone would have been doomed. Watching silently, the mayor thought to himself that the 3 divine walls he had erected were improvised and not as solid as they should have been. In the end, the 2 attacks had neutralized each other. He couldn't believe 2 candidates of such monstrous power existed in the same entrance exam. As the smoke slowly cleared, one of the figures appeared, her arm dripping with blood. Qingzhu was on her knees, her left arm badly injured. Struggling to breathe, she admitted that her true form's power had reached its limit, but she still insisted she could fight. From within the smoke, the protagonist emerged slowly, standing before her completely unharmed. Qingzhu looked at him in disbelief, unable to understand how her attacks had hit but done nothing. He told her that if she didn't purge the nuclear radiation within her body, she could suffer permanent damage and even lose the ability to fight in the future. Trembling, she began to cry, shouting that she wanted to fight him up to that point and asking why he had pushed her so hard to continue. Yihe crouched down in front of her, looked into her eyes, and asked whether she truly hadn't wanted to fight him, or if she was just being stubborn, refusing to admit her own competitive spirit. He told her that while she fought with everything she had, he could feel her desire to win, something he deeply admired in her. His words left her speechless. Qingzhu reflected and realized he was right. She truly had wanted to defeat him. That was why she had abandoned her defense and gone all out. The realization confused her. She had always hated fighting and just wanted to be done with it. Yet during this battle, she felt something different. The thrill of fighting not for others, but for herself. Yihe placed a hand on her shoulder, making her blush slightly. Then he began drawing out the radiation from her arm, healing her wounds instantly. He said she had been too distracted during the fight, and that was why she lost. Qingzhu looked at her arm, astonished. Both the radiation and her injuries were gone. The protagonist smiled, saying that despite everything, she was still the strongest opponent he had ever faced, and next time, he wanted a pure, unrestricted fight with her. Qingzhu looked at him with admiration, her eyes shining. For the first time, someone was seeing the person behind her power. As the smoke fully cleared, the commentator's voice echoed through the arena, announcing that Yihe was still standing at the center. The protagonist released her arm and smiled as the commentator declared the end of the first semifinal match, announcing that the representative of Ancheng's first school had claimed another victory. He then added that following Yihe's triumph, Zhou had also emerged victorious. As expected, now the greatest climax of the Ancheng entrance exam was about to begin, the final battle for the highest score between Yihe and Zhou. Viewership skyrocketed as the commentator shouted that the showdown was about to start. Zhou drew his sword and began to speak, but Yihe interrupted with the same confident smile as before, challenging him to come at him with everything he had. Zhou didn't hesitate. He dashed forward, activating the 7 stellar steps technique. His speed was astonishing, while the protagonist remained still, gathering his energy. Then Yihe struck the ground with atomic burst, sending shockwaves across the entire arena. Zhou retreated, realizing that Yihe had been too lazy to look for his real body and instead unleashed a massive attack that hit all of his clones at once. Even with his defensive ability, he knew he couldn't face that kind of power head-on. No warrior his age could. What he was witnessing was a true anomaly. Zhou took a deep breath and changed tactics. If he couldn't fight directly, he would wear him down from a distance. He then awakened his elemental ice dragon lineage and activated Freezing Pulse. The audience screamed in awe as the entire arena filled with ice. The attack engulfed Yihe, trapping him inside a gigantic block of frozen crystal. Many shouted, believing that Zhou had actually defeated the great demon Yihe. The commentator cried that the freezing pulse was so powerful, it had created a real iceberg, freezing the protagonist solid. But after the attack, Zhou felt the toll on his body. Channeling that much icy energy had drained him completely. Suddenly, the commentator urged everyone to look. The ice was melting. A ray of radiation sliced through the frozen wall, shooting straight toward Zhou, who froze in shock, unable to believe it. The protagonist shattered the ice prison effortlessly. Zhou tried to react, raising a wall of ice to defend himself, but the impact destroyed everything, though he barely managed to survive. Yihe stepped calmly from the wreckage, saying that Zhou's dragon of ice had never worked and never would. Apparently, he was the perfect counter to anything cold. Taking a deep breath, he said the gap between their strengths was immeasurable. Enraged, Zhou shouted for Yihe to take his final attack. His ultimate technique, originally meant for Qingzhu. Gathering the last of his power, he formed a colossal sword of pure ice, the soul-annihilating sword intent. The mayor watched in astonishment, recognizing the technique and wondering how someone so young could wield such power. Joe poured his entire soul into the strike and lunged, slashing at the protagonist. Blood splattered, but all he managed was a small scratch on Yihe's hand. The protagonist smirked, saying that when Joe had a better sword, maybe he'd have a slim chance at victory. Desperate, Joe watched his weapon shatter completely. Out of options, he looked at the protagonist and asked what his odds of winning truly were. Yihe laughed and replied that they were probably a little better than becoming successful livestock. Joe finally understood the vast difference between them. Drained, he returned to normal, raised his hand, and surrendered. The commentator shouted with overwhelming excitement that the winner of Ancheng's college entrance final was Yihe. The crowd exploded into cheers, once again hailing the protagonist as an absolute legend. They said everyone had been right from the very beginning. Even though Joe was incredibly strong, he was nowhere near Yihe's level. The match was being broadcast throughout the city, and the comments spread like wildfire. Many viewers said they'd heard that, just a year ago, Yihe had ranked near the very bottom of his class. But now, he stood at the very top, a true symbol of inspiration. Moreover, this year's entrance examination had been on an entirely different level, far surpassing any before it. Because Yihe had won so decisively, he was now being recognized as the strongest champion in the history of the exam, someone no one could ever surpass. The crowd chanted his name over and over as the commentator climbed up to the stage, his voice booming through the speakers for everyone watching the 24th annual city examination. After 3 days of intense battles, he declared, the #1 student had finally appeared. Slightly embarrassed, Yihe gave a faint smile, feeling that he had finally achieved his goal. The commentator brought the microphone closer and remarked that he'd heard Yihe's strength came from a long journey of struggle and perseverance. Now that he had reached the top, perhaps he had something to say. Yihe thought to himself that the commentator was clever, turning a simple question into a subtle trap. But he spoke anyway. He said that above all, he wanted to thank his teacher, the one who never gave up on him even in his darkest moments. It was his teacher who had encouraged him when he had fallen to his lowest point, and thanks to that, he had discovered his true fighting spirit. On the other side of the broadcast, the teacher was watching, tears streaming down his face as he held onto the television, muttering that he didn't deserve such gratitude, calling himself a mediocre instructor who had failed to recognize the boy's potential from the start. Meanwhile, the school director waved at Yihe from the audience, making hand gestures indicating a 2 million reward, but quickly changed his mind and raised it to 10 million, asking Yihe to promote the school during his speech. Seizing the opportunity, Yihe thanked both the institution and the director, saying that without their guidance, he wouldn't have reached this point. Then, gripping the microphone firmly, he raised his hand and shouted that, above all, the most important person to thank was himself, because without his own effort and determination, he would never have come this far. Suddenly, the system appeared before him, congratulating him for earning the title of #1 student. As a reward, he would receive a random model ability. Surprised, Yihe realized that the system had a reward mechanism and grew eager to discover what his new ability would be. After the interview, as he walked through the arena corridors, voices echoed all around. He's finally out! Dozens of people rushed toward him, trying to get another interview, bombarding him with questions about the university, the difficulties of the tournament, and his personal impressions. The protagonist ran to escape, begging them to stop following him, but one reporter caught up and asked an inappropriate question, making him run even faster, saying he didn't have time for that nonsense. After a long chase, Yihe finally reached the basketball gym, panting but relieved to have shaken off the crowd. What truly made him happy, however, was the realization that he wasn't limited to a single combat model. He could gain more abilities through the system. At that moment, a figure appeared beside him, congratulating him on his victory and for achieving first place. Startled, Yihe thought it was another reporter, but the man removed his hat and told him not to be mistaken. He wasn't a journalist, but someone from Huadu. The stranger looked him straight in the eyes and said it was time to discuss the matter of his genetic trait. Tension filled Yihe's chest. He thought there couldn't possibly be any problem with his trait since all his abilities so far had come from his monster model. Still, he wondered if this man somehow knew about his powers, and who exactly he was. The man then asked if Yihe had ever talked with his father about the genetic trait. The protagonist nodded, recalling the inherited memories of the body he now inhabited. Yes, that conversation had indeed taken place. The visitor pulled a folder from his bag and asked if Yihe had never wondered how his father, just a simple taxi driver, could possibly know about something so complex and unrelated to his profession. A sense of unease washed over Yihe as questions began racing through his mind. The man opened an envelope and explained that Yihe's case was special. Because of that, Huadu had decided to make an exception, allowing him to see a confidential document. Driven by curiosity, Yihe took it, sensing that what he was about to read would change his life forever. Inside the envelope, the title read, Prometheus Research Institute. It was a prestigious organization in the field of genetic biology on the Blue Star, but one that had been banned in many countries after a mysterious incident. Most of its leading scientists had disappeared, living under false identities scattered across the world. According to the file, the central project of Prometheus had been the study of genetic traits. As he read, Yihei began to piece things together. It seemed these people believed that his father had been one of the institute's key researchers, and that he himself might have been one of his father's experiments. The man in front of him told him not to worry. The nation wouldn't take any action against him. He was only there to inform him of the truth, as someone directly involved deserved to know. Yihei silently wondered if the man would be offended if he said he wasn't even remotely concerned. The visitor went on, saying that Yihei had been an essential part of the project and that was why they wished to protect him. Feeling a mix of pride and irony, Yihei replied that it might be troublesome for them since famous people tend to attract problems and attention. But society adapts quickly to that sort of thing. The man simply smiled and said he would take his leave for now. Once he was gone, Yihei sighed with relief, happy to finally be alone again. He had earned a generous reward from the entrance exam, a scholarship worth $2 million from the director, an additional $800,000 bonus, and a guaranteed spot at Huadu University. But what truly excited him was the chance to gain a new model ability. Eager, he opened the system's interface and began the draw, unable to contain his curiosity. Suddenly, a surge of violet energy enveloped him, spinning rapidly into a swirling vortex. He watched in awe as a glowing card was chosen, revealing a colossal titan. The system's voice echoed, "Model acquired. Supergiant humanoid. Blood ability, gigantification, 60 meters. Steam ability, mega attack, evolution. Path, immutable humanoid. Compatibility, 1%. Yihei frowned in disappointment. He hadn't expected to receive a supergiant humanoid. But then an idea sparked in his mind. If he could possess more than one model, what if he combined the supergiant humanoid with the Demora model? The result could make him the true king of monsters. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a man answered a call. The person on the other end asked if he was turning down missions for personal reasons. The man confirmed, instructing them to cancel everything. As he hung up, the camera panned to a deep hole in the table, a mark he always left when he lost control. He thought about the report he'd just received regarding his younger brother. It stated that the body hadn't been found in the secret realm, only residual traces marking his last known location. Tests detected faint levels of nuclear radiation. He turned his gaze toward the television, where Yihei's battles were being broadcast. Closing his eyes, he muttered that he had warned his brother to stay out of society, but he hadn't listened. He remembered their mother's dying wish to take care of his little brother. As the news anchor announced that Yihei had won the city's final exam, the man stepped closer to the screen, trembling with laughter, saying that the boy must be a genius, that Huadu University would surely try to recruit him. But then his tone shifted, turning cold. "What a pity," he said. "They would never allow that to happen." Meanwhile, back at Yihei's apartment, the delivery man called out, saying a package had arrived. Yihei picked up the envelope, annoyed. He had been about to leave for the secret realm when the message came. Opening the letter, he read, "Yihei, according to the Huadu Central Research Department's investigation, a new secret realm rift will open at Red Tree Mountain in Ancheng City at 1500 hours. Estimated rank, C or nearby. Would you like to investigate it with me? Signed, Joe." Yihei blinked in disbelief, wondering if Joe lived in the Stone Age. Who even sent letters anymore? He began to suspect that his friend might also have experienced some kind of time regression. Not long after, at Red Tree Mountain, a massive crowd had already gathered. Yihei watched, amazed by the number of people, at least 100. Still, it was expected. A new secret realm rift always drew attention. Suddenly, Joe appeared, smiling warmly, and Yihei returned the greeting with a grin of his own. Joe looked at the protagonist and commented that he seemed even stronger than before. Yihei laughed a little embarrassed, thinking that he hadn't expected Joe to notice. After all, he had spent the prize money from the entrance exam on specialized supplements to increase his compatibility with the supergiant humanoid model to 35%. Lower-level monster models also had certain advantages and could yield faster results. Trying to change the subject, Yihei asked which university his friend planned to attend. Joe replied that he was considering enrolling at Huadu University. Yihei was surprised and said that it seemed they'd be classmates once again. However, he soon noticed something odd in Joe's expression. At that moment, shouts echoed across the clearing. The rift was opening. As the tear in space began to widen, a monstrous creature crawled out from within. The warriors nearby tensed, and one shouted that the passage had finally been opened, ordering everyone to attack and defeat the beast so they could enter the secret realm rift. The fighters rushed forward, weapons blazing, and Yihei quickly realized how dangerous it was to stay exposed outside. He warned Joe that it was too risky. They needed to move. After slaying the beast that guarded the entrance, the group managed to pass through the portal and entered the secret realm of Red Tree Mountain. Inside, Yihei and Joe followed the band of warriors until the protagonist caught a metallic scent in the air. Blood. Suddenly, someone shouted that a whole army of beasts was waiting for them. Chaos erupted as an intense battle broke out. Warriors charged forward, cutting down monsters left and right. Joe joined the fight, activating his bloodline ability and freezing several creatures around him before shattering them to pieces. But then, one beast lunged at him from behind. Before he could react, an atomic explosion struck it, obliterating it instantly. Yihe warned him to watch his back, and Joe thanked him for saving his life. The protagonist sighed and muttered that fighting such weak monsters was hardly worth the effort. Joe turned around, only to see that Yihe had already wiped out every creature nearby. Stunned, he asked if the protagonist had really taken down all those beasts alone. Looking around at the dissolving carcasses, Joe realized Yihe had unleashed a wide-range nuclear radiation attack, a devastating technique that destroyed internal cells from within. Yihe continued eradicating the monsters like they were mere insects. The other warriors stared in disbelief, wondering how the battle had ended so quickly, and asking if there was a high-ranking fighter among them. One of them said no, it wasn't that. It was that the top student of the city's entrance exam was there. Another, confused, said he thought the winner was a martial artist, not someone who could wipe out so many enemies at once. The first snapped irritably, asking if he hadn't seen the broadcast. The man admitted he hadn't. He didn't waste time watching students fight. The other exploded, shouting that the protagonist could probably take on 10 of him at once. Witnessing that power, the group quickly decided to cooperate. Several warriors surrounded Yihe, and the leader commanded everyone to lure monsters toward him. Not long after, shouts rose from the front lines, a signal flare marking that the beast leader had been defeated. The crowd erupted in celebration as the remaining creatures began to retreat. Joe, exhausted, sighed that at least they had survived the first wave. Even so, out of 1,000 initial fighters, only 800 remained, many injured. Then Yihe appeared, carrying an absurd pile of monster cores, asking Joe if there was any way to store them all. Joe, shocked, asked how he'd gathered so many so quickly, but gave up trying to understand. He showed a small ring, explaining that it could store items in a subspace. Yihe's eyes widened in admiration. It was a hyperspatial ring, worth a fortune. He never imagined Joe owned something so rare. At that moment, other warriors shouted excitedly that leader Wu Sen and his team had returned. The crowd cheered, relieved, as the reinforcements arrived. They were the ones assigned to handle higher-level monsters before the rest were overwhelmed. Wu Sen strode through the crowd straight toward Yihe. When he got close, he confirmed that this was indeed the city's top entrance exam student. Introducing himself, he said his name was Wu Sen, leader of Ancheng's Silver Wolf Martial Group. Extending his hand, he explained that he had heard of Yihe's extraordinary performance during the exams and wished to invite him to join the group. If Yihe accepted, he would gain educational privileges and major opportunities for advancement. Wu Sen was even willing to offer an S-rank contract. Gasps rippled through the surrounding warriors. Wu Sen rarely recruited anyone personally, and an S-rank contract was almost unheard of. They murmured among themselves that without a martial group's backing, advancing in the profession was nearly impossible, and the Silver Wolf Group was the most prestigious in the entire Xia Kingdom. Even Huadu University students seldom received S-rank offers. Then, a woman arrived riding a massive tiger, her expression amused. She said now she understood why Wu Sen had rushed over. He was trying to grab the gold first. Looking directly at Yihe, she extended an invitation of her own, to join the Chengda Martial Group. Though smaller than the Silver Wolves, she offered him 15% of the group's monthly resource share, an unheard-of amount. The crowd buzzed in shock. Never before had two group leaders offered such generous terms to a single student. Yihe thanked them politely but declined, saying he wasn't interested in joining any group for the moment. Wu Sen laughed and shook his hand, saying he had expected that answer. Recruiting the top exam student was never going to be easy. He added that it was fine. They could stay friends, and if Yihe ever changed his mind, he'd be welcome anytime. The woman agreed, saying the doors of Chengda would also remain open should he ever reconsider. Yihe replied that he wasn't thinking about it now, but that they could all remain on friendly terms. Joe, watching all this, whispered if the protagonist had just used the same hand he'd shaken theirs with to pick his ear. Yihe answered that no one needed to know. Joe sighed and quickly changed the topic, saying the first wave was over and they had held up well. He suggested that now they should start exploring. The forest was huge and it might be better to reach a higher point to assess the area and form a plan. They took flight, Joe astonished at Yihe's speed. When they reached the mountain peak, they surveyed the vast landscape below. Joe's eyes widened. "What are those?" he asked. Ahead, colossal beasts towered into the sky, each over 100 meters tall. He said he never imagined he'd see creatures that size so close. Yihe, as always, was thrilled, saying he had expected something like this. Though they were still newcomers, in a few years they would be able to face monsters of that scale and explore lands like this without worry. Joe shuddered at his words. Just imagining fighting something like that made his spine go cold. Yet Yihe's grin was wild, almost exhilarated by the danger. Still, that fearless confidence inspired him. The protagonist grew even more excited, shouting that soon he would claim every one of those monsters' cores for himself. Wanting to study the area more closely, Yihe activated his detection ability and noticed something strange. Through his magnetic field, he could sense life all around, except to the southeast, where there was a dead zone, completely devoid of life. That sparked his curiosity. After all, where there's silence, there's mystery. And the bigger the wave, the bigger the prey. Excited, he pointed forward, saying there was a lake in that direction and proposed they investigate. When they arrived, Yihe's eyes lit up even more. There stood Yuli, smiling and greeting him warmly, saying she was finally meeting the top student of the entrance exam and admitting she hadn't expected him to be so strong in person. Joe stared wide-eyed, astonished that Yuli personally knew the boy who had taken first place. Another woman, equally surprised, urged her to introduce him right away, gushing that his fight against the beasts earlier had been incredible. The protagonist stepped closer, asking how long they had been there. Yuli smiled and said they had just arrived. Two of her teammates had gone underwater to explore. Suddenly, a man burst out of the lake, shouting with excitement that they were going to be rich. Yuli hurried to ask what he meant, and the man, still grinning, explained that there was a relic at the bottom of the lake. If they could retrieve it, they'd all become wealthy. Her eyes sparkled as she asked if he was serious. If true, it was an astonishing find. Curious, Yihe asked what kind of relic it was and why they were so thrilled. Joe explained that within secret realms, ancient structures were often discovered, believed to have been built by the native civilizations of the sacred realm, and that such ruins often contained priceless relics. He added that much of modern martial society and even current technologies were derived from these discoveries. At that moment, Yu Yang, irritated by their voices, turned sharply, demanding to know who else was there. Sword in hand, he shouted at them to identify themselves and accused them of following his team. Yuli quickly intervened, asking him to calm down, explaining that the two newcomers were Yihe and Joe, first and second place in the city's entrance exam, both far stronger than most common warriors. She said they'd be joining the group temporarily. Yihe confirmed with a nod, saying they were only there to help explore. Yu Yang narrowed his eyes and asked how the rewards would be divided. Yihe replied that it wasn't a problem. They'd split things according to contribution. Whoever helped more would earn more. Still annoyed, Yu Yang stepped back, muttering that he'd accept it for now, but that it didn't make them friends. As he walked away, he thought about how these two top-ranked students would probably become great warriors someday. Better to avoid conflict and go along with it for now. With everything settled, the group dove into the lake to begin their exploration. Deep underwater, they discovered a cave. Yu Yang told them that after that passage, they would reach the ruins. But as they continued, he began glancing around uneasily. Li Wei wasn't there. He had specifically ordered him to wait at that very spot. A tattooed man suggested maybe Li Wei had found treasure and gone off on his own. Yu Yang pulled out his communicator and tried calling, but there was no response. The group asked if they had seen any trace of monsters or danger earlier. He said no. They had seen nothing and even set traps all around the perimeter, yet none had been triggered. The girl with glasses began trembling, saying this place was far too dangerous, especially with Li Wei missing, and asked if they really should continue. Yu Yang snapped angrily that of course they should. They couldn't waste such an opportunity. If she was scared, she could leave, but if she wanted to get rich, she'd better help. Everyone fell silent watching him. He took the lead again, declaring that since they had decided to stay, they should move forward immediately. The group followed a narrow path, guided by faint footprints on the ground. Yihe frowned and whispered to Joe that something felt wrong. Joe agreed, pointing out that the timing didn't make sense. Yuli had said they'd arrived only 10 minutes earlier, yet Yu Yang and Li Wei had somehow found a cave, explored it completely, and located ruins. It sounded like someone cheating with a game map. Concerned, Joe suggested they turn back, but it was already too late. A glint of anticipation flashed in Yihe's eyes. He was hungry for a fight, and he told Joe to relax, that he had a plan. After a few more minutes of walking, they reached a wide chamber. Thick roots hung down from the ceiling, their surfaces crawling with a faint luminescence. The group looked up and realized that several monster cores were tangled among the roots, long since dimmed after absorbing their energy. They now understood why no beasts had appeared earlier. They had all been devoured. Yuli asked Yu Yang where the relic he'd mentioned was. The girl with glasses began shaking uncontrollably, her voice trembling as she pointed upward, saying that that was Li Wei. His body hung lifeless, completely consumed by the parasitic roots. The two women screamed in horror. Yu Yang fell to his knees, trembling, shouting in disbelief. Where was the relic? Why wasn't anything there? Where had it gone? He kept shouting that nothing made sense, clutching his head as veins bulged beneath his skin. Something was wrong, and his skull began to swell, and he cried out that they had to leave immediately. Suddenly, roots burst from his head. The monster had possessed him, but Yihe reacted instantly, obliterating him with a single atomic blast. The protagonist muttered that he hadn't expected to find such an intelligent creature here. Looking up, he realized they had walked straight into its trap. In an instant, the roots sealed off the entrance, trapping everyone inside. Joe's eyes widened as he recalled something from an old book. If he remembered correctly, this creature was called the demonic branch phantom, a high-level monster. Yuli trembled, saying that such creatures were not like ordinary beasts. With their current power, they didn't stand a chance. Yihe's eyes gleamed coldly as he released his aura and declared that no matter what level it was, he'd crush it all the same. Suddenly, the blocked passage exploded open, and from the smoke emerged a man radiating immense power. He called out Yihe's name, saying he had come only to kill him. The entire group froze. The energy emanating from him was clearly that of a superior level warrior. The protagonist turned, his expression darkening, tired of constantly being targeted. The man glared at him, saying he had heard rumors of someone using nuclear radiation within the Red Tree Mountain's secret realm, and he knew it could only be Yihe. He explained that he had tracked the protagonist by the radiation trail left behind, following him silently to avoid detection, stopping his heartbeat, suppressing his breath, erasing every trace of life. But even then, Yihe had found him and sealed the cave. That, he said, proved Yihe's strength was great enough to have killed his brother from the Huo family. Yihe, confused, asked who this guy even was, saying he'd just appeared out of nowhere talking nonsense. Did they even know each other? Enraged, the warrior shouted for him to stop pretending and go straight to hell, charging forward. But as he leapt, the roots reached for him, and the moment they touched, he realized this was the nest of the demonic branch phantom. Yihe had deliberately lured him here. Furious, he demanded to know the protagonist's plan, hacking through the roots with rapid strikes, but soon noticed that the creature absorbed life energy and released toxins that weakened his body. He growled that if he kept fighting like this, he would lose, accusing Yihe of tricking him. The protagonist rolled his eyes, still baffled, saying this was literally the first time they had met. That only enraged the man further. He shouted that such words infuriated him even more because his true mission had always been to kill Yihe. Then he unleashed an overwhelming burst of energy, striking the ground so hard that the entire cavern began to collapse. Yuli screamed in terror as rocks and roots rained down around them. Yihe shouted for her to get back and gathered a massive amount of radiation, blasting the ceiling apart and opening a hole where water began to flood in. He ordered Yuli and the others to escape through it. The high-level warrior tried to block their exit, lunging forward, but Joe intercepted him, brandishing his soul-damaged sword and shouting that as long as he was there, no one would lay a hand on Yihe. The man sneered, asking if Joe really thought he could stop a superior warrior with that toy. At that moment, Yihe's voice echoed from above. "Then why are you looking that way?" And before the man could react, an atomic explosion fist slammed into him full force, sending him crashing across the chamber. Yihe told Joe to retreat. This enemy was too strong for him at his current level. As the man staggered to his feet, Yihe landed before him, saying coldly that he'd handle the rest. On the surface, Yuli's group broke through the lake, gasping for air, shouting in panic that the demonic branch phantom had gone berserk and was tearing the lakebed apart. Moments later, Joe emerged as well. Yuli, breathless, looked around frantically and asked where the protagonist was. But Joe remained silent, his eyes fixed on the dark, swirling depths below. Suddenly, an immense amount of radiation began to pour out from the lake. A giant figure wrapped in radioactive energy emerged from the water, holding something at the tip of its finger. The high-level warrior who had caused all the chaos was completely carbonized by the radiation. The group watched from the shore, confused, seeing only a colossal silhouette amid the thick smoke. Little by little, the mist cleared, and Yihe appeared at the lake's edge, borrowing some clothes from his companion. After dressing and stepping out of the water, Joe asked what that explosion had been and what they had just witnessed. Yihe replied that it was the warrior's own doing. He had used a plasma bomb to try to destroy everything along with the demonic branches. Joe grew uneasy, saying that a plasma bomb wasn't something easily obtained since it was military equipment. He wondered who that man could be to have something like that, as the explosion had seemed even more powerful than an ordinary bomb. And, besides, he had seen a giant in the smoke. The protagonist tried to brush it off, claiming there had been no giant and that Joe must have been mistaken because of the explosion's flash. Internally, Yihe thought how lucky he was to have hidden it. If anyone found out about his new ability, it would cause serious trouble. He recalled that he had accidentally crushed the warrior and caused everything to implode, having no idea where the body ended up. But at least he'd obtained the core of the phantom of the demonic branches. With the situation resolved, Yuli and her group prepared to leave. She approached and apologized for getting him involved and for making him handle everything alone, promising to repay him once they left the secret realm. Yeho waved it off, saying he'd count the favor she did earlier as payment, and that if she insisted on giving him something, she'd just owe him again. After the group departed, the protagonist looked at Joe and they both laughed, saying it was time to hunt more monsters. 3 days later, at the entrance to the secret realm of the Red Tree Mountain, the two emerged, and were stunned. In just a few days, the area had turned into a city, complete with metal structures and even cargo planes flying overhead. They were amazed by Zia's infrastructure capabilities, calling it insane. Yehe then took out a huge sack of cores and dropped it on the counter. The impact was so strong that the receptionist scolded him, saying he could have broken the table. The protagonist laughed and apologized, explaining that he had too many items and that if they didn't hurry, the process would take too long. She told him not to worry, they were professionals and would handle it quickly. Yehe took a deep breath and began pulling from his spatial ring several heavy sacks full of materials until the last one was finally set down. The startled receptionist asked if he was done. He smiled and confirmed, asking her to finish the counting soon since he needed to buy some medicine. Later, at the Spiritual Medicine Evaluation Center, people were amazed, commenting that the leaf he brought was at least 300 years old, of 7-star quality, and grew in hidden places that even professional herbalists struggled to reach. Others remarked that his luck was absurd. He'd even found a liu flower, the main ingredient for crafting a sea qi pill, and that even the lesser medicines were worth at least 30 million yuan, given the current market shortage and rising prices. They said he could become rich overnight. One of the doctors scolded them, saying it wasn't luck, and that speaking that way was disrespectful. Amid the commotion, the protagonist explained that the white and green magic cores were useless to him, so he planned to sell them. He added that while fighting the Beast Tide, he'd obtained 5 rank 3 monster cores and a high-level green core with golden patterns, the one from the Phantom of the Demonic Branches. After selling everything, the total reached 27,507,000 yuan. He left satisfied, saying he'd sold all the cores and now only needed to deal with the spiritual medicines. Suddenly, a car stopped right in front of Yehe. An older man stepped out and greeted him politely, introducing himself as Li Yutian, the owner of Pinghe Pharmaceuticals. He said he'd heard that the protagonist had obtained a large amount of medicinal materials from the secret realm of the Red Tree Mountain, and that it would be great if he could sell them all to him, promising to pay above market price. Yehe thought that even though his information had gone public, the news spread too quickly, but it didn't bother him, since he needed to sell anyway. The difference was that now he wouldn't have to look for a buyer himself. The deal was completed swiftly. After the purchase, Yutian got back into the car and said that if the protagonist found more medicinal materials in the future, he should come to him without hesitation. The total sale amounted to 7,450,064 yuan. Yehe muttered to himself that even with all that money, he couldn't increase his strength by even 10%. The available cores and genetic options on the market no longer worked well for him. He sighed, realizing that his skill model was too demanding. Blood jade fruits, advanced generic potions, supplements, all extremely expensive, and he couldn't afford them all now. Then he remembered something. There was another way. He recalled martial arts, for during the entrance exam he had defeated Qingshu using only the Demora skill model. But that was nothing compared to the true power of martial arts. He decided that mastering them would be his next step. He ran off, asking Mr. Deng to wait for him. Upon arriving at the #1 high school of the city, he entered the principal's office. The principal greeted him enthusiastically, poured him tea, and even began massaging his shoulders, saying he hadn't expected to see him back so soon. The protagonist asked him not to be so formal, but Deng replied that he was doing so because Yehe was the top student in the entrance exam, a true role model for him, the teachers, and the entire city. Yehe took out a bottle and handed it to the principal, explaining that it was some medicinal wine he'd received from the Pinghe Hall. He stressed that it wasn't a gift, but rather a token of gratitude for the honor of Xia. Deng looked at the bottle, eyes shining, and said in awe that he hadn't expected the protagonist to be not only so powerful, but also such a well-mannered student. Yehe tells the principal that in fact, he would like to learn martial arts and asks if the principal knows anyone who can teach him, since he hasn't entered the university yet and can only ask for his help. Deng replies that he's sure Yehe will be accepted into Huadu University and therefore can wait a little longer, as there's no need to rush. The protagonist insists, saying he needs to become stronger, and Deng finally gives in, saying he can introduce him to someone. After all, Yehe is one of the special students, and as both principal and teacher, it's his duty to help educate them. Yehe starts praising him, saying he's really glad that teachers like him exist in the world, which makes the principal happy and flattered by the compliment. The next afternoon, the protagonist receives a phone call informing him that he got what he had asked for. Yehe thanks him and asks the principal if he can tell him which martial arts family his instructor will come from. As soon as he hears the answer, his eyes widen in shock. The Liu family from An City really wants to teach him? Around An City, 2 people are riding a motorcycle. The woman comments that Ji drives very fast and that it's amazing. Jie smiles, saying that's nothing and he can show her something even more impressive. Suddenly, Yehe appears beside him, warning him not to get distracted while driving at such high speed, because if something happens, people will be sad. Ji panics and starts yelling, cursing the protagonist for scaring him nearly to death and asking how he dares to compete in speed while riding a bicycle. He accelerates the motorcycle even more, saying that no matter how strong Yehe is, he'll never beat him in speed. The woman gets even more excited, saying this is way cooler. Yehe watches, slightly annoyed, until they hear an explosion behind them. In the blink of an eye, the protagonist shoots past them like a missile, saying they'll meet again soon before vanishing from sight. Ji starts trembling, wondering since when a bicycle could reach that kind of speed, while the woman, equally amazed, says he was practically faster than a plane. A bit further ahead, Yihe has already arrived and is surprised by how wealthy the martial arts family is. Their mansion is stunning. He can also sense extremely powerful presences through his magnetic field. Qingzhu slowly opens the gate, greets him, and invites him in. The protagonist approaches and asks if she's sad to see him again. She says no, and he changes the question, asking if that means she's happy. Qingzhu looks a little embarrassed and says she only greeted him because her mother asked her to, then tells him to stop talking nonsense and come inside. They walk toward the house, and as soon as they reach the main hall, she shouts that the protagonist has arrived. A woman comes down the stairs to greet him warmly and welcome him. She is Qin Lan, the leader of the Liu family and Qingzhu's mother. The protagonist is stunned by her beauty. After the examinations at the Liu family's residence, Qingzhu goes to her mother to explain herself, but Qin Lan tells her not to be nervous, saying she's already watched the video of her fight with the protagonist and praises her performance. However, she points out that Yihe's strength is beyond comprehension, and even if it were the Huadu University entrance exam, he would still be the strongest, so she shouldn't feel guilty. Qingzhu remains silent, head lowered, while her mother continues, explaining that her younger brother's talent is limited, and he can't carry on the family's legacy. That's why the future of their generation lies in Qingzhu's hands. She's the only one capable of taking on that responsibility. Qinlan holds her daughter's face, telling her she's a beautiful girl. She then explains that, unfortunately, since Qingzhu's father died very early, their family currently has no martial master, which forced them to retreat to An City. She emphasizes that if a powerful family wants to marry Qingzhu, the girl will have no right to refuse, meaning it would also mark the end of the Liu family's independence, as they'd become supporters of a stronger clan. Qinlan makes it clear that because of this, she hopes her daughter will marry the protagonist. Qingzhu is shocked and embarrassed by her mother's words. Not knowing what to say, Qinlan continues saying that Yihe is a very good person, with exceptional talent and a clearly bright future, and as far as she can tell, someone very ambitious. Qingzhu tries to speak but is left speechless, and her mother reassures her that she doesn't have to answer now. For the moment, the only thing she needs to do is get along well with Yihe. Back in the present, the matriarch of the family welcomes the protagonist, who bows respectfully and presents her with a small gift. Qinlan gets straight to the point, saying she heard from the principal that he wants to learn martial arts. Yihe confirms, and she informs him that Qingzhu will be his guide for the time being. The protagonist looks surprised and suspicious, wondering why the matriarch agreed so easily. Qinlan takes the gift, walks past him, and explains that her daughter will take him to the martial arts pavilion. Since nothing can be taken out from there, he'll be able to stay inside all day. She emphasizes that there are 3 supreme martial arts techniques at the back of the pavilion, and whether he manages to learn them or not will depend entirely on him. Yihe shows respect and thanks the Liu family for everything they're offering. The matriarch is impressed, thinking he's expressing gratitude to the entire family rather than just to her personally. To her, that feels like a promise of commitment, which is a very good sign. Because of that, she hopes to see him again in the future. The atmosphere between the 3 turns a little awkward as Qinlan keeps observing the protagonist, finding him an intelligent young man. The more she looks at him, the more she likes him. Meanwhile, Yihe notices her gaze and feels puzzled, wondering why she's looking at him in such a strange way. Qingzhu just watches, confused as to why the two are staring at each other for so long. Sometime later, while walking down a hallway toward the pavilion, Yihe notices something odd and asks Qingzhu why she's avoiding him. The girl starts trembling and nervously denies it, saying she's not doing anything. He approaches from behind and, looking closely at her, asks if she's really telling the truth. Embarrassed, Qingzhu yells, asking why he's coming so close. Yihe steps back a bit and laughs. After a short walk, they reach the end of the corridor, where Qingzhu explains that the wall ahead is made of huali stone, a special material from the secret realm that can dissolve almost any attack without breaking. Yihe studies it for a moment and asks if he can punch the wall. Confused, Qingzhu tells him he can try, but quickly starts thinking his brain must work in a really strange way. Who in their right mind would punch a wall just to test it? He gathers energy in his hand, and when she realizes it, she turns her face away, saying he's using the same shining punch technique from last time, which brings back some unpleasant memories. Yihe then strikes the wall with full force, but nothing happens. He looks at his hand, confused, and says it felt very strange, as if he had punched into a sea of mud, while 90% of his strength was absorbed. Qingzhu starts laughing and tells him to stop fooling around, saying she wants to show him the martial arts already, thinking to herself that even the prodigy of the city loses sometimes. The two continue to the storage area, and she opens the door, revealing everything inside. Qingzhu explains that all martial arts are divided into categories like body movements, defense, training, and sword techniques, among others, and that if he wants to learn any of them, he just needs to use his identification card. Yihei then asks about the supreme techniques, so she takes him to another door explaining that those arts are kept in a smaller stone room that can only be accessed with the card. She warns him that he won't be able to comprehend them in just one day, maybe only a little, and admits she doesn't think her mother's permission is necessarily a good thing, since he won't be able to absorb everything right away. That's why it would be better to start with the basics and learn more suitable techniques first. Yihei steps closer again and smiles, asking if she's worried about him. Slightly annoyed, Qingzhu thinks she just wants him to shut up, and replies that there's no need to worry. She knows what she's talking about. The protagonist insists, saying that if he's going to learn something, he wants to start with the strongest one, and if he didn't have the courage to try, he would have stayed home. He points to the door and asks if it's also made of black power stone. Qingzhu starts typing the code, explaining that it's a secret chamber that protects the family's most valuable martial arts, and that the black coloration shows the stone's extreme quality. As the door opens, she continues explaining that the Liu family has been collecting these high-level stones since her great-grandfather's time, specifically to build walls as secure as this one. Suddenly, the lights turn on, revealing several vaults. Qingzhu continues the tour, explaining that these aren't martial arts one can learn just by looking. They must be felt through the mark left by their creator. If he can't sense that mark, or if it conflicts with his own emotions, he won't be able to learn anything, because these techniques are alive. It's not the user who chooses them, but they who must choose the user. Yihei starts getting excited again and smiles, saying that this is perfect because there's a martial art called bone-cutting evil strike that he wants to learn. When he opens the vault, he freezes in surprise and with a trembling voice says that it's not a martial arts manual but a completely strange statue. Sitting in front of it, he stares intently and wonders if this is what it means to feel the mark, because if so, then he's already entered its world. He remembers the moment he opened the vault and saw the statue for the first time. Qingzhu explained that it wasn't just a statue, since paintings, weapons, or even simple tools could carry a martial mark. That's the true mystery of martial masters. Only they can imprint their art onto an object that lasts for generations. After finishing her explanation, she turns to leave, saying that from now on, he's on his own. Confused, Yihei asks why she's leaving and if she's not even going to explain how to learn martial arts from an object. She only replies that he must feel the mark, and if it's his destiny, he'll surely succeed. Not understanding anything, he lies down in front of the vault, wondering if everything really depends on fate. In the observation room, Qingzhu watches with irritation, muttering that she already knew he would do something exactly like that. The protagonist, meanwhile, reflects that this so-called martial mark must be some kind of spiritual world, but since he doesn't yet possess any martial chi, he has no idea how to activate it. At that moment, his nuclear reaction begins to manifest, meaning that at least a small trace of energy is present. The system appears, informing him that the user's consciousness has been detected and transported into a new space to prevent death, and that his spiritual body has been blessed. Yihei cheers, saying that at least the system works there too. Suddenly, a man appears behind him, laughing, and says that only a true man can learn his martial arts. Otherwise, he'd rather let everything rot into oblivion. With a threatening gaze, the man demands that Yihei prove he's a worthy man deserving of that power. Yihei is startled, realizing that the man looks exactly like the statue. The mysterious figure begins to speak of a storm that is approaching, and says that when it arrives, countless spirits will pay for the night, and it will be up to the protagonist to protect the temple. He emphasizes that Yihei must not allow the bodhisattva to be corrupted by evil spirits, and if he succeeds, he will receive the teaching of a powerful ability. But if he fails, he'll lose his sanity, be devoured by the spirits, and never again be able to learn any martial art. He warns that if Yihei feels afraid, there's still time to retreat. Yihei remains still, observing his surroundings until drops of water begin to fall on his face. He asks if it's raining, and at that instant he realizes the trial has already begun. Drawing his sword, countless evil spirits appear before him. With an empty, unwavering gaze, he faces them without hesitation, cutting them down one after another. He shouts that it was obvious this challenge wouldn't let him fight barehanded and insists there must be something deeper hidden in this place, something craving battle. Driven by adrenaline, he leaves the temple and charges into the sea of spirits, fighting like a true demon. The statue's guardian watches from his seat, saying that those spirits were summoned by his master and that by leaving the temple, the only protected place, the protagonist has essentially signed his own death warrant. He sighs, remarking that another fool has come for the challenge since, with each generation, people only seem to get worse, and every time he has to rise to collect their corpses. However, when one of the spirits tries to attack Yihei from behind, nothing happens. Shocked, the guardian stares closely, wondering in disbelief why the evil spirits can't even touch the young man. Yihei looks at his own hand and comments that since this is a spiritual world, perhaps the system can protect him from that type of attack as well. Overcome by an uncontrollable thirst for battle, he starts laughing loudly, shouting that it feels like he has an invincible body in there, and keeps advancing, annihilating everything in his path. The Guardian remains stunned, unable to comprehend what's happening before his eyes, since the boy isn't being affected by the effects of the martial mark, something that should be impossible. Yehe hears him and replies that actually there's no special reason for it. He's just someone who works hard and studies a lot. As the spirits continue to approach, the statue's guardian admits it's a good excuse, but adds that since it's clear the protagonist can handle all those spirits with extreme ease, he'll keep his promise and grant him a skill. Though whether Yehe can accept it or not will depend entirely on him. Suddenly, a loud crash echoes. As a pit opens beneath the now shattered statue, Yehe steps closer and the statue's voice explains that within that pit lies all the evil energy it cultivated during its lifetime, the technique known as flesh and bone evil art, and that the young man can, before it can even finish speaking, Yehe jumps straight into the pit. The spirit gets irritated but soon laughs, saying it's fine. After all, this is the first time someone with such a bold personality has appeared. In his prime, that man had been a hero who purified S-rank secret realms, living and dying by the power of the flesh and bone evil art. As he aged, his chi and blood began to weaken, and the evil spirits he carried lost control, killing countless people around him. The only way to stop the massacre was to end his own life, and before dying, he transferred his soul into the martial mark, sealing his technique within the statue. Though the evil spirits were suppressed along with him, it was not something an ordinary martial artist could withstand, and if Yehe fails to control them, it will mean he's unworthy of learning the flesh and bone evil art. Meanwhile, in the observation room, Qingzhu and her mother watch in horror as something begins to happen to the protagonist. Qingzhu yells in panic, asking what's going on. She suddenly stands up, staring at the screen, and comments that when Yehe first fell asleep, he seemed to be smiling as if having a pleasant dream, but now he's writhing in pain, even bleeding. Qinlan explains that Qingzhu's grandfather once obtained that martial art by chance, and in his final days tried to practice it, but was rejected by the statue and suffered severe internal injuries. Since then, no one in the Liu family has ever been able to master it. Because the power of that technique is immense, the pain in acquiring it must be as well. And since the protagonist chose the flesh and bone evil art, Suddenly she stops talking, eyes wide in disbelief. Yehe simply wakes up, as if nothing had happened. Qingzhu laughs and tells her mother that it seems his attempt to learn that martial art went a bit differently. The matriarch stays silent, frozen by the anomaly before her. Inside the spiritual world, Yehe bows respectfully to the statue in gratitude for the teaching, calmly absorbing the evil spirits around him. The statue remarks that the protagonist is the most talented person he has ever encountered in his entire life, and that perhaps Yehe will uncover the truth about the secret realms, a mission the Liu family has never been able to accomplish. Because of that, he decides to entrust everything to Yehe. The young man laughs, saying he's not that talented, since he basically cheated during the trial. Even so, all the power of the flesh and bone evil art now belongs to him, and though his system stats haven't increased, he has completely mastered the technique, doubling his combat power at the very least. Shortly after, Qingzhu and Qinlan rush into the room to check on him. The matriarch anxiously asks if he managed to learn it. Yehe smiles and replies that he learned everything there was to learn. Qinlan is shocked, shouting and asking how that's possible, since everyone in their family who ever tried to master that art remained unconscious for at least a week with their souls trapped inside the martial mark. Yet he was gone for only a few hours, or perhaps even less. She stares at him, unable to believe he truly mastered the flesh and bone evil art. Yehe acts naturally, and Qingzhu looks at him, thinking that people often call her a genius, but she's nothing compared to that monster. The protagonist notices their doubt and says that apparently they don't believe him, so he'll give them a small demonstration. He releases all his power, looking like a true demon king as waves of energy and evil spirits surge around him. He explains that these are the spirits he gained within the martial marks realm, and if he had to compare it to something, he'd say it's like a game bonus, capable of amplifying his energy and strength even further. Qingzhu stands frozen, saying that his power is truly incredible, unlike anything she's ever seen. Qinlan, on the other hand, almost melts, gazing at him with admiration and saying in a soft, enchanted tone that he really is an extraordinary man. Yehe feels a bit awkward, thinking that the lady should probably be more discreet, especially with her daughter standing right there, and that he doesn't want to end up being compared to a prime minister. Excited by his progress, Qingzhu asks if he would like to learn other supreme martial arts since there's still plenty of time left. Qinlan brings a hand to her face, thinking her daughter must be pretending to be stupid. After all, not long ago she said she didn't want to marry the protagonist, and now she's practically offering him all of the family's greatest treasures for free. Although the matriarch is already betting everything on Yehe and even considering accepting him as a son-in-law, she knows they can't just hand everything over to him at once. The protagonist, however, politely declines, saying there's no need, as the flesh and bone evil art is more than enough for now. He adds that he needs to rest since he has things to take care of at home and is exhausted. Chin-lan, still clearly interested in him, replies that it's fine and he can leave whenever he wants. But she recalls the maid mentioning that he arrived by bicycle and asks if he knows how to drive, offering one of the family's cars for him to use. Yihe thinks for a moment and says that a motorcycle like that idiot's seems way cooler, then asks if they have one to lend him. The matriarch laughs, confirming that they do, and asks if he really prefers a motorcycle, noting that his tastes are surprisingly similar to her younger son's, before offering him one from the boys' collection. Meanwhile, outside, Jie is walking across the property, commenting that he heard his mother brought in some incredibly strong guy to train there, and that he's eager to meet him personally. He says his sister is talented and beautiful, a rare twin born only once every few hundred years, and that she shouldn't get involved with just anyone. At the same time, he grows irritated remembering that strange guy on the bicycle who sped past him earlier, scared off the girl he was flirting with, and hopes he never runs into him again. But suddenly, the protagonist roars past him on one of the family's motorcycles. Ji turns around, nearly in tears, shouting in outrage, asking if that isn't the exact same guy from before, and why on earth he's riding one of his bikes. By nightfall inside his house, Yihe is preparing his meal and mutters that the monster core he ate last time didn't taste very pleasant. So this time he'll pour some sauce over it and start with the blue one. The system appears and reports, User Yihe, current physical percentage 23.8, model Demora Wild Trace, compatibility 21%, model Superhumanoid Giant, compatibility 85%, available points. Yihe looks satisfied, noting that he's managed to improve his stats and even gained some bonus points. He remembers that the last time he used the giant model in the secret realm, he reached nearly 50 meters in height, but compared to the monsters there, colossal as mountains, he was still small. Determined, he decides he must become even bigger and allocates all available points to the giant model. He then picks up the branch monster's core and declares that it's time to consume it. The moment he swallows it, an enormous surge of energy spreads throughout his body, radiating across the entire room. The system appears again, stating, Model, Dimora Wild Trace. After absorbing the genetic material of a plant-type life form, a special mutation has been created. Would you like to accept the model mutation? Yahi is stunned, realizing he's unlocked a new mutation, meaning his skill model can now gain new attributes. He reflects that if it's positive, it'll be amazing, but if it comes with drawbacks, it could be dangerous. Even so, he decides to accept, saying that it doesn't matter. He'll find out what it is by trusting his own luck. Another wave of energy erupts, and the system congratulates him for unlocking the S rank of the ability model. Yihe watches in awe as the system continues. When the Demora Wild Trace model reaches 100% compatibility, there will be a 2% chance of evolving into Demora, Star of the Universe. He gets excited, repeating the name and saying that Star of the Universe already sounds ridiculously powerful, though he still needs to reach maximum compatibility, and for that, he must focus entirely on Demora. Suddenly, he notices something strange outside the house. The intense glow makes him wonder if some kind of terrorist attack is happening nearby. Outside, the army has taken over the city, shouting orders to seal every exit from the park and let no one escape, demanding that soldiers search every corner for something, or someone. Inside, Yihe remains seated calmly, watching all the commotion outside and remarking that the owner of the house is an antisocial type, so no one would visit him at this hour. Besides, he hasn't ordered anything or expected anyone, which makes him wonder who could possibly be out there. He turns around and asks the woman if she knows who it is, seeing her standing by the window with a teasing smile. She comments that, judging by the situation, he really isn't an ordinary martial artist. Her plan was to slip in quietly, leave something behind, and perform a bit of mind manipulation on him. However, since she's been discovered, she warns that he'll have to suffer a little, advising him not to try running away. Yihe merely lowers his head and calmly replies that it doesn't really matter. He's already saved enough money and can just buy another house. The woman frowns, confused, asking what he's talking about. Slowly standing up, the protagonist tells her she's completely misunderstood, because it's not him who's trapped in there with her, it's her who's trapped with him. Outside, chaos erupts as an intense battle unfolds. Guards shout that they've found the target and must capture it immediately. A severely injured man, Zhou Yi, yells to Yimei that she must take the golden gene away, declaring that he'll stay behind to cover her escape. Laughing, he unleashes his power, saying that sacrificing his life is his best choice, as he activates the secret technique Burning Blood. Suddenly, a colossal wave of energy bursts through Yihe's house window, as if a Kamehameha had just been fired. Something crashes down near the guards, triggering a devastating shockwave. They back off in fear, asking if there's another enemy in the area. Zhou Yi, burned all over, looks at Yimei and asks why her white battlesuit now looks charred. He reminds her that he's risking his life to help, and demands to know why she's just lying there. Yimei replies that she managed to plant the item in the right place and that they must retreat immediately. She throws a smoke bomb and the two vanish into the sewers. Sometime later, in an abandoned and remote place, they regroup. Yimei looks around and sighs in relief, saying they finally managed to shake off the guards. Zhou Yi, impressed, comments that her nanotech armor's performance is remarkable since it repaired itself so quickly. Suddenly, Yihei's voice echoes through the room. He appears before them, calling Yimei Kitty and asking why she broke into his house. With a wild gleam in his eyes, hungry for a fight, he tells them they probably haven't realized their mistake yet. They chose to invade a random house, but it just so happened to be his. That means they'll have some fun tonight. Zhou Yi panics, shouting in disbelief and demanding to know how he found them. Yihei explains that he tracked the nuclear energy radiating from Yimei's body, but says he doesn't feel like talking, and rushes forward with a savage grin, saying it's the perfect time to test his new ability. Zhou Yi realizes he can't dodge and raises his defense, but the attack is so powerful that one of Yihei's evil spirits pierces straight through his body, making him spit blood. Not satisfied, Yihei lands another brutal punch that slams him against the wall. Yimei watches in awe, remarking that his strength is unbelievable and asking where he learned such martial arts. Yihei replies that he's a disciple of Emperor Guangla. Yimei frowns, confused, never having heard that name before, thinking she'd never imagined someone this strong living in such a small city. Zhou Yi, enraged, shouts at Yihei not to get cocky and unleashes his full power, revealing that he's also a rank 6 martial artist, not someone a mere disciple could defeat. Charging forward, he prepares to fight while the protagonist, consumed by the thrill of battle, grins even wider, saying that now things are getting interesting. Yimei silently moves in from behind, confident that Yihei has no idea her nanotech armor has an almost perfect stealth mode. Certain that he's distracted fighting Zhou Yi, she prepares for a sneak attack. But before she can even move closer, Yihei raises a single finger without looking back, and a devastating wave of energy explodes outward, striking her directly and hurling her against the wall. In a cold tone, he simply tells her not to get in the way. Furious, Zhou Yi curses his partner, calling her useless for failing even a surprise attack, and declares that he'll have to finish this himself. He charges with everything he has, while Yihei keeps laughing, taunting him to try. When their attacks collide, a shockwave shakes the ground, but to Yihei's surprise, his opponent withstands the blow without backing off. He frowns and asks how Zhou Yi's defense suddenly became so high. Zhou Yi smirks arrogantly and reveals that his true form has extremely tough skin and a rhino horn, mocking Yihei and asking if he really thinks he can still win. He explains that not only has his defense skyrocketed, but his offensive power has also greatly increased. With a feral roar, he lunges forward, unleashing a devastating strike. But before the impact can land, a colossal explosion engulfs the entire field. Even surrounded by fire and destruction, Zhou Yi keeps charging ahead, screaming furiously for the protagonist to die. After the attack, silence takes over the place. Zhou Yi watches the cloud of dust ahead and says that no matter how confident the protagonist is, he still can't defeat him. However, when the dust begins to settle, Zhou Yi realizes that his opponent has vanished. He turns around startled and sees a humanoid giant standing beside him. Terror fills him as he wonders whether that thing is a demonic beast or if the protagonist has transformed. Before he can figure it out, Yihei launches his attack. Zhou Yi dodges the first blow, but the protagonist keeps advancing relentlessly. At that moment, his giant anthropomorphic form has an average physical attribute between 238 and 294. Yimei watches as her companion takes the hits and, terrified, admits she was an idiot for messing with that man, realizing that if things continue like this, Zhou Yi will be beaten to death. Unable to flee, she decides to fight. She quickly climbs one of the buildings and, with a leap, throws a wire that wraps around the giant's head, shouting that it's a molecular line made with her nanotech equipment, strong enough to cut through stone itself. Even transformed into a giant, he would still have the same human weaknesses. Using all her strength, Yimei pulls the wire and decapitates the giant. The head falls beside her and she sighs in relief, asking if it finally worked. Suddenly, Yihei starts gathering energy in his mouth, and Yimei trembles in fear, saying that Guy is a real monster. A devastating blast tears through everything ahead, crossing the sky, and the last thing Yimei sees is an endless blue light. Back in human form, the protagonist emerges from within the giant's head and walks toward Zhou Yi, who is wounded and leaning against the wall. Yihei says it's his turn now. Zhou Yi, powerless, calls him a monster, and Yihei replies that it's only natural for those who kill to be ready to die. The attacks continue until, before dying, Zhou Yi says that if he's going to die, he'll take the protagonist with him. He reveals that the woman Yihei just eliminated had hidden something in his house, the so-called golden gene. With his body torn apart, he laughs uncontrollably, shouting that it now belongs to the protagonist and that he will be hunted for eternity. Zhou Yi provokes him further, saying he'll be waiting in hell before being finished off by Yihe, who declares he runs from nothing and no one and tells him to shut up. Looking around, the protagonist notices the destruction and remarks that the police are probably already on their way and that he needs to clean up the mess. Seeing the massive hole he blew through the building, he admits he went overboard. Later that night, back in his apartment, Yihe sends a message to Qinlan asking how things are with the police. She replies that for now, everything's fine, but the atmosphere is tense, and he should keep quiet until classes start at Huadu. Yihe tells her not to worry, reminding her that he knows how to take care of himself. He tosses his phone onto the bed and mutters to himself that it was good he talked to Qinlan before the police arrived, because with the nuclear energy he left at the scene, they wouldn't have let the case slide easily. Holding a vial in his hand, he wonders if this is the golden gene his enemies mentioned. He recognizes the symbol on the vial, the same one he saw in the Prometheus file received from someone in Huadu. It was the logo of Laserbird, a biotech company. Apparently, those two people had stolen the vial and were on the run. But in that idiot's final words, they ended up dumping the problem onto him. Yihe looks at the hole in the wall and decides it's better to spend the night in a hotel before figuring out what to do. The next day, in the Rank B secret realm in the inner region of Swan Lake, a group of adventurers had just finished clearing out some monsters. A woman with a braid asks her companion how the loot was, and he replies that it wasn't bad. He made some profit. Suddenly, a thunderous noise echoes through the area, and the woman, startled, calls for the captain, saying something's wrong. When everyone turns around, they're horrified by what they see. A massive horde of monsters has begun to gather, and among them emerges a colossal creature advancing toward the group. The sky grows dark, the air heavy, and the pressure around them changes drastically. A Rank 5 supreme beast, known as the Sinful-Eyed Bloodwolf, has appeared. The adventurers panic and start running, shouting that they must warn the military immediately because a supreme beast leading an entire horde is something capable of wiping out a city. They decide it's urgent to contact the martial masters, but as they flee, they can't understand the reason for this attack. Supreme beasts rarely leave their territories. So why were they invading a low-level zone? One of the monsters that had just risen glares at the group and lets out a deafening roar. Several stones begin to float and shoot violently toward them. The adventurers run as fast as they can while one of them tries to reach someone on the radio, shouting that there's an emergency at Swan Lake. A supreme beast has appeared, and the horde is spreading rapidly, requiring immediate reinforcements. Before he can finish the message, a stone strikes him square in the chest. On the other end, the operator confirms the appearance of the supreme beast and calls for an immediate response, but only silence follows. Amid the chaos, the sinful-eyed Bloodwolf rises, letting out a grotesque laugh, and commands all the monsters to advance. A portal opens before them, revealing the city on the other side. The sky darkens above the buildings and the general alarm sounds. A massive horde of monsters is approaching from the Swan Lake secret realm toward the city. Time until impact, 20 minutes. Military forces are dispatched to the area and all nearby martial artists are summoned to the front lines, along with anyone capable of fighting. Panic spreads among the population. People rush desperately toward the subways while officers struggle to control the crowd, urging calm and announcing that special trains have been reserved exclusively for children and students. The future of the city, which must survive if Anne is to fall. In the mayor's office, the man, overwhelmed by despair, asks his assistant if reinforcements have been requested and whether more troops are on their way. She replies that the problem isn't limited to their city. The horde is large enough to cause mass destruction, and even neighboring cities without proper defenses are scrambling to prepare. Mayor Qing asks about Huadu and whether they can send a martial master, but the woman reminds him that Guanshan, the neighboring city, is facing an outbreak of creatures from an S-rank realm, and several elite members have already been dispatched there. Qing realizes there's no time to waste. The battle for Anne has already begun and they will have to fight alone. Meanwhile, at the Chu Dojo, Yihe and Zhou are training together. The protagonist lands a powerful punch on his friend, sending him flying backward. Smiling, he remarks that Zhou has improved since he was able to withstand that blow. Sweating, Zhou asks since when Yihe started using the black turtle style. He replies that it's been about a month, but he's still perfecting it, then teases his friend, saying maybe Zhou's the one who got weaker. Zhou fires back, insisting he hasn't weakened. It's Yihe who's gotten absurdly stronger. Suddenly, a loud boom echoes outside. Zhou, confused, asks what's going on. His phone starts vibrating and an evacuation alert appears on the screen. We are prioritizing the boarding of Ann City students. Proceed immediately to the airport for flights B521 and D753 or to the station for train A423. Evacuate immediately. Yihe looks at the message and asks if his friend really plans to leave. Zhou smirks and says that with all that talent, the protagonist could easily run far from here. But then, taken over again by his fighting spirit, He begins to grin wildly, eyes gleaming like a madman, and taunts Yihei, saying he's talking too much, asking since when he's had such a sharp tongue, and adds excitedly that since they're staying, they might as well have a little fun before it all begins. At the Liu family mansion, Qingzhu approaches her mother and says she wants to join the defense line to help the people. The matriarch stares at her with worry and asks what real chances she has of coming back alive, reminding her that there are around 30,000 active martial artists in the city, and counting retired veterans and volunteers, maybe 50,000. Yet, against a horde of that scale, it's like being on a boat about to be swallowed by a tsunami. She says that An City simply isn't equipped to handle something like this, as a supreme beast exists on another level of power. Only martial masters could stand a chance against it. More than that, she emphasizes that her daughter's life doesn't belong only to her, but to the entire Liu family. Overcome by anger, Qingzhu stands up and declares that a martial family that doesn't fight monsters isn't worthy of surviving. Then she slams the door, leaving her mother alone in silence. With no alternative, the matriarch calls Aunt Hang and orders her to prepare everything for leaving the city. Hang asks what they should do about the boy named Yihei. After a brief silence, the matriarch replies simply to send him a message and let him decide for himself. Meanwhile, in the secret realm of Swan Lake, an entire army gathers, ready for battle. Among the warriors, a few veterans exchange heartfelt words. A gray-haired man mentions that he's already 60 and shouldn't even be there. But another laughs, saying that after 20 years, he finally gets to fight alongside his old comrade again. A frontline soldier approaches and jokes, reminding him it's been 20 years since his friend lost his leg in that battle. He asks old Zhang if when all this is over, he plans to live with his son and retire in a fancy neighborhood. But Zhang laughs and replies that he won't. He'll stay right there, sitting in the square and playing chess, because he was born in that city and that's where he'll die. The young generation and the old veterans march side by side, showing the strength and pride of An City. At the entrance to the secret realm, the army is already in position. The commander shouts that they are the city's last line of defense and cannot allow a single monster to pass through the portal. Mayor Qing, present at the site, announces that about 60% of the military forces and all available martial artists have already entered the secret realm. He explains that the Vanguard's mission is to gather information about the beasts, their strength, numbers, and rankings, and that they must return alive to report everything. Suddenly, a man staggers into view, covered in blood, crawling until he collapses on the ground. The mayor rushes to him and calls for immediate medical aid. With what little strength he has left, the warrior raises his hand and hands over a blood-stained flash drive, saying it contains all the battle data from the Vanguard unit. Desperate, Qing asks where the others are. With a trembling voice, the man replies that they're all dead. Tears welling up in his eyes, he says the beasts crushed the entire battalion, leaving not even pieces of his fallen comrades behind. He mentions the black-eyed ape, saying that if it hadn't been for him, at least 100 men might have survived. Before anyone can react, a massive boulder shoots through the portal and crashes into one of the nearby buildings, debris falling onto the mines scattered on the ground. The mayor realizes the danger and shouts that the enemies are trying to trigger the mines. A chain of explosions shakes the battlefield. The commanders confirm it's a direct attack from the secret realm and order all available firepower to be launched at the portal. The weapons roar, filling the air with smoke and flashes. However, the mayor notices something strange. The monsters aren't coming out. That can only mean they're trying to weaken the human forces from a distance using coordinated tactics. He's shocked and asks since when those beasts started using strategies like humans. Then, more massive stones burst out of the portal. The commander shouts that they're under attack again, but this time, the number of projectiles is even greater. The stones streak across the field, smashing into the army, destroying equipment, vehicles, and barricades. One of the soldiers hears a noise behind him, turns around, and before he can react, he's torn apart by one of the monsters that finally begins to emerge from the portal, marking the start of true hell. The battle between them erupts, and the mayor yells that those boulders are like cannon fire, tearing through the rear line, so they can't let them get any closer and must destroy them before they hit their targets inside the secret realm. The ape leader begins clapping and laughing, saying this is perfect, the humans won't last long, and orders his monster soldiers to keep fighting until every human is wiped out. The clash between the two armies grows ever more intense, with the monsters gaining the upper hand and annihilating everything and everyone ahead of them. A bit farther away, on top of a building, the protagonist watches everything and wonders what will become of that city after this day. Annoyed, he mutters that just when he was counting on the city, this had to happen. And because of that, he won't let the monsters destroy everything they've fought to build. He leaps from the building and merges with his beast. Meanwhile, Jinyuan looks at Zhuan in awe, saying he never disappoints, since he's already taken down 5 monsters on his own. Xiaoling starts boasting, saying they're getting too cocky for defeating low-ranked beasts, and asks Zhuan if he's seen the city's #1, calling him a joke. Zhou approaches, and everyone is shocked to see a blue core in his hand, asking if he really took down a rank 3 monster alone. Zhou replies that he honestly didn't expect to run into them there, Apparently, they didn't evacuate either. He adds that his parents are martial artists and are fighting out there, so as their son, he can't just leave. Zhuan shouts for him to look behind, and Zhou sees a tank being hurled straight at him. The battle continues with the monsters still having the advantage. Zhuan asks who threw that tank, and Zhou draws his sword, slicing it cleanly in half with a single strike. Xiaoling looks back and says it must have been that thing, a lord-level monster that just came out of the portal. Zhou tells them to calm down and notes that it's not a logical ranked beast. Its size and aura don't match. The creature attacks and Zhou freezes, realizing it might be an elite-ranked beast. However, a blue lightning bolt suddenly strikes the massive monster, knocking it to the ground. When the monster tries to strike back, the protagonist, standing atop its head, easily blocks the attack and, with a grin, remarks that the creature has terrible breath. The beast attempts to hit him again but fails. Yihi pries open the monster's mouth and asks how many people it has devoured, saying it's filthy and that he'll clean it up properly with his nuclear blast. He then obliterates the monster completely from the inside out. Zhuan points out that the demonic beasts are fighting among themselves and that they should leave while they're distracted. Xiaoling tells him to wait, saying that person is Yihei. Xuan doesn't believe that the little beast is actually the protagonist, but Zhou confirms it, stating that with him there, the city might still survive this attack. Excited for even greater battles, the protagonist tells Zhou he'll leave that area to him and go help the others. He flies up and from above the battlefield uses his scanning ability to locate the area with the most beasts. Once he finds it, he heads straight toward it. A demon rhinoceros charges at the soldiers, who try to shoot, but one of them shouts that the rifles are useless. They'll have to use bayonets. They all draw their swords and rush forward but are defeated almost instantly. The monsters continue advancing, slaughtering all the humans. A soldier yells to the captain that they must retreat because they can't hold out any longer, reminding him that they're just ordinary soldiers and can't fight those monsters. However, the captain refuses to abandon his post, insisting they must at least take down one beast. Even if they die, their duty is to save the civilians. Suddenly, evil spirits begin flooding the battlefield. A confused soldier asks what's happening and whether some martial artist is behind it. The spirits attack the demon rhinoceros, which is struck by a devastating nuclear blast and collapses dead. The smaller monsters retreat in terror as the true demon appears, smiling as always, and unleashes the thunderous Enterprise's slash. Upon impact with the ground, the shockwave devastates everything nearby. On the other front lines, a man warns that more beasts are approaching, and it looks like they're all converging on a single point. A woman replies that it's because of Yehe, the city's top-ranked student, who has just entered the battlefield, and now the beasts are trying to surround him. The man stresses that they can't let that happen and must go after them because the protagonist may be just a kid, but he's the city's only hope. They rush toward the monsters, shouting that they must kill as many as possible to protect the city's hope. Yihe keeps obliterating every monster in his path, turning the battlefield into a wasteland. Still, new creatures gather around, but with his nuclear power, he annihilates them as if they were nothing. The warriors supporting him shout that a lord-level beast is charging towards the protagonist and that they must protect him. If the monsters want to defeat the city's pride, they'll have to go through them first. The veterans yell for everyone to hold the line because Yihei is on his way. An even stronger monster begins advancing toward the city but is stopped by the barrier. The mayor does everything he can to protect everyone, but realizes that the Earth Vein seal alone won't be enough to hold back those beasts. He concludes that he must eliminate the leader to end the invasion. Moving swiftly, he climbs the barrier and tries to attack Qing, but Qing kills him effortlessly. However, when he turns around, Qing is horrified to see a gigantic monster looming before him, the mountain giant crocodile, a rank 4 beast and a royal class species. Qing backs up to the barrier, thinking that if a creature like that has appeared only now, it must mean that damned ape is on its way. Leaping over the barrier, he activates his dominating mountain smashing hammer technique, making the entire city quake. The crocodile reacts by pulling everything around into its center. The mayor rises from the ground, facing the creature, and asks if it really thinks he didn't know that this type of monster specializes in underground attacks, revealing that he'd been using that to his advantage. Qing unleashes his power, declaring that the crocodile walked right into his trap, and with a devastating strike, he uses the martial technique Serpent Wave Explosion, gravely injuring the creature. Even so, the monster's strength is overwhelming, and every movement it makes obliterates everything nearby, plunging the city into chaos. The mayor watches and thinks that it's a good thing he knew something about this kind of beast. Otherwise, the disaster would have been even worse. Qing keeps attacking and tells the crocodile that it would have been better if it had come all the way out of the portal because leaving only its head outside is just asking to die. He strikes the monster's head again with full force, unleashing all his martial power. The crocodile senses the danger and begins releasing spikes across its entire body. The mayor watches and remarks that this was expected from a royal species, capable of reshaping its own body to adapt. Suddenly, one of the spikes starts to open. Qing notices it and tries to move, but it's too late. The ape emerges, grabbing him by the head and, in a tone of disdain, calls him human, asking what he thinks he's doing to his pet. The mayor stares back at the ape and asks what he's doing there, if he was really hiding among the stone spikes all along. The ape laughs and replies that he's about to finish the mayor off, making everyone realize just how useless they are before him. He then hurls Ching with tremendous force against the crocodile's body, but a sudden explosion wounds his hand. Looking at the injury, he remarks that while unexpected, it only confirms what he already knew. There isn't a single martial artist strong enough to face him here, so he can exterminate them all without worry. Ching, gravely wounded but still standing, faces the monster leader and musters every last bit of his strength, conjuring a storm of wind blades. The ape, arms crossed and unbothered, says resistance is pointless. The mayor is only delaying the inevitable. He adds that there's no opponent worthy of him on this battlefield and that everything has become just a game to toy with humanity, spreading fear and destruction. With a cruel smile, he says he enjoys watching the despair written on human faces. Ching ignores his taunts and unleashes his attack with all his might. The blades strike the ape, but he doesn't even flinch. He descends slowly, mocking that it was fast but far too weak. The next moment, he freezes midair, releases his aura, and with blinding speed, tears through the city's ruins, appearing right in front of the mayor. Ordering him to kneel, he declares that an insect like him doesn't deserve to look him in the eyes. With no options left, the mayor simply glares at his enemy, and the ape delivers a devastating blow that slams him into the ground. To his surprise, Ching is still standing, unwavering, staring straight at him. The ape asks if he feels no fear. Ching, struggling to breathe, braces for another attack and says that this piece of trash may be intelligent, but in the end, it's still just an arrogant beast. He activates a forbidden, blood-soaked technique, managing to trap the monster. As he's engulfed by the technique, the ape roars, realizing too late that he's fallen into a trap. The mayor completes the earth vein seal and the entire area begins to swirl like a vortex of earth, dragging the monster leader underground. The beast roars, asking if this was really his entire plan, mocking him for thinking he could bury him alive. He claims Ching won't be able to sustain the seal for long. When it fails, he'll return to annihilate every human. Ching smiles weakly and replies that it's not as if that was his only plan. He opens his clothing, revealing a star-shaped scar on his chest, and explains that it's a symbol of humanity, a mark of courage. The ape, confused, asks what he's doing as the mayor drives his hand into the scar, wounding himself. On the brink of death, Ching reveals that before the war began, he had planted a nuclear warhead beneath this site, connected to an activation chip in his heart. If it stops beating, the bomb will detonate. The Supreme Beast, furious, says it's a bluff, that no human would be insane enough to gamble his own life that way, and insists he won't fall for it. Ching, his vision fading and voice weakening, admits he truly didn't want to wager his life, but reminds the monster who he is. Huang Qing, the mayor of An City. He recalls that when he was elected, he promised to dedicate his body and soul to the people, and with one final breath says this is all he can do. His eyes close, and in the same instant, a colossal explosion engulfs the area. The ape screams as it's consumed by the light. The blast is so intense it can be seen for miles. A massive mushroom cloud rises into the sky, reaching the clouds above. The extermination warhead had detonated. One of the young warriors clutches his phone with trembling hands, tears streaming down his face as he reads the last message received. "Dad, do you remember when you told me I could be whoever I wanted? Well, it looks like I finally did it. Thank you for believing in me that day." The boy keeps trembling, crying uncontrollably in anguish. The soldiers, tears in their eyes, salute in silence, and even the martial artists bow their heads in respect. Everyone watches the enormous explosion from afar, a pillar of smoke rising like a colossal grave, the eternal symbol of a sacrifice that would never be forgotten. It was a farewell worthy of a legend. When the smoke finally clears, the place is completely destroyed. A deep crater opens as if hell itself had touched the earth. At its center lie only the charred bones of the ape that caused all of the devastation. But then, a strange sound begins to echo through the scorched remains. A glowing core, pulsing with immense energy, rises from the bones and lifts them into the air. Slowly, the ape's body reconstructs itself and it returns to life, snarling in disbelief that it was nearly killed by a mere human. Consumed by rage, the monster roars that it will wipe out every surviving human, promising a massacre so brutal no one could imagine it. It declares that it must return to the domain of sin, the beast's homeland, but swears that once it recovers, it will come back and turn this place to ashes. As it limps away, a firm voice cuts through the air asking where it thinks it's going. The ape turns and freezes. Standing before it is the protagonist, Yeh, alive and towering. Terror flashes in the beast's eyes as it recognizes the man as the true threat to innovation, a prodigy beyond compare. With a cold, hate-filled gaze, Yeh says he's finally found it, even if it's too late, and charges forward, striking with an explosive punch of radiant energy. A small blast ripples through the air, but something feels off. The ape suddenly appears in front of him, mocking the human's foolishness for exposing himself so easily. It tries to counterattack, thinking it has the upper hand, but Yihi simply smirks and says it talks too much for something that nearly died to a nuclear warhead, and that apparently it's begging for another. The ape barely has time to react before Yihi begins transforming. His body expands into the colossal form of the armored titan, gathering nuclear energy so dense that the sky lights up. The explosion that follows is even more devastating than the last. The ground trembles. People far away stare in horror, wondering if another warhead had been detonated, if the mayor had planned this too. When the dust settles, the ape is still alive, but barely, trembling and calling Yehi a monster. It can't believe what it's seeing, muttering that no true beast has an aura that terrifying. It says Yehi must be the real king of monsters. The protagonist glares coldly and replies that he's not a monster like it, smashing the creature into the ground with a brutal blow that sends it flying. He warns that there's no point in trying to escape now, and gathers power for the devastating strike of the mountains. The ape, cornered and desperate, roars that it won't be underestimated again. Their attacks collide, and the explosion of energy is cataclysmic. Yihe's arm is left mangled, but he recognizes his foe's strength, a lord-level beast, still formidable even when wounded and at half power. Yet, in his armored form, which boosts all attributes by 30 points, Yehe endures. In seconds, his arm regenerates completely, instant and total recovery. The ape, crushed and broken on the ground, admits it used everything it had, but it wasn't enough. Realizing there's no hope left, it turns to flee, screaming in panic that it's going to die. Yihi prepares his next strike, saying that worthless creature wasn't worth the mayor's sacrifice, then fires his attack, hitting the ape dead on. But once again, the monster manages to escape. Furious, the protagonist growls that the coward hid underground, pretending to be dead, proving how terrified it really is. And now, gravely injured, it's the perfect time to finish it off. He tries to locate it using his sensor, but doesn't know that beasts of this level can completely mask their presence and vital signs. Suddenly, Yihe realizes that if he had arrived sooner, the mayor might still be alive. He focuses on the ground, scanning the area, muttering to himself that this isn't the time to dwell on it, and even if he has to go to hell itself, he'll find the one responsible for destroying his city and killing the mayor. Finally, he detects the ape's presence and launches a precise strike, sending it flying upward. The ape glances back and mutters that it was almost at the exit, that if not for that damned mayor, it might have succeeded. Yehe wastes no time, smashing it back down with a powerful blow and declaring that this is the price for forcing the mayor's sacrifice. Now, it will beg for mercy. The ape rises once more, clutching its core in its hands, saying the protagonist is pushing his luck too far, vowing to use all its remaining strength to drag them both to hell. Energy surges through its body, regenerating its arm, and with the last of its power, it leaps, roaring that it's time to end this. The two collide, and this time, both the ape's arm and Yihe's are completely vaporized. Yihe begins to laugh, asking if that beast also intends to sacrifice itself, and readies his final strike, knowing there's nowhere left for his enemy to run. Suddenly, voices start echoing in his head, and he wonders if it's some kind of psychic attack. Looking around, he sees no other beasts, only a sea of hands rising from every direction. The hands begin to drag the ape's body away, and Yihi shouts that it's not going to escape, but new hands sprout across his own body, growing from his joints and locking him in place. Enraged, he roars, asking if the ape really thinks that's enough to stop him. Then he releases all the radiation within himself, 200 degrees, 400, 600, 800, up to 1,000, incinerating everything nearby. The fire and radiation consume his entire body, burning away every hand that clings to him. He screams that he'll make the ape burn in flames, hotter than hell itself, activating the flames of sacrifice. The ape, meanwhile, looks toward the portal and realizes it's almost at the exit until it spots a demon coming its way. In a panic, it yells for the hands to move faster as the monster draws near. Suddenly, a head begins to emerge, and once again, Yihe hears a voice echoing through the chaos. He mutters in disbelief, asking what the hell that thing is. A beast? A demon? Thousands of bodies begin to form, merging into a grotesque shape. Stunned, Yihe wonders what kind of power this is. Could it be a lord? If this is its true form, he admits he might be in real danger. Amid the ruins, the head takes shape and opens its eyes, unleashing an ear-splitting roar. Even with his giant form's auditory system disabled, the roar reverberates inside Yihe's mind. He bursts from the giant's mouth, climbing out of his own body, shouting that after everything the monsters have taken, they still think they can just leave the city as if nothing happened. Fueled by rage, he swears he won't allow it. Channeling all his nuclear energy into his core, he injects it directly into the monster's body and is flung clear immediately after. Smirking, he raises a finger and says that this is a little gift from the city, its house specialty, a nuclear bomb. The giant's body begins to swell and explodes with a cataclysmic force. far greater than the two previous blasts. From afar, people watch in shock, shouting that the secret realm's portal just exploded and that something terrible is happening. Some believe the beasts have lost control, while others think the mayor actually succeeded. Chaos spreads as voices cry out to stay alert, that the mayor's sacrifice cannot have been in vain, that the city still has a chance. Gradually, the situation settles, and many speculate that what they saw was the black, blood-eyed gorilla's body colliding with the portal's boundaries, breaking the beast's advance. Either way, the invasion of the secret realm had ended. Martial artists swept through the city, hunting the remaining monsters, fighting non-stop for a full day and night until the last creature was slain. The battle for Ann City was won, but at a devastating cost. Around 80% of its defenders had perished. In the Swan Lake realm, the site of the nuclear blast, Yehe lies on the ground. He opens his eyes and wonders how long he's been unconscious, remembering that he used all his nuclear power in that final attack. The air is still thick with radiation and atomic energy as his body slowly regenerates its outer shell. Looking around with sorrow, he murmurs that the battle was a true massacre. The mayor had lured the gorilla into the blast zone and kept it trapped there, sacrificing himself over and over to ensure the beast's end before it could regenerate. Because of that, Yehe realizes the infinite monster model is immensely powerful, but still no match for a sovereign-class beast. Struggling to his feet, he admits that this time victory came through terrain, timing, and luck. But next time, he might not have those on his side. He also doesn't know when he'll get his next model or whether it will even be gold tier. Fusing with the Thunderstar Titan model still seems like the fastest way to raise his combat power, but he'll need high-level plant-type monster cores compatible with fusion, especially blue, purple, or golden ones. Moreover, he must fully master the Zhuanhuang martial arts, because if his model can synchronize with martial rhythm, that will be the key. Watching the sunrise, Yehe reflects that Zhuanhuang techniques evolve slowly compared to his model's abilities, but their potential is far greater, and perhaps that's the very reason he was brought into this world. A month after the crisis, a statue of the mayor was erected in the city center as a symbol of his bravery, loyalty, and strength. Sitting on a bench in the square, Yehe watches the news reporting that waves of beasts have struck 18 cities across the Xia nation, 12 of them completely annihilated. Among them is Guanshan, now linked to an S-class secret realm, shrouded in an undetectable gray mist. The Great Finch organization of Xia has dispatched 30 Zhuanyu-level martial artists and 5 grandmasters led by Du Jingming. It wasn't an ordinary invasion. Even S-class realms appeared. Xia's strongest martial artist, Fu Musheng, has been reported missing near the perimeter of the realm. He entered Guanshan, and 48 hours later returned barely alive, accompanied by only 2 grandmasters. For now, Guanshan ranks 12th worldwide in casualties with over 1,800,000 dead. Shocked, Yehe mutters that not even Guardian-ranked martial artists are enough anymore. For the first time, he wonders if humanity on the Blue Star can truly survive, and the thought alone unsettles him. He immediately calls Qinlan, saying he needs her help. The matriarch, curious, asks if he's after the other 2 Xuanhuang manuals of the Liu family. Yehe laughs, asking if she really thinks that's all he wants, then clarifies that it's not just about the manuals. He also needs help collecting high-quality plant-type monster cores, preferably blue, purple, or even gold level. Qinlan frowns and replies that he's asking for the rarest of the rare, Lord-class cores worth a fortune, then questions what he intends to offer in return. The protagonist explains that Huadu University will soon hold a realm test for new students, and he'll be Qingzhu's partner, helping her claim first place. Qinlan is surprised but quickly scolds him, saying he's underestimating the elites from other cities. Frankly, she tells him her daughter is mid-high level but still far from the true top. Even though Yehe defeated Qingzhu in combat, he's still nowhere near the real monsters who'll be competing. He replies that it doesn't matter. Even so, if anyone can restore the Liu family's legacy and honor, it's him. Then he asks if that's not exactly why she's been supporting him so much. He adds that he'll sign a contract. If he fails to make Qingzhu win, he'll serve the Liu family for life, as a servant, bodyguard, or even babysitter. Surprised and delighted, Qinlan jumps out of bed with a grin and confirms, asking if it's really for life. When he says yes, she happily agrees to help him without hesitation. Later, at a hospital in the city center, people begin crowding around the protagonist. Some women claim to be his fans, asking for autographs and offering gifts, while others say he's the obvious candidate for the highest martial score since everyone else left battered, while he remained unscathed. They also mention that he defeated several monsters during the invasion. Yehe, embarrassed, hadn't imagined he'd become this popular. After managing to escape the crowd, he heads into the hospital carrying a pile of gifts. Seeing his friend, he bursts out laughing, saying that this is the most handsome man in the city, Zhou, and asks if he's feeling okay. Wrapped in bandages, Zhou replies that he knew Yehe would come visit but asks what he's carrying. The protagonist explains that they're gifts from his fans. Xuan, lying in the next bed, sits up and greets Yehe, But the protagonist looks confused and asks who he is. Zhuan introduces himself, reminding him that he was Yihei's first opponent in the tournament, and asks if he's already forgotten. Yihei realizes who he is and looks surprised. Zhuan tells him not to look at him like that, saying his leg isn't gone yet, and jokes that in the worst case, he'll get a regeneration surgery or maybe a combat prosthetic, since Laserbird just released a new model. Watching him, Yihei thinks that losing a leg so young while defending the city shows Zhuan is a man of true worth and deserving of respect. Suddenly his phone starts ringing, but he hangs up, saying those spam calls never stop and are super annoying. A few seconds later, the device starts yelling at him to pick up, startling him. It's Director Deng, scolding him for blocking a big shot from Huadu and ordering him to unblock the number immediately. Yihei apologizes and says he understands. Moments later, the call comes through again. The man introduces himself as Wang Tao from the Huadu University admissions office and informs him that the semester will begin soon, adding that a train will be sent to pick him up in a few days. He also asked if Yihei had any special requests. Zhou, too, received a call from Professor Liu from the admissions department, and the protagonist said he would follow the university's instructions. Zhou replied that he understood as well, confirming he'd be there at the scheduled time and thanking the professor. Zhuan watched them and thought that in the same hospital room, there were 3 people, and he was the only one who wasn't a top student. So maybe the best thing to do was to forget the bed and hide under it. The protagonist mentioned that before enrollment, there was something he needed to take care of. A few days later, at the crater of Swan Lake, a mushroom-shaped cloud caused by the nuclear explosion had released hundreds of tons of ash into the atmosphere, blanketing the entire region in a black haze like an eternal night. Yihei went to the center, fused with his beast, and began to focus. A mist surrounded his body and his eyes started to glow. The system appeared, displaying Infinite Monster Model, Host Yihei, Base Physique 27.4, Model Damanra, Wild Trait Variation, Synchronization 38.9%, Titan Form, Synchronization 90%. He stood and noted that his fight with the blood-eyed gorilla had raised his Damanra synchronization by 1.5%, a great improvement. 3 more days of training raised it by another 6%, proving that this place was truly worth it. The progress was amazing, but it was time to move on. He prepared himself and shot off like lightning. Sometime later at the train station, an announcement echoed. The G6666 train to Western Huadu would depart in 5 minutes, and all passengers should board. Zhou, waiting alone at the platform, sensed something and looked to his side, noticing the protagonist approaching. A flash streaked across the sky and Yihei landed beside him, saying he'd arrived just in time. People around gasped, asking if that really was the famous student, because the pressure he emitted and the energy swirling around his body felt like that of a high-level beast. That wasn't a mere blood flame aura. It surpassed elite warriors. He was the city's pride. Zhou smiled and said Yihei had grown even stronger. The protagonist gazed at the city and said he was finally leaving it behind. His first stop, Huadu. As the train approached, he said his goodbyes. "Farewell, An City, I'm on my way." The train sped off as soon as he boarded. Standing, Yihei looked around at the other passengers, but his friend warned him not to make the atmosphere tense. Yihei asked if everyone there was really that strong. Zhou explained that it wasn't just about strength. The train was built with next-generation alloys capable of withstanding tons of impact, and there were at least 5 Xuanwu-level martial artists aboard to protect the students. Some were disguised among the passengers, others served as guards, and there might even be a grandmaster on board. After all, the train carried the top freshmen of the entire Xia nation. Yihei chuckled to himself, thinking that after scanning the train with his life sense, there were indeed powerful figures on board, but only about 5 could withstand 3 of his attacks. Suddenly, a level 1 alert sounded. The university train was under attack from unknown forces. The instructions were clear. Teachers and staff were to contain the threat, and students were to evacuate immediately without trying to fight. Chaos erupted throughout the carriages. Some students questioned if it was real, thinking it must be a test for newcomers, but others argued it might be something far worse. The Xia nation was at its weakest point. Its national-class martial artists were wounded and recovering, and one of the 3 grandmasters, Du Jingming, had disappeared. Several masters and Xuanwu-level warriors had died in the recent waves of beasts in Guanshan and other cities. It made sense that old enemies or foreign forces would take advantage of the chaos to attack. The confusion grew. Some wanted to fight, others wanted to flee. Zhou asked what Yihei thought. The protagonist grew irritated, saying it had to be a joke. He'd spent days training without rest and only took a short nap to recover energy. But if the enemy wanted to fight, then he wouldn't back down. The 2 of them ran to the front of the train. When they opened the door, they found a student gravely injured. Yihei's expression hardened as he shouted, demanding to know what was happening ahead. The freshman Zhou Jingxian, injured and gasping for breath, explains that the first 3 cars have already been evacuated. The enemy is using some kind of dimensional field, pulling people into isolated spaces where battles happen separately. inside those domains, something terrifying is hunting everyone. The Zhuanwu instructors who were guarding the train have been almost entirely wiped out. They risked everything just to get him out and warn them that this isn't a test. Silence fills the car until a voice speaks up, questioning if there's any proof of what was just said. The freshman Yan Zhengxiong crosses his arms and demands to know where Jingxian's instructor seal is, if there are any other survivors, and why he's the only one who made it back. He insists that he has a friend in the forward cars, someone strong enough to survive anything, and that it makes no sense to believe Jingxian lived while that friend didn't. Other freshmen murmur in agreement, saying it actually makes sense that the guy with the mane has a point. Yan then orders Jingxian to step aside, declaring that he'll go check things out himself. Jingxian desperately tries to stop them, saying he's telling the truth and that going forward is suicide, asking why no one believes him when they're all walking straight into a death trap. He glances sideways and recognizes the protagonist. "You're Yihei, aren't you?" he asks in a trembling voice. The protagonist feels something strange. His life sense detects a surge of emotional distortion coming from the boy and replies, "Yes," asking how he knew. Jingxian explains that a woman named Qingzhu showed him a photo of Yihei and told him to find him and warn him that no matter what happens, he must not go to the front cars. Yihei freezes for a moment and his voice unsteady asks if she really said that. Jingxian confirms, saying Qingzhu threw herself in front of a strike, taking a blade meant for him, and was gravely wounded. The boy starts crying, saying maybe everyone's already doomed, but he'll still fulfill her last wish, to keep Yihei alive. The protagonist lightly taps his head, annoyed, saying Qingzhu isn't dead and he should stop spouting nonsense. Zhou asks if he really plans to go to the front cars, and Yihei replies that he does. He promised something to her family and intends to keep it. Jingxian steps in front of them, declaring he won't let them pass. Yihei loses patience and asks how someone with such a loser's mindset even got into the best university in the country. He orders Zhou to act. Zhou charges forward and attacks, but Jingxian blocks firmly, saying he's trying to save their lives and asking why Yihei is so stubborn, always charging headfirst into every fight that appears. He remarks that Qingzhu is graceful and refined and says he can't understand how someone like her would ever care about someone like Yihei. Enraged, the protagonist snaps and knocks Jingxian out with a single punch, saying he's out of patience for talking. The freshman collapses, trembling, barely believing the power he just felt, strength far beyond his level. Yihei simply tells him to take a qi and blood pill because he'll need it after taking a hit like that. Without hesitation, he and Zhou head toward the front cars. Jingxian, still on the floor, pleads with them not to go, shouting that it isn't safe. Upon reaching the third car, they find a massive, pulsating portal. The protagonist studies it and comments that it must be the entrance to the dimensional space Jingxian mentioned. He grabs a suitcase and throws it into the portal, watching closely. No sound, no sign. Not even his life sense can detect what's inside. The first freshman who got there probably already entered. "Interesting," he murmurs before stepping forward and diving in. As soon as he crosses the portal, a sharp pain throbs in his head. He realizes Zhou is gone and wonders who's manipulating this domain. Not understanding what's happening, he decides to follow a distant light. When he comes to his senses, he's standing in the middle of a completely destroyed city. His life sense doesn't respond, it's blocked. So he decides to do it the old-fashioned way. Gathering energy, he flies to the highest point. With his nuclear energy condensing, he shouts for the enemy to stop hiding and using cowardly tricks. Then he unleashes a devastating blast into the sky, commanding everything to explode. A colossal explosion tears through the sky, drawing the attention of all freshmen on the field. Even Qingzhu, injured atop a building, lifts her gaze and immediately recognizes who it is, murmuring that she had told him not to show up. On the ground, Yihei watches the flash and remarks that his arrival drew more than just the eyes of his peers. Even the enemies seem to have noticed his presence. Feeling something behind him, he turns and sees a grotesque figure with the head of a pig. Without hesitation, he charges forward, mocking the opponent and calling him a freak. His nuclear punch lands squarely on the pigman's face, but the creature retaliates with a slash across his abdomen. Shocked, Yihei realizes that the opponent withstood the blow without taking a single step back. The pigman is equally astonished to see the protagonist's rapid regeneration. Smiling, Yihei comments that his enemy didn't expect him to heal so quickly, and claims that his abdominal muscles are strong enough to destroy that blade on their own, saying that his strength isn't all that impressive and that, although the weapon was interesting for cutting through his defense like papers, it still failed to impress him. Curious, he decides to investigate further. Opening the enemy's mouth, he releases a nuclear breath inside, obliterating him completely. Holding the pig's head, he laughs, saying he's a simple man who keeps his word. He had promised to rip off that ridiculous mask, and so he did. Examining the inside of the mask, he finds a pendant and concludes that it might be part of a Huadu test, a classic challenge where defeating monsters grants rewards. He also notes that the enemy's weapon was probably reinforced with the chi of a high-level martial artist, making it absurdly sharp. But once that energy faded, it turned back into junk. Looking at the pendant in his hand, he wonders what it could mean and decides he must hunt down more masked enemies to collect their amulets. Suddenly, an arrow wrapped in sinister energy flies toward him. He destroys it before it can get close. Another enemy appears and Yihe, both irritated and grinning, remarks that they're attacking him in a group. Suddenly, a spear bursts from the ground beneath his feet while the archer takes the chance to unleash another volley. Even when hit, he only laughs louder, thrilled, asking if they really thought they could defeat him so easily. Calling them naive, he activates his armored Zodiac unit and a massive beast manifests behind him. In a single strike, Yihe attacks the archer and the impact causes such a powerful explosion that the entire building collapses. The freshmen watching from afar are stunned to see the structure crumble from just one blow. Returning to normal, Yihe walks to the building's base, demanding to know who tried to ambush him. As he approaches, he spots another masked figure, this time with a rabbit face, and realizes he's truly facing the Zodiacs. The rabbit-headed foe bends his knees and leaps toward him. Yihe tries to land a kick, but the enemy dodges with astonishing agility. He's startled to see that the rabbit knows kung fu. The strike is about to hit when a wall of ice rises up, blocking the attack. The rabbit man becomes trapped in the ice, and Joe appears, saying that was close and asking Yihe to leave that one to him. Joe advances, but the rabbit is incredibly fast, dodging smoothly and counterattacking, though Joe blocks and freezes his spear before landing a direct hit that sends the opponent flying. Yihe's killing aura flares behind him. Transformed once more with the Zodiac unit, he grabs the rabbit tightly, saying he finally caught that cute little thing. And in the next instant, another explosion lights up the battlefield. A few minutes earlier, two people were talking atop a building. The woman, watching the chaos below, asks the man why he's so quiet and whether the guy who made that flashy entrance has already been eliminated. The man replies that probably yes. Even their best fighters couldn't scratch the masked ones since the weapons they wield can cut through anything, making them impossible to face at that level. The woman laughs disdainfully, saying the fool who showed up firing beams of light everywhere must be some lucky bumpkin who got into Huadu by miracle with no idea what he's doing. She adds that the gap between the talents of the big cities and the losers from the countryside is enormous. She's heard rumors that Yan and Ouyang Ze from Modu, Lan Yusi from Chengdu, and Xin Chen from Luli Island have already started hunting masked enemies, though she still doesn't know how they managed it. The man comments that if those names are truly as strong as people say, the top freshman spot will definitely come from that group. The woman disagrees, declaring that the top always belongs to someone from Huadu, because before the monsters from that city, no student from the rest of the Jia nation stands a chance. The martial resources that Huadu's students grow up with are on another level. Suddenly, the sky is torn apart by a blue nuclear explosion, leaving the two completely stunned. The man's eyes widen as he says that beam of light is the same one they saw earlier, wondering if it could be an electromagnetic cannon. Trembling, the woman scolds him, calling him an idiot for thinking such a cannon could even exist there. Elsewhere, Yan and Ouyang also witness the colossal blast. Yan asks what his friend thinks about it, and Ouyang replies that the attack doesn't match the masked one's style, it's probably the work of a freshman. The horse-headed masked man had already been eliminated, and Ouyang notes that, aside from the elites of Huadu, no one else could possess that level of power. Even so, he says it's better to check it out since they have already collected the pendants of the rat, dog, monkey, and horse. Lan Yusi from Chengdu should have the goats, Xin Chen from Luli Island likely took the snakes, and the freshman Qingxu seems to have defeated the Minotaur, keeping the ox pendant. If the masked ones really follow the zodiac pattern, then only 5 remain: the pig, rabbit, rooster, tiger, and dragon. Ouyang stresses that fighting the dragon is suicide. He's a boss, someone to run from, not fight. He concludes that whoever fired that blue beam surely already holds several pendants, and both Xin Chen and Lan Yusi are bound to show up there. That means the game is entering its final stage, and if they want to win, they'll have to steal each other's pendants. Elsewhere, Yihe holds another pendant in his hand. Zhou, puzzled, asks what it is, and Yihe explains that before his companion arrived, he had already defeated a pig-headed masked enemy and pulled the object from inside him. If he's right, this challenge revolves around gathering all the zodiac pendants hidden within the enemy's masks. Zhou asks if that means they'll start actively hunting the masked ones. Yihe confirms, saying that someone attacked him from behind on the rooftop, but he managed to escape during this confusion. However, the enemy's arrow grazed him, which now allows him to easily track the archer. Shortly after, they arrive at another area and notice the ground covered in battle marks. The burn marks are still warm, a sign that someone was there just minutes ago. Suddenly, Zhou freezes, sensing an extremely dangerous presence beside him. He tries to react, but a woman retreats, wounded and surprised, asking how her optical stealth mode was detected. Zhou comments again that apparently the girl had been hiding and plotting something. It was the freshman Lan Yusi. Her partner tells her to step aside and, using the genetic art Flaming Demon Body, unleashes intense heat from his palm, melting the ice coming their way. The freshman Xin Chen says they managed to catch her, and remarks that Yusi's stealth mode is quite weak. Yihei approaches, asking if the two were planning an ambush. Yusi tells him not to get the wrong idea, explaining that they had just smashed the face of a rooster-masked enemy and were hiding to lure out others. She lights a cigarette, trying to divert the protagonist's attention, but he stays focused and asks if what they say is true because, if it is, he wants them to explain that. Suddenly, he grabs a clone of Yusi by the neck. Shocked, she admits that even her decoy was detected, and realizes that those two must have some special ability. Chen comments that he already expected that. A sneak attack succeeding too easily would have been boring. He drops the cigarette on the ground and says he'll show them how it's done, inhaling deeply before exhaling a thick cloud of smoke. Yihei and Zhou back away, but Yusi laughs, saying they don't even need to bother running, using her wind ascension technique to propel the smoke rapidly toward them. Chen conjures a fireball in his hand and says he's not done yet. Now it's time to really heat things up. He launches the fire into the smoke, laughing and taunting the two, wanting to see if they'll still be smiling after this. However, Yihei simply claps his hands, dispersing the entire attack around him. Chen is terrified to see that the protagonist erased everything with a single motion and realizes that kind of power is abnormal, questioning what kind of insane physique he has. In an instant, Yihei strikes with the mountain-blocking fist, landing a direct hit to Chen's face and sending him flying several meters away. Yusi feels Yihei's murderous intent and crushing pressure, trembling in fear. She thinks that none of them have yet broken through the barrier to become true martial artists, that they are all still mere disciples with bodies limited by an invisible wall. Even Huadu's freshmen have only a slight edge at this stage, but Yihei seems to be on another level. His body is far beyond what a novice should possess. Suddenly, she's frozen solid, realizing she'd been so terrified by the protagonist's overwhelming power that she completely forgot about the ice user. Yihei keeps advancing like a demon, his monstrous aura dominating the area as his thirst for battle grows. He closes in, and Yusi panics, thinking that even if she and Chen fought together, they wouldn't stand a chance against those two monsters. She tries to escape using her fan, realizing it's pointless to drag this out. She needs to flee as fast as possible. But before she can, Yihei grabs her leg, pulls her down, and slams her to the ground, saying she should stay there so they can have a little chat. He prepares to strike, but she uses the martial art Xuan Huang, Step of the Empty Chaos, to try to run. Obsessed, Yihei acts like a predator chasing its prey, unleashing his evil spirits through the demonic flesh. Binding Art, Shadow of the Demon Realm. Yusi's clones are restrained by the spirits, and she screams that her body can't move, demanding to know what those things holding her are. Yihei laughs at the scene, saying it looks like his little prey can neither fight nor flee anymore, so it's time to surrender. Yusi gives up instantly, saying he can have all her pendants. The protagonist collects the two pendants, praises her attitude, and asks her to tell him everything she knows. Yusi begins explaining that to pass this trial, one must gather all 12 zodiac pendants and that they've now reached the final stage. There's no point hunting anyone else, since the survivors will end up fighting each other anyway. She mentions that the real monsters that year are Yan and Ouyang, both from Modu. Laughing, she asks if the protagonist wants her to lead him to them, saying she has nothing left to lose, and that since she can't win the competition, she'd rather pour gasoline on the fire and let the big shots kill each other. Yihei laughs and replies that she doesn't need to bother with that, though he admits she's braver than he expected. Meanwhile, Yan and Ouyang are moving quickly. Ouyang comments that Yusi and Chen are probably already hunting them, but says he doesn't care who wins. In the end, they'll just steal from both, since those two are merely holding onto the prize for now. Suddenly, Yan is shocked and tells Ouyang to look at the body split in half on the ground. It's Chen. Just minutes earlier, he had been completely defeated and tossed aside like trash. Barely breathing, Chen mutters in confusion that the protagonist is definitely not human and that Yusi has probably already been hunted down too. He believes Yihei must have marked him somehow and is sure that monster will find him soon. With no options left, he decides to join Ouyang and Yan, but then hears footsteps behind him. Startled, he turns and asks who's there. What he sees terrifies him. The dragon appears before him, and in the blink of an eye, he's eliminated. Yan stares at the body, saying there's no doubt Chen is dead, and that such a brutal, precise cut could only have been made by one person. Ouyang cuts in, confirming that only the dragon could deliver such a surgical, merciless strike that kills instantly. Yan finds it strange. The dragon was supposed to be sealed in the underground parking lot. Last time, over 20 people were sent to hunt it, and only 2 came back alive. He says he can't believe what he's seeing. This was supposed to be just a trial, not a massacre, but all that blood is far too real. Ouyang starts to panic. Yan calls his name, asking what they should do since Chen's pendant has also vanished. Ouyang replies that if the dragon is loose, then some condition must have been triggered, probably the one requiring all other zodiac masks to be defeated. And now the final boss is free. Just as the masked ones automatically hunt freshmen, the dragon must now be hunting whoever carries the zodiac pendants. Ouyang awakens his bloodline, stating that facing the dragon would be suicide and their only chance is to gather the remaining pendants before it takes them. Sprouting wings from his back, he takes flight, saying they need to send a signal to lure the other holders and settle everything in a single battle. Meanwhile, in the dead city amid the ruins, Qingzhu is injured, leaning against a wall. She laments that it was supposed to be just a train ride to Huadu, but they ended up trapped in that cursed place where so many freshmen have already been slaughtered by the maniac in the dragon mask. She recalls that the professor found her, but only one of them could escape, and she couldn't bring herself to leave, and not like that. Looking at a photo of her and Yihei on her phone, she says she needs to warn that idiot not to get involved. Exhausted and sad, she wonders if the one who escaped managed to find him, and admits she doesn't have the strength to go after him herself. Still, she believes that with Yihei's absurd power, he'll easily survive, as long as he doesn't cross paths with the dragon. Suddenly, she feels a presence approaching and panics, realizing she's already been found. With her weakened body, she knows she can't run. They must have tracked her energy, and now they're coming for her pendant. In truth, Qingzhu didn't care about the pendant itself, but something deep in her heart told her the protagonist would need them. She knew she stood no chance of facing them head-on, so there was only one option left: lead them straight to him. At that moment, Ouyang finds her. He remarks that he noticed her during the entrance exam and remembers she awakened the phantom bird bloodline, a legendary and extremely rare creature, and that she carries the ox pendant, something he says fits perfectly into his plans. Watching her, he realizes she's heading somewhere specific and deduces she's likely trying to lure him to the dragon's lair beneath the parking structure. Laughing, he calls it naive, knowing the dragon has already escaped and that place is now empty. Determined to act, Ouyang rushes forward, telling Yan to wait for him. He's just going to pick up a little something and will be right back. He speeds down the building floors until reaching the lower level where he faces Qingzhu and declares that she won't get away. But before he can capture her, a voice echoes through the darkness. Ouyang freezes. In front of him, a murderous aura flares so intense it steals the air from his lungs. Trembling, he asks if that could be the dragon, but quickly dismisses the idea, believing the dragon should be hunting other pendant holders. Then terror grips him. If the dragon's targets are precisely the ones holding zodiac pendants, he's in mortal danger. After all, he carries 4 pendants, making him the ultimate prize. He realizes too late that he was far too confident, and now his life hangs by a thread. The dragon locks eyes with him, and Ouyang feels his entire body go rigid under that gaze. He tries to comprehend what's happening, realizing that the creature is using an absurd technique, one that drags its victim into a sealed space the moment eye contact is made. The only escape is to defeat the caster, and the dragon has clearly forced him inside. Within that domain, the dragon attacks, and Ouyang throws everything he has into defense. But the power gap is overwhelming. Elsewhere, Yan begins to feel pressure as he faces Zhou and Yihe. The protagonist watches with boredom and asks what this is supposed to be, since Yan had opened the global chat earlier just to brag, yet now shows no strength at all. Zhou asks Yihe to step back, making it clear he wants to face the opponent alone to test his own ability. Enraged, Yan charges forward, shouting that they're getting too full of themselves. Zhou responds by activating the ice vein, but Yan shatters the ice with sheer brute force. He grins and says Zhou isn't going anywhere, attacking again. Zhou blocks the first blow but senses another coming immediately after. He manages to react and counter with his wind cut technique, a strike that slices both soul and blade as one. Both raise their power to the limit and an intense battle begins, shaking the surroundings. Yehei, however, just watches from a distance, sitting lazily and looking utterly bored as he waits for the result. In the middle of the clash, Yan suddenly senses something, a familiar presence, a cry for help. It's Ouyang. He instantly retreats, ending the fight and saying that if he didn't have something urgent to handle, he would have broken at least 8 of Zhou's bones. But before he can flee, Yihei slowly stands up and asks if he's done showing off, then adds coldly, "Who said you could leave?" In an instant, he moves at unbelievable speed. Yan tries to react but is sent flying like a feather. Even though he manages to block, the impact leaves him battered on the ground. Dazed, he asks what that was, if the blow came from a demonic beast. The protagonist calmly replies that it didn't. It came from him, and adds with the disdain that Yan's annoying yelling was getting on his nerves, so he ended up hitting harder than intended. Still stunned and unable to process what just happened, Yan asks if he was ambushed. Yehei sighs and answers casually that no, the problem is simply that Yan couldn't keep up. The punch was so fast that his brain didn't even have time to process it. Humiliated, Yan screams that the protagonist is too arrogant and that he'll be the one eliminated. 3 minutes later, he's completely destroyed. Beaten so badly it looks like 10 people attacked him at once. Yihei calmly holds Yan's sword and says he shouldn't feel too frustrated. Lasting 3 minutes against him is already impressive, especially since Chen went down with a single hit. Examining the blade, he remarks that it's actually decent, but that he's thinking of borrowing it. He asks if Yan would mind, though he knows the opponent is already unconscious. Then he adds that the sword still needs a few upgrades, and channeling his nuclear energy, he infuses it directly into the weapon, instantly transforming and amplifying it. Joe approaches and calls out to him, saying that in Yan's spatial ring there weren't any masked pendants, but he did find something strange. He shows a pendant that's blinking repeatedly, as if transmitting some kind of signal. Meanwhile, inside the dragon's domain, Ouyang was still standing, though completely destroyed. He looked forward and said he never imagined that would be his limit, since he had used even the last sealing nail he recovered from that ancient ruin. If he had managed to drive one of them straight into the dragon's heart, he could have sealed its martial core and internal flow at once. However, even sacrificing his own arm, he still missed by a few centimeters. The dragon monster slowly approached, letting out a fierce roar. Ouyang accepted defeat, saying his only chance to beat that monster called Qianlong was gone. Suddenly, the domain began to collapse and Ouyang remained pinned to the wall with a sword through his body. Meanwhile, Qingchu kept climbing the stairs slowly, thinking she just needed to endure a little more because she was almost at the rooftop. That Qianlong was really on another level, and the horrendous ox she had defeated earlier did not even compare. As soon as Ouyang fell, she would be next. She looked out the window and thought that if she truly wanted to get out alive, her only hope was for Yihe to appear and get her out of there. That was the tallest building in the area, and when the protagonist fired the flare, she got an idea. She would answer with her own. Qingzhu activated the awakening of the phantom bird bloodline, releasing an enormous amount of energy, but she soon collapsed to the ground, having reached her limit. She begged for that signal to reach Yihe, but suddenly felt a massive killing intent along with a terrifying sound. She ran to the edge of the building, unable to believe what she saw. Qianlong was walking on the outside, heading straight toward her. Qingzhu froze in fear, wondering how that monster had already found her. Her first thought was that there was not enough time, and she needed to fire another flare to warn the protagonist that it was a trap and he needed to stay away. Qianlong once again used his domain expansion ability, creating a new domain on the building's rooftop. The moment he stepped into his own domain, Qingzhu fell to the ground, completely overtaken by fear as she watched that monster raise his sword to strike her. She thought it was the end and that there was nothing she could do. What she did not expect was that the real monster was outside. The shell of the domain began to crack and Yihe burst through with full force, shouting that he had made a promise to Qingzhu's mother, and he was not the kind of man who breaks promises. Qianlong and Qingzhu both looked up in shock. The protagonist gathered all his strength and shouted, asking what kind of abomination that monster was, while striking with such power that the blow split the building in half. He yelled for Qingzhu to head to the east side because his new recruit and the others were waiting for her in the alley. Qingzhu asked if he was not going with her, but Yihe replied that he was staying because it was time to have a few words with that maniac wearing the dragon mask. He immediately began descending in flight to face his final opponent in that place. Qianlong, with his clothes completely destroyed, began walking while expanding the domain once again. The protagonist asked if he was really going to keep using that domain, saying he could feel when Qingzhu's distress signal was activated, but something was wrong there. He taunted the enemy, asking if the dragon only knew how to fight inside the comfort of his own little sandbox. At that moment, he noticed the nail embedded in Qianlong's chest and wondered if that could be the emergency plan Yan had mentioned for dealing with the dragon. Suddenly, the dragon began moving with absurd speed, surpassing any previous limit, and the protagonist started laughing, saying the opponent was really fast. He lifted his sword from the ground and the two began a fierce exchange of blows. Yihe, completely excited, commented that this was great because he had finally found an opponent worthy of his level. Their power was so devastating that another entire building was sliced into pieces. The fight intensified to the point that the entire surrounding area was completely destroyed. Qianlong landed a direct hit, sending the protagonist crashing into the ground, but Yihe retaliated with his nuclear breath, blasting through countless buildings as the beast soul energy filled the environment. He got up laughing, saying the opponent was incredibly strong and the first decent person he had faced since arriving in that world. Qianlong also rose slowly with his mask almost completely destroyed, and Yihe smiled even wider, saying that now things were getting interesting because the legendary invincible boss Qianlong would not fall that easily. The dragon charged again and Yihe was surprised by the speed but managed to block the attack. He realized, however, that Qianlong had become even faster and stronger after the mask broke. With his eyes gleaming, the dragon continued its full-force assault. Yihe tried to resist, but his blade split in half, leaving him unarmed. Qianlong appeared behind him to finish the strike, but the protagonist, acting like a real monster, bit down on the enemy's blade, stopping the attack with his own mouth and laughing as he said he had him now. Without a sword, he charged in using pure brute strength. Qianlong tried to react but was hit directly by a nuclear punch to the face, almost being knocked out on the spot. Yihe grabbed the dragon's arm and said it wasn't over yet, calling him customer with ironic politeness. He prepared for another insane barrage of blows, saying he was technician number 23 and always at the customer's disposal. The punches fell like a storm, and Yehei laughed in a crazed way, completely overtaken by adrenaline. He thought he had already hit every vital point: temple, throat, heart, arm, groin, and that thanks to Young's bronze spine, the dragon's meridians were blocked and his chi flow had been interrupted. Now every strike was aimed at causing devastating internal damage. Qianlong reached his limit and dropped his sword, but that was just a trick. He tried to counterattack, and Yihei, still laughing like a madman, said he knew the dragon wouldn't give up on such a good fight. The protagonist opened a fan in one hand and used it to defend himself, saying that the only chance Qianlong had to win was catching him off guard at the start, since the power difference between them was colossal. Even then, he estimated the dragon's chances of victory at only 30%. Yihi then transformed the fan, saying it was time to show who the real boss was there. A whirlwind of malicious spirits rose up, growing and destroying everything around it. The vortex became larger and more violent, and Qianlong's body began to be completely torn apart. Unable to move properly, the dragon only muttered that with that killing intent strengthening the fan, the protagonist was even stronger than when he fought alongside Lan Yusi. Like a predator chasing its prey, Yihei charged again, saying he wasn't done yet and calling the dragon a faceless freak. This time, he channeled even more strength into his attack and activated the nuclear explosion fist, declaring that this was only the first punch. A massive explosion engulfed the area, and Qianlong's body was even more destroyed. But the protagonist didn't stop, saying the second punch was coming. He activated the Mountain Breaker fist, and the black flash struck Qianlong's face directly, launching him through the air like a ping-pong ball, crashing through several buildings before violently slamming into a wall. Yihi flew to meet him and asked if he really was a dragon, because he honestly expected something stronger. But in the end, he was nothing more than a simple worm. Qianlong lifted his sword, saying he would still kill him, but the difference in speed and strength between them had already become unreachable. With a swift movement, Yihe pushed the dragon's own sword against his neck, saying he had him trapped. The blade cut deep, and Qianlong's head began to fall. The protagonist watched the enemy's body collapse and then picked up the dragon pendant, saying it was finally time to end that game. Shortly afterward, Yan sensed the power Yihe had released and was completely terrified. The protagonist returned to meet the survivors, and Yan simply knelt, unable to say a word. Still worried, Qingzhu shouted that Yihe shouldn't have faced that masked man alone, but Zhou replied that anyone other than him would only have gotten in the way. Qingzhu lowered her gaze, realizing he was right, because she was so injured she could barely use her martial abilities. If she had tried to help, Yihe would have had to protect her, and that would have put him at risk. She thought that if she were just a little stronger, she wouldn't have been a burden to him. The protagonist approached and casually interrupted her thoughts, asking what kind of face she was making. Qingzhu jolted and asked what he was doing. Yihe extended his hand and said he wanted the ox pendant, or if she preferred, he could take it by force. Qingzhu sighed and handed the pendant over without complaining. Zhou commented that they needed to arrange the pendants in the order of the zodiac from rat to pig, but as soon as Yihe aligned them, nothing happened. Zhou was confused, thinking he had messed up the sequence, and the protagonist didn't understand either, simply staring at the pendants in silence. Yan then approached and explained that the dragon pendant was different. It wasn't created just to represent a masked enemy, but to act as a hunter, a weapon specifically made to eliminate pendant bearers. That meant they didn't need the dragon pendant to complete the sequence. As soon as they removed the dragon pendant, the entire place began to shake. Qingzhu jumped in fear and asked if it worked, while Yan, equally confused, wondered if they had activated some kind of mechanism. Suddenly, a colossal energy began gathering in the sky and descended toward the ground. The protagonist noticed it and told everyone to look up, asking what that thing was. A massive eye appeared among the clouds, watching the group. Yihe stared back, asking what the hell that was. But before he could react, he started being pulled toward the eye. He was swallowed by the light, and when he woke up, realized he was inside the train car again. Everyone else had also returned, confused but unharmed. Soon after, a voice echoed through the car, asking all students to remain calm, and informing them they had been temporarily transported into a magical illusion created by the eye artifact. That had been the imperial test for that year's freshmen, so there was no need to worry. The voice then gave a special announcement saying that first place in this year's test went to the team from An City, formed by Yihe, Zhou, and Qingzhu, who managed to gather all 12 zodiac pendants. Among them, Yihe's exceptional performance earned him the grand prize, which would be delivered at enrollment. The students were confused. One of them asked who that guy in first place was, since he had been eliminated early on and didn't see what happened afterward, wondering if Ouyang hadn't been the winner. Other students who didn't even know An City were surprised that kids from an unknown place managed to surpass those from the capital, who had incredible support and structure. Many were impressed to learn they collected all the pendants, which was insane, since most couldn't even defeat a single masked enemy. While rumors spread, the protagonist didn't care about any of it, only staring at the system with sparkling eyes, thinking he had finally completed the requirements for a draw. The system congratulated him, saying the host had surpassed all freshmen in the Imperial Eye Test and earned a model draw. Before starting, the protagonist asked Joe for a wet wipe, wanting to clean his hands thoroughly. He began spinning the cards and said there would be no manipulation this time. Suddenly, a terrifying monster appeared before him. The system announced, Level 13 model, Vampire Rankud, bloodline traits, corpse infection, blood manipulation, and immortality. Synchronization rate, 1%, evolved form, Rakud the Zawarudo. As the train sped forward, Yihe trembled with excitement. Thinking a vampire was incredibly rare. The bloodline itself wasn't grand, but the evolved form had the ability to stop time, which was simply absurd. Ouyang and Yan approached, and Ouyang asked if he was Yihe, wanting to know if he was the one who defeated the dragon. Yan tensed up, thinking his friend needed to calm down because if he caused trouble with that protagonist, no hospital could help him. Yihe looked at the two and said he wanted to clarify something that hadn't just been a victory, he killed the dragon. Ouyang was astonished and shouted in front of everyone, telling the protagonist he was planning to create a new club at Huadu University, something different from the student council, and wanted him to join, offering him the position of president. The students were stunned, and Ouyang continued explaining that every year the best freshmen and the council president were always local Huadu students. Smiling, he extended his hand to Yihe and said the strength he displayed made him believe he could break that tradition, asking again for him to join the club. The students became even more excited, commenting that the arrogant Ouyang was personally inviting Yihe, and another pointed out he even offered the presidency. A girl shouted enthusiastically, saying this could be the start of a legendary organization in Huadu, and they were witnessing a historic moment. But the protagonist simply apologized, saying he wasn't interested in fighting the council or leading a club, because he preferred to work alone. The girl reacted in shock, saying he really refused and that it was a historic rejection. Others commented that even Ouyang had been turned down and that it was a waste. Ouyang only smiled and said it was fine, handing Yihe a card and saying he would still look forward to working together someday. A short time later, at the end of the day, Joe looked to the side and said they had arrived. When the protagonist looked as well, he was completely stunned by the buildings and lights of the city. That was Huadu, a colossal metropolis. The students began exiting the train, and an attendant pointed toward a passage, explaining that all new students of Huadu University should follow her until they reached the institution. As they walked through the corridor, everyone was surprised to see a gigantic ship waiting on the other side. An employee asked everyone to board in an orderly manner, checking their seat numbers with those from the Huadu Express. Yihe saw Qingju ahead and approached, calling her Little Juju as he lightly poked her back. Qingju jumped in surprise and immediately remembered her mother's warning that she should keep her distance, since even though she and the protagonist were technically engaged, they were not married yet. Therefore, he couldn't take advantage of her in public. Irritated, she turned around and yelled, asking what he thought he was doing, reminding him they were still outside. The protagonist, confused, asked why she was saying that, not understanding the drama since he only wanted to know why they needed to take a plane. Qingju let out a long sigh, muttering about how her mother had the nerve to promise her to a country bumpkin like him, and explained that they had to take the plane because the university was in the sky. Yihe lifted his head, seeing nothing, and asked if she was being serious. Qingju answered yes. The university was literally a floating city among the clouds, protected by a massive magical barrier. The plane began passing through that barrier, and Yihe, curious, wondered if that electromagnetic net was meant to keep demon beasts away, since even the range of life force detection seemed weakened inside. But coming from an institution like Huadu, that was expected. Upon reaching the landing platform, everyone disembarked, and a woman announced that the students must always keep their student ID cards with them. After everyone received their cards, the organizers instructed them to head toward the magnetic station and take the train that would lead them to the dorms. Amid so much technology, the protagonist pointed to the side and declared that they had arrived at the highest city in the world, leaving some classmates confused and thinking he had lost his mind. Inside the elevator, Yihe commented that his room was on the 42nd floor, Unit A3, and asked about Joe's, who replied that his was in Unit B7 on the 45th floor. Yihe laughed and said it looked like his friend would be getting off after him. When he reached the dorm, the protagonist was impressed. A 100-square-meter private room with a flawless modern design. It showed how much Huadu valued its students. Exploring the place, he found a state-of-the-art computer fully equipped and a bathroom with a hot tub. Surprised, he said no one could resist that kind of comfort, and lying on the bed, he realized how soft it was, feeling like he was in a 5-star hotel. But instead of resting, he started laughing, saying he first needed to take care of what really mattered, performing the full upgrade of the Rakud vampire model. He grabbed his phone and commented that while he was on the train, he had figured out how the student card worked. He just needed to scan the QR code to access the university's exclusive app, the Huadu Pass. Inside it was the academic city's shop, where all purchases were made with study points. Huadu's digital currency. Yahe then converted all his more than 30 million Xia Empire coins into study points. Moments later, a notification appeared on the screen. Updated balance, 322.43 points. Seeing that, he was outraged, shouting that his over 30 million had turned into just 322 points. Even so, he kept exploring the app and realized that the academic city shop really sold real items, things that couldn't be found anywhere else, and that kind of access was one of the university's privileges. He said he needed to buy all the magic cores with the blood attribute, believing that would be enough to fully unlock the rocket model, since not even ultra-rare humanoid models required more than 10 million to surpass 90% compatibility. Shortly after, a drone appeared at the window with a delivery, thanking the protagonist for his purchase and wishing him success on his cultivation journey, also asking him to leave a 5-star review. Yihei was impressed by the delivery speed and the fact that it was done by drone. Without wasting time, he opened the package, saying it was time to put everything inside. However, after consuming it all, his body began reacting strangely, his muscles trembling, and he said he was not handling it well. The system appeared, stating, Vampire Model Rakud, Compatibility 100%. Notification, Rakud Zawarudo unlocked. Unlimited Demonic Model, Host Yihei. Overall Physique, 29. The protagonist went to the mirror and observed the transformations. He said the effect was insane. Even his teeth had become sharper, and now there was literally a blood bar on his back. If he bit someone, drinking their blood would be as easy as drinking milk tea. Looking at his own hands, he saw his nails had become claws, and with a smile, he said he had just thought of a bold idea. Without hesitation, he attacked himself, causing massive bleeding. He began losing strength and balance, his throat and mouth filling with blood, but the liquid disappeared shortly after, and the wound closed completely. He thought his regeneration was much faster than before, proving that vampiric healing wasn't bad at all, though the physical changes weren't the most important part. The real highlight was his new power, Zawarudo. Going to a separate area of the room, he found that there was a private training chamber and commented that this was expected from a world that worshipped strength, where even dorms came equipped for combat. He focused and released all his energy. When he opened his eyes, Rakud appeared before him. Yihe told him to attack with everything he had. The monster gathered energy and its body transformed, breaking its own shell before charging in a devastating strike. The protagonist tried to defend himself, but the impact was so powerful that his bones shattered, throwing him against the wall. Even with his body completely destroyed, he stood up smiling, saying that it had been incredible and wild, but now he wanted to test the time stop ability. Activating Zawarudo's instant pause, the world around him froze. He began counting, and at the 5th second, the barrier started to crack, but time stayed frozen until 5.5 when everything returned to normal. Trembling and covered in injuries, he said that this had been expected. The original host's limit was 5 seconds, but his definitely went beyond that. The next morning, Yihe and Joe walked through the city, and the protagonist commented that the sunlight was too aggressive. Joe found it strange, asking what he was talking about and if he was serious. Yihe confirmed, saying that ever since he fused with the vampire model, he had grown to hate sunlight. Not enough to burn, but enough to be irritating. Joe then asked if he had seen the university's academic reform plan, but Yihe said no, explaining that he had spent the whole night playing with Zawarudo and didn't pay attention to anything else. That year, Joe said there would be small group mentorships, where each student would follow a main mentor throughout the year and could have assistant mentors if they wanted. Yihe replied that in that case they could find a mentor, but his friend said no, because the only one who needed a mentor there was Joe. The protagonist, not understanding, asked why he didn't need a mentor. Joe grabbed his phone and told him to look at the freshman group chat and pay attention to the message the administration had sent the night before. The board had announced that because Yihe gathered all the zodiac pendants, the university was granting him the privilege of freely choosing any mentor, and the chosen mentor would be obligated to accept. Joe said they thought it was excessive since it had been announced publicly. When they entered the gym, Yihe noticed it was packed, and Joe explained it seemed to be 3 people per round in the test, where mentors lit up the lights to choose their candidates. The protagonist just turned around and started leaving, telling his friend to go ahead because he was going for a walk. Since he could choose any mentor he wanted, it didn't matter when he entered. As he walked, he thought choosing a mentor was tedious, but suddenly he smelled something strange. With his new abilities, he instantly recognized it as the smell of blood. He began running toward the source, thinking that if it were normal blood, he wouldn't care, but that one was different, hidden yet intense, restless like a deadly current beneath a calm surface, filled with killing intent and forbidden sin. The scent awakened his killing instinct, and he needed to find its origin. After running for a while, he reached the place where the smell came from, a somewhat isolated area. Yihe was surprised to see a cute little girl and wondered if she was really the source of that terrifying aura or if he was mistaken. The girl noticed his presence, stood up, and called him boy, asking if he had been training the demonic flesh prison technique. The protagonist was startled and asked how she knew that, noticing that even though she looked like a child, she spoke like an old woman and even called him a boy. The woman said she knew because she was the one who helped Huzinho perfect that technique. Yihe was shocked to realize she was referring to Liu Chenghu. The girl began bragging, saying he had been her disciple about 90 years ago. The protagonist asked if she was messing with him, because he knew martial artists lived longer than normal and that a master could stay young into their 80s or 90s, but he couldn't understand why she looked like a child. He thought that although some practitioners could compress their bodies until they seemed smaller, the purity in that girl's eyes and her innocence were impossible to fake. Not even an award-winning actress could imitate something like that. The girl stared at him and asked if he really didn't believe her. Yehe mocked her, saying he might believe her, but if she claimed to be Emperor Qin Shi Huang, then he would believe her 50%. Suddenly, he felt as if a guillotine had chopped off his head in the blink of an eye, but he immediately returned to reality, startled and confused, wondering if it had been just an illusion, because the bloodlust was so intense that it made him hallucinate being decapitated. Still shaken, Yihe began activating his power, but the girl simply put a lollipop into his mouth and told him to take a strawberry one, since it was her favorite flavor. With an innocent look, she apologized for calling him boy again, saying that maybe she went too far and asked if he wasn't going to accompany her to school, explaining that she only got 1 or 2 hours a week to go out and that her life was pretty sad. Yihe observed her suspiciously and asked who she really was. The girl then introduced herself as Gongke, an extremely powerful master, saying that she once even made the university president, Shi Jingwen, cry when he was little. The protagonist dropped to his knees before her, overwhelmed by a mixture of shock and hope. He thought that if she really was the one who perfected the Xuanhuang technique, she might be able to help him advance in his cultivation, since she was a killing-type master, which suited him perfectly. Without hesitation, he shouted that he had searched the entire program for a real master and found no one worthy, but that now things would change. He declared he wanted to become her disciple and begged her to accept him. Gongke was surprised, not really understanding what was happening. Meanwhile, in the gym, the students were in an uproar, saying they couldn't believe the 5 university directors would be mentoring freshmen that year, because if anyone could become a disciple of one of them, their future would be guaranteed. Another student, however, deflated their excitement by saying it was just a dream, since the 5 directors would never waste their time on ordinary students. The discussion continued until someone asked why everyone was there, whether it was some kind of visit or sightseeing, and the first student answered that they were there because of the freshman Yihe, the boy who completed the Zodiac Challenge. The directors were present precisely because of him. What the freshman didn't know was that the Zodiac Challenge had been broadcast live and the viewers were none other than all the teachers of Huadu University. Since the transmission on the train at the start of the test, the evaluators had been observing how each student reacted to sudden crises, with an AI system analyzing micro-expressions and behavior patterns. Every action was scored. Those who ran into the Zodiac City unprepared received low grades, while inside the main criteria were combat intelligence, practical technique, and teamwork against the Zodiac masked ones. Even without killing anyone, good performance in any of these areas was enough for a high score. But the abnormal Yihe was the only one to achieve full marks in absolutely every category. Even so, what truly shocked the directors wasn't that. It was the fact that he defeated a boss he wasn't even supposed to face, the Dragon of Certain Death. One of the directors commented that Yihe himself might not even know who that dragon was, since it was a battle model created by the National Superintelligence Manhwa based on data left behind by Fu Hongsheng, a national-level martial artist who studied at the same university. Even though not all of Hongsheng's abilities, such as his god-tier divine eyes, could be fully replicated in the virtual world, he was still considered the strongest martial artist in the country's history, perhaps in the whole world. His university records had remained untouched for over 100 years. The fact that Yihe defeated a model based on him, even an imperfect version, was proof of the absurd talent that boy possessed. If everything continued on the right path, he was destined to become a grandmaster or even an archmaster. In the middle of the excitement, someone burst into the gym running and shouting that there was more news. The messenger entered the gym out of breath and announced that the protagonist had just asked to become the disciple of Gong Ke, the former Imperial University professor and current special agent. All 5 directors were stunned, unable to understand why he would do something like that. Outside, Yihe was still holding the little woman while she, confused, tried to pull away and asked if he really wanted her to be his master. He confirmed without hesitation, saying he had already made his decision. In his thoughts, he considered that technically that woman must have been over 100 years old and that if not for that, kneeling before a lowly in broad daylight would definitely get him thrown straight into jail. Gongke said that in truth, she believed she had been expelled from the Imperial University, but Yihe, firm in his decision, replied that she had said she could only go out for 1 or 2 hours a week and promised that if she accepted him as her disciple, he would find a way to secure her freedom within 2 years. Gongke's eyes sparkled instantly, and she accepted with a smile. Yehe celebrated, saying he finally did it. But before he could relax, an immense pressure of energy approached. The 5 directors arrived flying almost at the same time, shouting for him to stop. Gongke huffed irritably, saying the meddlers had shown up. The stern-faced director glared at her and said they had agreed she couldn't have contact with the students while outside, especially in her current mental state, which was not suitable for guiding anyone. The mustached director agreed and ordered her to return home. Gongke sighed and asked if she really had to go back, then turned to Yehe and asked his name. He bowed respectfully and answered, "My name is Yehe, master." She smiled and said all right, telling him to come with her. At the Huadu Research Institute, Gongke walked excitedly beside her new disciple. They entered the elevator and Yehe asked if she really lived there. She confirmed, saying she had spent a few decades with certain issues and that sometimes she accidentally hurt others, so the people at Huadu installed her in the institute's underground. With a carefree tone, she said that luckily she had learned to control herself in recent years and now they let her go out occasionally to stretch her legs. Yehe then asked if that meant he was her first student after all that time. Gongke was surprised and said he thought in a strange way because he should be afraid. He made a face and asked if he should be afraid of being bitten or cut into pieces. At that moment, the elevator stopped on floor -666 and the doors opened. The protagonist looked at the narrow hallway and asked why it was so cramped in such a large institution. His master explained that it had been built specifically for her. Yi had noticed a digital number blinking on the door and asked what that timer was for, but Gongke suddenly panicked, started running, and shouted that there was no time to lose, that they needed to get inside immediately. Still confused, Yihe insisted on knowing what the counter meant, and she answered desperately that every time she went out, the clock started counting, and if she didn't return before it reached 0, the alarm would go off in the Huadu leader's office, causing the entire university to begin hunting her down. Yehe dove through the door seconds before it closed. As soon as they passed through, the door locked and a luminous barrier formed. Gongke took a deep breath and said they made it in time. Yehe noticed some kind of magnetic field in the air since his martial energy wouldn't properly gather outside his body, which meant any technique used there would be drastically weakened. Gongke explained that the place was her containment cell, built to prevent her escape. She said Shi Jingwen himself and his team designed that 3-story underground house, equipped with absolutely everything: training rooms, leisure areas, plenty of comfort, and several layers of magnetic suppression capable of distorting all martial energy. All of it was made to keep her from getting bored and trying to run away. Yehe looked around impressed, thinking that his master called it a cell, but it looked more like a luxury suite, spacious, well-lit, and full of resources, more like an altar prepared specifically for her. Meanwhile, in the main building of Huadu University, President Shi Jingwen was at his desk when the phone rang. On the other end, one of the directors warned in a desperate tone that Yihe had just become the disciple of Gongke. Jingwen only sighed and said they should let him do as he wished, because Huadu's goal wasn't to produce dozens of mediocre talents, but to prepare a single individual capable of carrying the future of Xia and perhaps humanity itself. When a true genius appears, he said, the university's duty is to give them full support and freedom to grow. Jingwen explained that they should allow Yihe to train with Gongke for now, since the special training camp for the local freshmen was almost ready, and Yihe would be the stone sharpening the new blades of that generation. The directors agreed but reported that Yihe had entered the containment zone with his new master, and, although everything seemed stable, predictive analyses showed a high risk. According to the reports, Gongke, as a special-level combatant, still had more than a 5% chance of losing control when spending too much time with another person. Jingwen looked at the data on his screen. Danger. Outbreak risk. 5% to 14% vertical bar coexistence survival rate. 95% vertical bar injury. Likelihood. 38% vertical bar. Rescue success rate. 10.3% vertical bar safe rescue window. 1 to 3 minutes. One of the directors added that Yihe had only a 10.3% chance of being rescued and nearly a 90% likelihood of dying before the rescue team even arrived. And even if he were rescued, there was still over a 95% chance he wouldn't survive. Ending the call, the president stared out the window and murmured that special class combatants were usually doomed people, either those who possessed overwhelming strength or martial artists with uncontrollable power. In times of peace, the state kept them contained, but when Xia faced real crises, they were deployed to the front lines as human weapons. To face someone like that, Yehe needed to be prepared to die. Without that resolve, he could never walk the path of slaughter. Jingwen concluded by saying that Xia was running out of time. The lunatics from the Northern Bitan Federation and the fanatics of the Divine Descent Nation were on the move with their secret realm technologies, and the new generation needed to mature quickly. In the underground B3 level of the containment zone, Gongke and Yuhei arrived at the training room. She commented that it had been decades since she taught anyone, so they would start with a simple test to see what he was capable of. Yuhei asked if she would restrict her own power to the martial stage so they could fight evenly, but she laughed and said she had forgotten that part entirely. He said he was ready for combat while she stretched as if it were just a light workout. Yihe thought he didn't want to relive the guillotine sensation, but before he could react, Gongke advanced with overwhelming killing intent. He was shocked to realize she was aiming directly at his vital points and shouted, asking whether this wasn't supposed to be a friendly training session. Watching her movements, he calculated 5 possible evasion routes, but concluded none would work. She was reading every micro-movement of his like, flipping through an open book. With no options left, he chose to face her head-on and activated his transformation, trying to counterattack. Gongke grew excited, saying he was trying to awaken his bloodline to balance offense and defense, but she stretched her body and wrapped around his arms with impossibly fast movements, murmuring that unfortunately she was still faster. In the blink of an eye, she threw him down and delivered a sharp strike that broke both of Yihe's arms. The brutal pain made him scream so loudly that the pressure in the entire room shifted. The air vibrated and the magnetic field trembled before the explosion of power beginning to awaken inside him. Yihe returns to his normal form while his master steps back, her arm badly injured and her face bruised. Even so, he keeps smiling and comments that she really went hard on him this time, since even his lineage awakening was forced to revert. Gongke laughs too and licks a bit of blood from her own face, saying it had been a long time since she last tasted blood. The protagonist admits that in hand-to-hand combat he stands no chance against her, so he says he'll have to rely on some unfair techniques and asks her to guide him. Yihe begins releasing his human form, satisfied after spending the entire night maximizing the mega humanoid model. On the other hand, his master Gongke mirrors his excitement, smiling wide as she realizes that for a mere martial disciple he's displaying absurd strength. Wondering if she accidentally took in a little monster as a disciple and thinking she'll need to take this more seriously, Gongke makes the first move and attacks. An explosion erupts on impact, but Yihe manages to complete his transformation and charges forward using his armored ancestral humanoid split form. She reads the collision route instantly and inhales, activating the special crushing fist, and the strike completely destroys the monster's arm. Yihe is stunned because the Imperial Demonra exoskeleton, forged through flesh-based armor, should have dozens of times the defense of the mega humanoid, yet his master tore through it like paper. As he gets lost in thought, Gongke darts in and startles him, appearing right in front of the monster's face and calling out to her disciple, asking if he's hiding inside that big guy's mouth. Yihe is even more shocked by her supernatural perception, since he had shut down all his vital signals and still got detected within seconds. Gongke prepares to strike, telling him he'd better come out, but the protagonist responds by using the Zhuanlin Horn Spike Meteor Humanoid split form, forcing her to retreat. He then starts concentrating nuclear energy in his mouth and comments that her cuts are insanely sharp. Maybe sharp enough to slice through that, but he wants to see how she plans to block it. A second later, chains appear around his head and bind him completely. Suddenly, he's back at the guillotine, shocked that he can't escape that place. The blade starts to descend and Yihe screams for Zawarudo, who appears and, following his master's order, stops time. The protagonist realizes he might have gone overboard because his master dragged him once again into that domain of murderous intent, a mental illusion created by her bloodlust rather than the real world. And now he has to fight back with pure willpower if he wants to break free. With time frozen, Zawarudo unleashes countless strikes until the blade cracks and shatters completely, freeing Yihe and pulling him back into reality. When he opens his eyes, Gongke is standing in front of him sucking on a lollipop and asks if he's awake, commenting that his turtle shell was pretty tough. Yihe gets up thinking she must have forcibly ripped him out of his humanoid form and casually destroyed the hardened layer he had crystallized to protect his real body, something a mere martial disciple shouldn't be able to do. Yihe stares at her and asks if she cheated, but Gongke, pretending innocence, asks what he's talking about and claims she won fair and square. Unfair, but still fair. The protagonist presses, asking if she's serious, and Gongke finally admits she may have used a tiny bit more strength than she should have, explaining that she sometimes miscalculates the first hits. Yihe keeps staring, and when she notices he isn't pleased, she instantly changes her expression, bursts into tears, and begs him not to be mad or leave, saying it's been decades since she had anyone to play with. Yihe gets flustered and asks her to stop crying, but she keeps asking if he's going to leave. The protagonist smiles and asks if she really thinks he'd give up after everything he went through to become her disciple. Gongke stands up, wiping her tears, and claims she wasn't crying. They head to the fridge, and she comments that now she understands his level, far below where she was at his age, but far above the other students, so they can start training. Gongke asks what he wants to learn first, and Yihe says he wants to know how to advance to martial artist level and how she managed to cut lightning and slice through his transformed arm. She asks if he really wants to learn the cutting technique, warning him that it's hard to explain and that he'll only get the hang of it after cutting a lot of things. He asks what she means by get the hang of it, and Gonke explains that it's like a line. It doesn't matter if it's a human body, a demonic beast, or any other material, there is always an ideal point, a line where the cut flows naturally, and that line is called the execution line. Yihe is surprised, thinking his master is truly different from the dragon, who is also a cutting specialist but relies on brute force and blade sharpness, while Gong Kei is like an experienced butcher deboning a cow, every movement controlled and precise. Sitting on the bench, she continues explaining that mastering this won't be easy and recommends that he first become a true martial artist, because if his cultivation doesn't evolve, there's no point in trying to learn most of her techniques. Gonke asks if he knows the difference between a martial apprentice and a martial artist. Yehe says he doesn't, so she explains that it's not just the body that improves, but also the mind. Martial artists have an ability apprentices don't have: internal visualization. Through it, they move from crude training to refined cultivation, can see their own meridians, acupoint paths, and internal organs, and then use martial energy to strengthen everything, pushing the body beyond its limits. In other words, a strong mind comes first, then a strong body. Yihe gets excited, impressed at how good his master still is at teaching, finally understanding why she remains one of the top figures at the Imperial University, even if she's a bit unhinged. Hearing about mental strength, he realizes that since merging with the vampire model and awakening Zawarudo, he has felt a huge increase in his mental attributes, which should help a lot when he tries to advance. He asks whether there are different kinds of techniques for that, and Gonke says yes. Martial arts and advancement techniques are divided into 4 grades: Heaven, Earth, Yellow, and Mystic, plus the ungraded ones that represent the university evolution of an ordinary student. In ordinary or low-prestige universities, when a martial apprentice tries to advance to martial artist, the school can only provide ungraded techniques, the so-called ungraded university student. They are simple practices, easy to use, and make advancement easier as long as one has enough vitality and martial energy. More than 80% of martial artists use that type. But at Huadu University, students already begin with yellow mystic grade techniques. Curious, the protagonist then asks about the Heaven and Earth grade techniques. Gonke explains that Heaven grade techniques are practically unique relics belonging to secret realms and ancient ruins. There might be only about 10 in the whole world, and the Imperial University owns one of them, but she adds that he has neither the strength nor the permission to go anywhere near it, although he can learn an Earth grade technique without any issue. Yihe is surprised, and his master continues, saying that the Bodhi Killer Heart Sutra, the technique she masters, was the inspiration for the demonic, flesh-imprisoning arts of Huzinho, which only reinforces its power. Hearing that, the protagonist gets pumped and shouts that he really wants to learn it. Gonke throws the can into the trash and says that if that's the case, then fine, telling him to feel the killing intent she prepared just for him. Suddenly, Yihe is dragged once again into her domain. He screams that he doesn't want to go through that again, but it's already too late. His master laughs, saying she loves watching blood splatter. Later, after classes, Joe walks down the street when he spots the protagonist and asks how his first day went, saying he heard he became the disciple of. Before he can finish, he senses an extremely powerful and terrifying killing aura coming from Yihe. He prepares to fight, but the protagonist instantly stops and apologizes, saying he went a bit overboard. Even so, Joe remains terrified, saying he feels an aura so threatening that a single wrong move seems enough to get him killed. A few hours earlier, inside the illusory realm, Yihe was fighting several zombies rushing toward him. He remembers he can't use techniques or abilities, only blades or his bare hands, and complains that there are too many enemies to fight with that cheap blade he was given. Confused, he asks why, and his master explains that the purpose of the blade is to make him get used to the sensation of cutting flesh and bone so his body can build muscle memory capable of instantly identifying the execution line and hitting the enemy's weak point as fast as possible. After hearing the explanation, he gets excited and focuses completely, saying it makes sense now and that he's going to start practicing. Quickly, he begins attacking all the monsters around him with precise cuts, showing an impressive learning speed. Gonke is startled, thinking that training an Earth-grade technique inside an illusory realm is extremely dangerous, something an ordinary martial apprentice should never attempt. If not for Yihe's absurdly high mental attributes, he would have already been consumed by the killing intent and lost control completely. Yihe observes her focus, control, and determination, and realizes Gonke truly believes he might be Shi Jingweng's hope, maybe even the hope of the entire Huadu University, and she can't wait to see how far he will go. Back in the present, inside his room, Yihe relaxes in his bathtub, muttering that this was only the first day of training and he was already completely exhausted. Now he understood perfectly why this was considered the best university in Xia. Suddenly his phone rang, Qingju calling to say that his mother had sent the things he asked for, and that everything was already in her room. and that his mother also asked her to thank him, because thanks to him, she got first place in the freshman evaluation group. Yehe was happy and said he would stop by her room later to pick everything up. But Qingju, embarrassed, said it wasn't necessary and that she would send it all by drone. He chuckled and asked how her day had been and whether she had already met her new mentor. Qingju replied excitedly that yes, her mentor was none other than Director Bai, who praised her talent and accepted her as a disciple. Yehe was happy for her and said, "That was great news." Then Qingju asked how his day had been and who his mentor was. The protagonist thought it would be better not to mention that he had rejected all 5 directors or many people would lose sleep that night. He started to say he had become the disciple of, but dunked his head underwater before finishing, making Qingju understand absolutely nothing. Sometime later, half the year had passed and the first academic term was coming to an end. For the university freshmen, that semester had been full of notable events. Early on, Ouyang gathered the best students from several provinces and formed the Dragon Blood Society, which gained a lot of influence among the newcomers. However, when the students returned from the special summer camp, clashes with Huadu's local students began. As attention grew, duels multiplied, and in the end, the Dragon Blood Society accumulated more losses than victories, causing its reputation to collapse. The most famous freshman at the moment was Xiang Jianhui, perhaps the most well-known in the entire country. He achieved the highest score in the university's entrance exam and during the live stream of the test impressed everyone with his strength. Rumor said that even Fu Hongsheng praised him as a future national-level martial protector. Meanwhile, the protagonist, who had once been at the center of attention, had completely disappeared from the spotlight as he hadn't been seen outside the Research Institute grounds for more than 3 months. Yehe was entirely focused on his training and cared about nothing else. Gong Kei, in turn, was literally stepping on his body, explaining that with each step she injected martial energy refined by her own hand, energy infused with her understanding of the Bodhi Killer Heart Sutra. She said this would help him stabilize his new martial artist level and that, as a bonus, he got to feel her delicate feet, a privilege few would ever have according to her. But the protagonist was completely exhausted, trembling in pain and pushing himself to the limit. His shoulders, back, and fingers were red. He thought there was nothing lucky about any of this. His master had sealed all the martial energy in his body, and the push-ups felt like carrying a mountain. The energy she injected created an unbearable itch from the inside. Gongkei noticed him slowing down and with a teasing smile called him weak, asking if he was already tired, reminding him that he hadn't even reached 1,000 push-ups. Irritated, Yehe lifted his head and shot back, asking who she was calling weak and telling her that now she would see what real speed was. The two of them looked like battle-addicted lunatics who couldn't accept any kind of defeat. When she realized he was challenging her, Gongkei lunged forward with impressive speed, shouting that this was what she liked to see and demanding he be faster and stronger. Yehe, determined not to lose, unleashed all his power, and with the combined effort of both, a massive explosion erupted. As the smoke cleared, Yehe felt a strange sensation throughout his body, his worn-out muscles torn apart and replaced by new ones, filled with martial energy. Gongkei stared at him in awe and then, half teasing, commented that his clothes had disappeared and called him a pervert. Embarrassed, Yehe asked that if she was going to cover her eyes, then at least close her fingers so she couldn't peek. After the transformation, he said it was time to leave seclusion. His master asked if he was really going out, and he confirmed, reminding her that they had been locked in there for more than 3 months and that he needed to see the sun again. Gongkei's eyes filled with tears as she asked if he would come back. He smiled, said yes, and even joked that she was terrible at games so she could use the time to practice until he returned. She stuck out her tongue and grumbled that she didn't like playing with him anyway. Yehe looks up at the sky and comments that even though he was never a big fan of sunlight, he actually missed it after so long underground. As he walks, he says he spent so much time in seclusion that it feels like he lived another life. But he knows he didn't come out just to stroll around. He has a goal. At Huadu, a big part of a student's grade depends on extracurricular missions, which include hunting martial criminals, investigating secret realms, defending against beast waves, or facing illegal and foreign forces. His first step is going to the activity center to pick up a mission and meet his partner again. A little later, already at the student center, he runs into Joe. Yehe greets him, saying it's been a while, and Joe agrees, saying he finally came out of seclusion because he had been waiting for ages. Yehe asks how things are and what his current strength is. Joe explains that he advanced to martial artist 2 months ago, but then notices something strange. Although Yehe looks the same on the outside, the feeling he gives off is completely different, something terrifying. Joe starts wondering how far his strength has reached and whether he could even fight someone like him. 3 days earlier, he had watched a private match between Huadu freshman president Jian Hui and the vice president of the Dragon Blood Society, Ouyang. As expected, Ouyang lost in just 10 minutes, and the most impressive part was that Jian Hui still hadn't used all his strength. Joe wonders if Yehe could beat him, but after thinking for a bit concludes that maybe even Jian Hui wouldn't stand a chance against him. At that moment, Qingzhu arrives in a hurry, apologizing for the delay and saying she finally made it. The protagonist turns to her and simply says, "Hey." Confused, she suddenly remembers what her mother said, that now she and Yihei were a couple and should act like it on campus. Flustered, she starts mumbling and leans forward to kiss him. Yihei, surprised, asks what she's doing and complains that they hadn't seen each other for 3 months and she didn't even say hello. Qingzhu turns away annoyed and mutters that she hates him deeply. Joe then tries to lighten the mood and explains that the screen on the wall shows the most popular missions and highlighted achievements. He says that he and Qingzhu already completed 3 above-average missions and that today they were just there to form a team with the protagonist. Qingzhu picks 3 options and says those suit them perfectly. The first is Hengcheng serial killer. Location Hengcheng, where in May the first case of extreme torture occurred, a married woman was skinned flawlessly and turned into a human coat hanger. Since then, the deaths have passed 40, including a 7th-level martial artist. The goal is to capture or eliminate the illegal martial artist, difficulty level 2. The second is investigation of the anomaly in lineage beast waves. Location the abandoned city of Liancheng, where, for unknown reasons, beasts began returning en masse to the secret realm. The opposite of what happened 2 months earlier when they advanced outward. The goal is to investigate the cause with the Dragon Guard Special Unit, difficulty level 2. The third is anomaly in Lingshui County, location Lingshui, where 2 weeks ago a group of tourists reported that the locals were acting strangely, craving raw meat and sleepwalking in large groups. The government denied everything, but a day later the tourists were killed one by one. A team of first and second year students was sent to investigate, and now all of them are missing. The goal is to discover the cause of the anomaly, difficulty level 3. Qingzhu explains that all 3 were originally level 2, but the Lingshui one had just been raised to level 3. Off-campus missions in Huadu range from level 1 to 5, and the higher the level, the more dangerous. Freshmen usually take level 1 missions, and the only level 2 she took involved a team of 10 people. A team of 3 freshmen would never be approved for something like that. Yihei says it's fine because he has a privilege card. He remembers his master saying he could handle himself, and that among first and second year students, few could exchange blows with him. That's why he now needs more dangerous missions to sharpen his skills. With that card, he can accept any mission on campus, although his master warned him not to even think about taking level 4 or 5 missions since even Xuanwu-class warriors die in them. Surprised, Qingzhu asks where he got that card, but the protagonist hesitates to answer. Joe senses the mood and changes the subject, asking which of the 3 missions he prefers. Yihei says risk and reward go hand in hand, but welcomes the topic change. He analyzes each one. The first is hunting a target, which will be inefficient since the police have been searching for him for months, and tracking him down will be harder than eliminating him. The second is an auxiliary investigation with the Dragon Guard, which will leave them with only unimportant tasks, no real combat or worthwhile loot. The third hands the entire process to them without any safety net, and the variables are massive, but the greater the danger, the greater the reward. He concludes that if someone fears risk and wants to live protected, then they shouldn't call themselves a martial artist, and for that reason, he chooses the third mission. The other 2 agree, and he says it's perfect because they will leave immediately. When they head to the reception desk, the instructor scolds them, calling the whole thing absurd. She asks if they didn't see that a second-year team was completely wiped out there. And even so, 3 freshmen dare to accept a level 3 mission, asking if they think too highly of themselves. But the protagonist calls her over and says he has a privilege card, something extremely rare. The instructor asks if he learned how to lie now and says she will call the dean to expose him right away. As soon as she makes the call, she returns completely calm, wishes them good luck, and says she prefers a stricter approach. After receiving permission to leave on the mission, the protagonist says goodbye to them and tells them to grab their gear because he needs to go back and retrieve something. At the College of Mechatronics, Magitech, and Foundry, Yihei reaches the door and his identity is quickly confirmed. When he enters, he tells the director he came to pick up his weapon, the reward for placing first in the freshman evaluation. The president comments that giving up a technique of any grade to choose a weapon shows great insight, though it's a shame Gongke got to him first. Then he says it's time to stop the small talk and reveals the weapon, telling him to take a look at what was forged. He highlights that it has no elemental attributes but channels martial energy at 95% efficiency and was forged with the legendary and resilient Star Gold, a top-tier divine blade. He explains that the sword can cut a horse cleanly, is around 1 meter 20 long, has a flat shape, and a dark edge dotted with faint sparkles, the trademark of Star Gold. The backside is carved with dense sun and moon serrations, adding weight and impact, turning every strike into something devastating. Yihei draws the new sword and slashes the air to test it, continuing to swing it as the director explains that the handle is wrapped in black anti-slip leather, braided with metallic threads also made of Star Gold, making chi conduction easier. Each cut produces a whistle in the wind and a flash of chilling light, even though they are only test movements. The pressure emitted by each swing surprises everyone. The protagonist comments that it really isn't bad at all. The weight is perfect, the balance is steady, and the grip fits exactly. He finds it funny that the sword was made to his measurements from 3 months ago and still matches his current strength after advancing to martial artist. As he leaves, he says it was expected, because the Imperial University's blacksmiths are truly skilled. The director puffs up with pride and says that even Gongke calls him master when it comes to forging, but immediately regrets it and asks Yihe not to repeat that to her. Already in Lingshui County, the three walk through the streets. Zhou says that to keep the mission secret, they are disguised as university students on internship. Yihe thinks he first needs to sweep the area with his life field detection, since the Demonra model has already been raised to 71% that semester, which should cover the entire county. But he worries that his arrival might scare the rats and make them hide even more, complicating the mission, because the hard part isn't killing them, but finding them. Zhou calls them over to see the house the university arranged for them, but suddenly an old man approaches and asks if they need a ride, offering a cheap and fast tricycle. Yihe laughs, thinking the mission has officially begun. The three hop onto the tricycle, and the man comments that they seem well-mannered, asking which school they came from. The protagonist says he's from the city itself and brought 2 classmates to get to know the university's studies better. The driver, curious, asks who his parents are because he doesn't recognize his face. Yihe says his grandfather was Yi Shurong, who passed away a few years ago, and that after that he moved away. The driver then says, now everything makes sense because he's from the old Yi family. The protagonist thinks it was useful to have learned some Lingshui dialect on the plane, and that the identity information provided by the university was truly authentic. The old man starts to laugh, saying it's great to see a young man who still remembers Lingshui, because those who don't forget their roots will surely be blessed. Soon after, they arrive at the mansion base of Huadu University, the former residence of Yi Shurong. The driver comments that in 2 days there will be the big festival that happens every 3 years in Lingshui, and insists that Yihe show up, saying that if he feels too shy to go, he himself will return to pick him up. Yihe says he understands. Yihe and Zhou step inside, and Zhou immediately notices the house has been empty for more than 10 years and is falling apart, covered in weeds and swarming with mosquitoes, saying cleaning it will be a huge job. As always, Yihe prefers brute force. He lifts his foot and says he's great at cleaning. When he stomps the ground, he releases a small burst of radiation that burns all the plants and living things nearby. Zhou complains that this isn't cleaning but extermination. The protagonist replies that it's fast and practical. Zhou then tells them to put their bags away because he will install some cameras around the house for monitoring. Qingzhu wanders around, saying she'll take a look inside, but the first room she enters makes her jump in fright, and she calls Yihe to see something. He walks over and asks what she found. She says there is an altar right in front of her, but she can't figure out what is being worshipped. Yihe observes that the altar was placed there recently. She is shocked and asks what he means. The protagonist explains that the altar is made of wood. If it had been sitting there all these years, it would have rotted by now, but it's only covered in dust, and if cleaned, would look brand new. Zhou raises his sword and asks if he is seriously saying someone put that there recently, because if that's true, he has a very bad feeling and thinks they should destroy the statue immediately. Qingzhu tries to calm him and says they should wait because it may be an important clue, and the best thing to do is examine it first. But when she looks to her side, she sees Yihe completely serious, nuclear energy gathering in his palm, saying he agrees. She screams, asking what exactly he agrees with, and tells him to stop acting like a lunatic. Taking a breath, she suggests that before breaking it, they should at least see what is under the statue's mask. As soon as Qingzhu removes part of it, the statue's eyes begin releasing a strange aura. Instantly, the protagonist senses something abnormal, grabs Qingzhu by the arm, and warns that something demonic is there, exactly as he suspected from the beginning, ordering Zhou to destroy it. Without hesitation, Zhou swings his sword, but the moment they cut it, all three are shocked to see a black liquid oozing from the statue. With his sharpened senses, Yihe understands what's happening and says the demon will not escape, ordering Zawarudo to act immediately. With that, he manages to trap the creature and tells Zhou to seal it as fast as possible. But due to Qingzhu touching the statue, her eyes begin changing color. Her voice trembles as fear takes over, and she asks what is happening. Yihe places his hand on her shoulder and asks if she's all right, realizing she was affected by the entity's psychic energy and channeling a bit of pure martial qi into her to neutralize the effect. She quickly returns to normal and says she's fine, feeling that the terror inside her vanished suddenly, replaced by a warm and comforting sensation. With the demon sealed, Yihe goes back to acting like a maniac, saying that it looks like the anomaly in that place really was connected to the clay statue stuff, which means the investigation has progressed a lot. He tells the two of them to stay there, keep watch, and make sure nothing strange happens because he needs to take care of something else. As he walks away, he thinks about the radioactive tracker he placed on the old man with the tricycle and that, judging by the time, it should be time to spring the trap. With a cold smile, he mutters that the old man won't need to look for him because he'll be the one going after him. At the Buddhist temple on the Golden Mountain of Ling Shui, the old tricycle driver has just arrived. A monk greets him, calling him benefactor, and says the abbot is waiting inside. They walk down a narrow corridor until they reach a sealed door. The monk announces to the abbot that he brought benefactor Liu Gensheng, who has met the requirements to receive a blessing, and adds that he has something important to report. The abbot then asks Gensheng what his true intentions are and why he appeared so suddenly. Before he can answer, the monk begins to transform, revealing a sinister and inhuman presence. Gensheng falls to his knees, trembling in fear, shouting that a living immortal is among them. But within seconds, Yihi appears flying in and hits the creature with a kick that crushes its head. He uses Zawarudo to create a shield around himself and watches the scene with disgust, saying that fortunately the shield protected him, because it would be a real bother having to wash his clothes after so much filth. Gensheng is stunned to see Yihe there, but before he can react, the temple statues begin to move and attack from all sides. The protagonist mocks them, saying they move, but he doesn't even need to, because Zawarudo blocks all of the hits easily. Annoyed, the statues retreat and then charge all at once, completely surrounding him. Yihe spins his spatial ring and says he had been in stealth mode so he wouldn't be detected, but now there's no reason to hold back. He draws his Star Rain blade and charges forward, slicing through the air while wondering out loud what might be inside those bellies. Straw or something even stranger. The statues begin firing energy beams from their eyes, but with quick, precise movements, he decapitates them one after another. In the middle of the chaos, one of the lasers hits Gensheng and splits him in half. A few seconds later, everything is in ruins. Yihi sheathes his sword, looks over the debris, and says those statues were never living beings, since from the very beginning his life field detection had never sensed any aura in them. Even so, he's intrigued, wondering how a small and backward place like Lingshui County could possess such advanced technology. He stares at the sealed door ahead and thinks all of the answers must be inside. He mutters that, since he's still a university student, he should at least be polite enough to knock before entering, then orders Zawarudo to knock on the door. As the spirit starts pounding hard, Yihei shouts, asking if anyone is home. The punches grow faster and heavier until the door shatters completely. When he steps inside, he is stunned by what he sees, a colossal statue towering before him. He comments that this is truly another world entirely, never imagining a gigantic underground palace would exist here, much less a monumental Buddha. He shouts that the guest has arrived and asks the little rat if it will keep hiding. At that moment, another Buddha slowly begins to move and speaks in a deep voice, saying it bears no grudge against the protagonist, calling him benefactor and asking why he has invaded. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new content. Thank you.